Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.
51, Chapter 51. As soon as I reached the peak of my jump, I managed to kick him in the face with my other leg, this time from the opposite side of my arm. As I fell, gravity, unfortunately, hadn't been cancelled. I folded my arms in front of me and drove both elbows straight into its nasal cavity. After all, this scaly bastard didn't have a proper nose. The moment I hit the floor, I straightened up and, extending my still bent arms, left a multitude of bleeding cuts across its abdominal cavity with my splayed, clawed fingers. That's for my knee. The ancients said that pride leads to a fall. And so, having grown overly proud of my strength and speed, I missed the moment when, despite being so much slower than me that he could only deliver one blow in the time it took me to perform that entire combination, the force of his strike turned out to be possibly even greater than mine. So I simply overlooked the swing of his second arm, which I blamed myself for, flying from a crushing blow to my ribs straight into the railing of the second floor. It's a good thing I don't feel pain, because judging by the feedback from my left side, he broke my ribs and badly. Gripping the handrails, I pulled myself up, slipping back into acceleration. Kane! Yamata cried out. Well, yes, it took me a couple of seconds, but for the slower four eyes, that was practically an instant. But she turned her head in my direction for nothing. What could a hunter's blow do to me, a survivor of nemesis? At worst, it could cut me in half, and that's fine. I'd patch myself up and regenerate. But the distracted girl herself missed her opponent's paw strike aimed at her stomach. Yamata's special suit withstood the test with honor and did not allow its owner to be torn to pieces, but the Four Eyes herself was thrown back toward the corridor exit. Still, the girl jumped to her feet quite nimbly. After all, disorientation means nothing to the undead. Even if there were a concussion, it would only impair her body control for a short while. There would be no loss of consciousness or anything beyond physical impairment. It's handy, being undead, even if only halfway there. All these thoughts flashed through my mind in an instant, while my body had already shot into the air, flying toward the hunter who was leaping at me. Upon colliding with this tin can, my body crunched in several places at once, but despite my smaller mass, acceleration was clearly on my side. Hunter was already on the verge, so in the end I landed on top of him and, pinning his massive arms to his body with my feet, began to knead him with my fists. Chunks of flesh flew in all directions, accompanied by the monster's shrill growls, yet the enemy beneath me still refused to calm down. I even used my jaws, gnawing at the place where the neck should have been. Hunter's heads merged directly into their shoulders, aiming for the softer scaled area. By the way, the blood tasted great, even though it looked repulsive black with a greenish tint. But my squeamishness had died long before I ever reached the city, back when I realized I was Korean. Who else would eat dogs, even undead ones? So I didn't pay attention to the color, focusing instead on the excellent taste. Once again, though, I forgot that it's foolish to measure a hunter by human standards. His legs resembled those of a frog or a grasshopper at the joints, and by twisting them at what seemed like an impossible angle, my opponent began to rake at my sides. Of course, there was no pain, but if this continued, he would simply saw me in half. Having reached that conclusion, I doubled my assault, literally tearing chunks of flesh from the monster's body and almost gnawing my way straight through its flesh. And after only a couple of seconds of real time, which felt like an eternity to Metwo, events occurred at once, finally silencing my opponent. First, I shattered his ribs on the left side with my right hand and tore out his heart, a three-chambered heart, my consciousness noted, drawing on knowledge borrowed from the Four Eyes and the Special Forces scientist. Second, I bit through his throat. At least, the crunch sounded very tasty. Biting off a piece of his heart while it was still fresh, I got to my feet, noting that thanks to the monster's blood I had consumed during the fight, my regeneration had accelerated. But deciding to help the Four Eyes first, then join forces to deal with the two remaining hunters, and only afterward calmly have a snack and take care of the bodies of the soldiers and employees, beheading them, just in case they might not rise yet. But I know how mean this world can be, with corpses choosing the most inconvenient moments to get back up and examine the laboratory. I rushed toward the girl who was still fighting. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 100 power stones. 52, Chapter 52. I quickly closed the distance to the monster with its back to me and shot my arm forward, aiming for the hunter's spine. With a horrible crunch, my arm pierced its back and closed around the monster's spine. I pulled back with all my strength, literally tearing out the piece I had seized. Even if you're 4 times a monster, you can't run without part of your spine, so with the next step forward the hunter stumbled oddly and collapsed to the ground. But such damage only temporarily disabled his lower body, and the stubborn creature dragged itself forward with its front paws toward the retreating 4 eyes. Exchanging glances with my partner, I realized we had the same idea. I grabbed my gun and, standing over the crawling monster which for some strange reason had fixated on the girl, I shot him in the left eye, while the 4 eyes shot him in the right. Either it had a very small brain, or the damage from the shots wasn't critical, but the hunter remained alive even with such injuries. Blinded, it froze, listening. Well, that was something, at least. Stepping silently, I positioned myself over its head, pulled out a knife with an already damaged blade, and swung it down, slipping into my maximum acceleration. I dropped onto the body and drove my hand, knife first, into its head in one fluid motion. The monster twitched a few times and went still. Phew. Victory. But somehow I feel a dull sense of joy, or rather a feeling of satisfaction from a job well done. I tried to pull the knife out, but it had completely crumbled, so with no resistance at all, I drew my hand back and found only the handle left in my grip. Don't make such a sad face, or even I'll start feeling sorry for you. By the way, you're so fast that even in my perception you were moving so quickly you sometimes just disappeared from my field of vision, the 4 eyes teased, finishing with a whistle. Yeah, just don't dissect me, and I'll survive the rest. So what now? Or are you going to mourn the knife? You definitely picked that up from Vector, she added, having received no reply from me. Let's finish off the remaining 2 hunters and then search the room. Maybe these 4 and Birkin, who passed through here, and I don't see any other branches, so he must have come out from Heredant. Destroy everything, I replied, tossing the handle aside. Well, inheriting a fetish for stabbing and cutting weapons from a victim is something. Only someone like me could end up with a flaw like that. Finish them off. You alone are more than enough, while I'll be busy collecting samples from the hunters as well as from those who never rose, Yamada snorted. Looks like I picked something up from you, too. These corpses won't leave me alone either. Ideally, they should be beheaded as well, just to be safe. But I'm still far from your level. I'll collect samples. Ha, that really is a mad scientist's phrase. You're not even bothered by having 2 living specimens. Ugh, hunters right at your side. I chuckled. Oh well, she clearly doesn't appreciate me or my kindness. Still, it made sense to leave sample collection to her. And it would be faster that way. While I dealt with the monsters, she'd finish her work. Without listening to the 4 eyes' indignant response to my characterization, I jumped down to the first floor, toward the 2 remaining monsters, who clearly suffered from poor eyesight. Now I'm going to boost my still fragile pride. Losing to Nemesis like that was humiliating, and are zombies really worthy opponents for restoring my self-esteem? 2 hunters at once is a different story. If I keep praising myself like this, I'll end up running into the tyrant with obvious consequences. Just kidding, of course, but still I've got way too much energy right now. Guess I should check my own samples too. I landed on my feet and immediately accelerated, closing the distance to the nearest monster. But at the last moment, this idiot jumped right to where I had launched from. And it's immediately obvious that it's a shortfall, but he was still getting away from me. Somehow it's offensive, isn't it? I grabbed my prey by the legs, leaping up after him, and hurled him back down to the floor. I landed with my feet squarely on his face. Something clicked, and this time it wasn't me. Whether it was the hunter or the floor that cracked, I couldn't say, but the injury was clearly not fatal. I sprang away from the hunter as it began to thrash and wave its paws, then immediately rushed toward the second one. What was it they taught Vector again? Always keep your opponents tied up in the fight when you're facing a small group, never give them a second to breathe, and stay in constant motion yourself. Something like that. Bonus chapter for 100 power stones. The next bonus chapter will be for 200 power stones. 53, Chapter 53. I dodged the second opponent's swipe and deliver a combination of blows to the liver, stomach, lungs, and heart. If done correctly, you can overload the body to such an extent that the opponent will be physically unable to continue fighting if they survive at all. That's what Vector's knowledge says. The trouble is, I'm not facing a human. Even so, I managed to stun my opponent, gaining a moment thanks to his hesitation, though I'm plagued by doubts that this creature even has the same set of organs as a human. With my fingers spread wide, I deliver a sharp blow to the enemy's face, hoping to blind him. But the scales over his eyes are surprisingly strong, so although the blow isn't fully stopped, it loses much of its speed and force. As a result, only his left eye is damaged. Well, that'll do. Feeling movement behind me, I quickly step aside, kick the first hunter rushing at me, and follow up with a two-handed blow to his back. The first monster crashes into the second, knocking him down with his body. While this small pile hasn't yet dispersed, I leap onto the monsters and, sitting on top of the first one who is also on Topi, begin to cut his throat with my claws, well, the place where his head and body join. I want to finish it in one fell swoop, but his skin is too tough, and he pays no attention to the shallow wound. After 5 seconds of torment, and this is in slow motion, I almost get tired while sawing, the hunter's movements become convulsive. Then, when I'm almost sprawled on his back, I reach for the second one, fix his head with my hands, lean forward with my whole body, bite through the weakest part of his natural armor, and starting my meal. Are you going to be there long? After a while, Four Eyes' voice comes from above. Is she worried? I don't even know when the sounds of the fight died down, and there was no sign of me. I'm done. I slide off the hunter's corpse, patting my belly. Why did the sounds of the fight die down if the first one was still alive at the beginning of the meal, and they're very resilient? Well, I'm greedy for blood, so I drank the first one completely and then part of the second. At the same time, I tested the capacity of my seemingly bottomless stomach. I don't know how, but I really drank much more than my body should be able to hold. Not even just my stomach, me whole body. Where did it all go, I wonder? Bastard. While I was working and collecting samples, searching the corpses and neutralizing them just in case, he was brazenly eating. Scoundrel, and I got involved with him. Yamada exclaimed dramatically. It happens. After such a hearty snack, my mood shot straight up. He doesn't even deny it. Fine, I'm heading down. I've already checked the second floor and found nothing interesting. So be it. Take this. An army backpack full of sheathed knives lands next to me. Beautiful. Yamada, I love you. I say with satisfaction. Me, of course you love your medal. Yamada snorts as she jumps down. Since you're in such a good mood, go ahead and search the first floor yourself, while I collect samples from your enemies. The scientist immediately gives away the game. So, one of them has no blood at all, though she might take some flesh. Hearing a strange clanging sound, I turn my gaze to Yamada. Am I the hamster here? She's strapped herself with practically every weapon we found, only kept a couple of reliable pistols, didn't bother with the rest. And come on, just that bundle of 6 shotguns alone says it all. Why are you looking at me like that? Sometimes spare ammunition alone isn't enough. I'll die before you can reload. And that's true even for us. I doubt that even you could survive without your head. Come on, even Nemesis can't survive without a head. Four Eyes dismisses the idea immediately. I understand that, and I remember that you already did this when we encountered a crowd of insect-controlled zombies. But why so many weapons? And why so many different kinds? I can't help asking. Why? Different weapons may be needed in different situations. For example, a shotgun can be used to take out enemies that get close, several of the same zombies at once. And it's also good against nimble opponents. I'm very good with a rifle, even better than you. You know that yourself, so that's a useful choice too. And who knows what kind of crowd we'll run into. Maybe, compared to future troubles, even that crowd from the tunnel will be child's play. Knock on wood, but still, what if? What if I'm not ready, and reloading takes a long time? You can't protect me from everything, even with your new speed. A sniper rifle will also come in handy. The party girl whom I absorbed, as you remember, was good with it, and I won't embarrass myself even without her memories. Assault rifles are just convenient. They'll suit you too, especially in terms of quantity. You can safely ignore reloading. Give me one without a reserve, take the next loaded one, and I'll reload the one you handed me in the meantime. So everything is perfectly calculated. And stop trying to distract me. Go search the place already and quit bothering me. I still have samples to collect. The girl put her hands on her hips. End of chapter. Hey, it's a new week. Don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. P.S. If you're into the Harry Potter universe, check out my new work, Harry Potter, Richie. 54, chapter 54. Yes, yes. All right, you've convinced me. I give up and will carry out your orders, ma'am. I snorted, imitating Vector's voice as he addressed Lupo. With a sad sigh, I got up and went to search the room. Well, the shell casings and corpses don't count. I'm not going to collect the weapons yet either. I have enough, and no matter how strong and tireless Yamada is now, she simply won't be able to carry the rest. There's nowhere to put it. I carefully examined 2 tanks with green liquid, broken from the inside. There are exactly the same ones upstairs. Apparently, that's where the hunters were floating. Hey, Four Eyes. Did you collect samples of the solution from under the hunters? I called over my shoulder. Yes. I received an irritated reply. Okay, I'll be quiet and not distract her. I continued my inspection. Okay, I really don't like this steel container or the fact that the steel door is bent from the inside. Oh, I don't like this at all. It's good that it's empty now, otherwise, it would be really sad. What are you stuck there for? I'm done. Yamada said cheerfully. Well, I'm looking. I'd even say admiring. Come here and help me. Don't know the scientist's markings, I said, examining the container's labels. Yamada came over and somehow immediately turned pale, though, it would seem. How could she turn pale when she was already as white as chalk? She's had her fill of blood too. Still, I didn't like my partner's reaction. It seems that Type 103 tyrants were brought here from the factory for some reason, she said. Damn it. I shouldn't have mentioned the tyrant back then, because it turns out I'm very eyes on. I jinxed it. Okay, maybe we won't run into it after all. We've seen enough. Let's move on. There's nothing else interesting in this room, I said. What about the weapons? Yamada glanced meaningfully at the guns I hadn't collected, scattered across the first floor. I don't need them, and you have enough. If anything, we can always come back. Fortunately, the way back will be cleared after we move forward, I shrugged. Tisk, okay. Four Eyes didn't argue, realizing perfectly well that she had nowhere to hang them, and that I wouldn't take such a step either, since it would reduce my mobility. Half a minute later, we were standing in front of a monumental door blocking the compartment. And it really was monumental, apparently designed to contain biological threats. Well, it certainly hadn't done its job. But the size of the door itself, it was exactly 2 stories high, wide enough for a couple of nemises to walk through side by side. Spit, you fool, or you'll jinx it and Umbrella create a second one. So the dimensions were impressive. While Yamada was fiddling with the combination lock, I tried to figure out how Birkin, being a mutant, was able to get through this door, and why there wasn't a single scratch on it. What nonsense. Maybe it has some kind of visual recognition system, since he should still be quite recognizable in his first form. And in his second form, he wouldn't even care about this barrier. I won't even mention the subsequent ones. Or did I just miss a hole somewhere? I really hope it's the latter. Finally, Yamada stopped fiddling with the door, and it began to slide open. It revealed a large corridor with a high ceiling and a tyrant on the other side, about 300 meters away from us. Four Eyes and I exchanged glances, and she calmly typed the combination into the electronic lock again, ignoring the slowly approaching T-003. We watched the doors close in same silence and then, without saying a word, turned back. An amazing display of teamwork. Where to now? Yamada glanced at me, breaking the spell of the moment. Same place. But first, I'll teach you how to climb walls and do it in a way that keeps your momentum up while still moving properly with your weapon. You're not leaving all this stuff here, are you? I asked hopefully at the end. A negative nod was my answer. Too bad, it would have made my task much easier. Don't you want to fight him? Now you definitely have a chance, at least against this creature. Against Nemesis, sure, we'd have to run away. No, we don't need that, and there's no point in taking unnecessary risks. The ceiling in that corridor is high enough that this creature can't reach us. So now someone's going to get a crash the combat cockroach training course. I spread into a smile of eager anticipation. End of chapter. 55. Chapter 55. To the left. Yamada asks, completely ignoring Tyrant, who is roaring at the top of his lungs below us. What a loud and annoying guy. Do you mean for us, crawling along the ceiling, or according to the conventional system? After all, when you're moving on the ceiling, your left will be where it's right for those walking on the floor. For us, of course. Or do you want to jump through bulletproof glass in the other direction? If so, sorry, count me out. Four Eyes declares firmly with a smirk. No, I don't really want to, but who knows what might pop into your head. Women are like that, and your unexplored subspecies even more so. I reply in the same tone, admitting to myself that the question was silly. Looking back, I can say that Four Eyes learned to crawl quickly and with a weapon in record time. About 20 minutes, and the combat cockroach was ready. Well, considering that I was her teacher, it's no surprise, though I really need to do something about my self-esteem it's constantly trying to inflate. Could this be Vector's influence creeping through? It shouldn't be. Judging by memories, he didn't have such slips. The poor Russian medic certainly didn't, and the German didn't bother with anything like that at all. Now my partner and I were moving along a flat corridor with a branch to the left. But we weren't discussing it, because we'd just come back from there. Roughly speaking, it was a dead end. More precisely, Birkin had passed through it and so carelessly that clearing the debris was impossible, especially with a factor like Tyrant directly beneath us. After returning to the main corridor, we had only 2 choices: dive left again, into a door leading to what looked like a small room, or continue on toward the descent already visible on the right, at the very end of the tunnel. That was what we were discussing jokingly. Why jokingly? Stress relief. It's not every day you crawl over one of the most dangerous beasts in the world. Now remind me again, I sigh, asking more to calm my growing paranoia than because I actually need the answer, why this loud, burly guy can't follow us into what looks like a small room. Because look at the size of the door. It's just above human height. 4AT-103, it'll be waist high, maybe a little higher. He simply won't fit. And he won't break through the walls. One paranoid person has already checked their thickness. By the way, how's your fist? Has it regenerated yet, paranoid? So the only tricky part is the descent to our entrance. Four Eyes replies calmly, though she can't resist a jab. Better to be a living paranoid than a dead brave man. Judging by the fact that you're some kind of undead, an appropriate response comes to mind, brave man. Four Eyes giggles. I'm a bad influence on you. Ah, what a quiet, good girl you were at first. I roll my eyes to the heavens, forgetting that I'm on the ceiling now, which means I'm actually looking down. Beneath me was a free circus show, a leaping tyrant, desperately trying to reach me. And most likely not you. Yamada sighs strangely. What do you mean by that? I ask, intrigued. After you absorbed Vector, his traits began to manifest in you. That conclusion wasn't hard to reach even without analysis. And with me I absorbed the party girl in the same way she was the survivor from Echo 6. In short, I inherited some of her character traits, that's all, Yamada says sadly. Unlike Miho had completely redefined myself as a person, she was clearly frightened by this fate. It was understandable. Thanks to her willpower, and the fact that she was the one doing the absorbing, she took a dominant position. That made it much harder for her to accept changes in her own character. As for me, like Alex and the remnants of Nathan, I drowned under the weight of Vector's consciousness. A new personality emerged derived from the other three. So that doesn't scare me, because I owe my birth to that event. And no personality can break through Kane's established views. Roger. Let's make this clear, I say. You go down first, anyway. That muscle-bound bully is focused on me right now, you might even slip by unnoticed. I, on the other hand, should be much faster than him, so I'll just jump through the open door. I said carelessly, or at least tried to make it seem that way. Better to get busy than to dwell on things. It's a stupid plan, for I says, but there's no other option. I'm going. She jumps toward the entrance to the room. A quick swipe of the card I took from one of the employees, from his corpse in the first room, and with a quiet click, the door opens. I don't know what did it, but something makes Tyrant break away from me. Maybe he has sharp enough hearing to catch the click from below, or maybe he noticed Four Eyes' movement. Either way, I have to act fast. This beast doesn't need much, one step, one blow, and in the worst case, I'll be left without a partner. With a sliding motion, I launch myself forward, spreading my limbs at the end to bleed off momentum, yet still clip the doorframe. In the same motion, I shove Four Eyes inside. I note that my left arm has stopped obeying, might feels like it's been ripped out of its socket. Ignoring it, I push off the floor with my good arm and legs, flying through the doorway after her. Where I was a moment ago, Tyrant's foot slams down heavily. Made it. You could have been more careful, Yamada says, hopping up and slamming the door shut, but thanks anyway. Yeah, I reply, forcing my shoulder back into place as I look around the room, and we hit the jackpot. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate Power Stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 Power Stones. 56, Chapter 56. A laboratory. Hooray. Kane, hurry up and find a portable lab like my last one. Yeah, it wasn't us who hit the jackpot, it was Four Eyes specifically, judging by her smile and her almost glowing eyes. And I don't mean that literally, like mine. I reluctantly get up and stretch noisily, too noisily, as if my vertebrae are popping back into place. I really did throw myself into that leap. Yes, I'm on my way, I reply without much enthusiasm. Maybe we should look for the serum or some useful data instead. I asked, since we were in the right complex anyway. Sure, in theory, we're supposed to go lower, but you never know. It's a lab, after all. Why wouldn't there be samples? Okay, you take care of that, and I'll look for a portable lab, Yamada says, waving her hand dismissively. What a hamster. She's already loaded down with weapons, and now she wants to add a suitcase to the pile even if it is necessary. Or does she think I'm going to carry it? Wow, just look at this. Four Eyes says, walking along the tables and poring over a document. What is it? Surprise me, I mutter, continuing my own search for something useful. This answers the question of where the hunters and the T-103 came from at the virus development base. Yamada glances at me, apparently gauging my reaction. Yeah, what reaction could a half-dead man have? Even if I was interested, my face didn't show it in the slightest. Go on. Tell me, I say indifferently, rummaging through the drawer of the nearest table with interest. In addition to developing the G-virus, or rather, alongside it they tested less successful samples on various bioorganic weapons, subjecting them to changes caused by imperfect viruses. On the off chance that something might fire here too. Thanks to the proximity of the T-103 production plant and several other facilities, they had no shortage of materials. Actually, judging by their placement right at the beginning, those hunters and Tyrant were delivered shortly before the incident and weren't upgraded yet. There's a possibility that something similar to us is running around here. Of course, management didn't bother to tell us that during our first visit, Yamada finishes with a faintly malicious smile. In one of the boxes, I find a stand for virus vials. It's a black case, coated with something unclear. After all, the undead aren't exactly gifted with a sense of touch, with two compartments. Only one of them contains a vial filled with a blue substance, suspiciously similar to what we're looking for. No way. Hey, Yamada, how many doses of the G-virus do we actually need? I ask, doing my best not to betray my excitement. The more, the better. But at minimum 3. One for you. The second for me, to use and stabilize my form. And the last for blackmail and revenge against the corporation, Four Eyes replies, snorting as she continues leafing through papers. Too bad I have no reason not to trust her. So, half a dose won't cut it. How wonderful it would be if both doses were here. By the way, I wonder is this the one Birkin's wife eventually finds, or is the second vial missing for that very reason? I hope it's the second. Though why did I assume this one isn't defective? I found it. Yamada exclaims happily, holding a silver suitcase in her hands. It's obvious what she means, the scientist is talking about the lab. Great. Then can you check this? I pull out the ampoule and hand it to the visibly surprised Four Eyes. Come on, was it really that simple? Burst out the girl who had understood everything correctly. And snatching the vial from me, she immediately snapped open her case and began the analysis. Simple? Shall I remind you of the path we've taken? Even I nearly died several times. And you actually did die, sort of. If this is simple, then what counts as difficult? I protest, burning with righteous indignation. No, I mean the trip to the laboratory itself. I thought we'd have to go all the way down, fighting every step of the way. Instead of finding the serum we need in the fourth room, my partner waves it off. True enough, but shouldn't you know that life rarely follows such neat patterns? And it's not guaranteed this is ID, could be another defect. Besides, we need more samples. Ideally, all of them, I reply. You can cross one item off the list. Really is the G-virus, Four Eyes says, pulling the vial out of the analyzer compartment. So, she asks, what are we going to do? Inject it already, then we'll move on to find something for blackmail, I snort, trying to sound as casual as possible. And what about you? Four Eyes asks, surprised. Who do you think I am? I'm not going to let myself be destroyed by self-destruction, I say dismissively, showing her the box with the 2 compartments. Let her draw her own conclusions. After all, mercenaries are good at sensing insincerity in words. You didn't even wait for the analysis. What if it had been the wrong thing? Yamada says, shaking her head. Even then, it would still have made me stronger. Now let's get out of here. There doesn't seem to be anything else interesting here. So I'll go first, I say, as Four Eyes rolls up her sleeve. And inside me, everything is in turmoil. On one hand, I acted like a gentleman, damn it. I proved to myself that I'm still quite human, still capable of such deeds. I also avoided another round of team arguments, though loyalty is loyalty. Will the imprinting hold after my unilateral move, when the vaccine already analyzed, confirmed, and our only salvation from the current situation is used on me right in front of Four Eyes? What if I end up having to get rid of my own partner after that? On the other hand, well, what the hell am I supposed to do now? End of chapter. 57. Chapter 57. Run around the city looking for Hunk, who's even stronger than Vector, and I almost screwed things up with him, or crawl around down here searching for Annette Birkin with her share, which might not even exist anymore. Oh, I know, I should fight Birkin himself and drink his blood. That's sarcasm, in case anyone didn't catch it. Stop. Yamada shouts, having finished injecting herself with the virus. I'll wait for you outside. Don't worry. I open the door and step into the corridor. Immediately, I'm hit in the upper body by a fist the size of a cannonball, bigger than my head, and sent flying back into the room. Yeah, I think I know exactly who I'm going to vent my irritation on now. Interlude. Yamada. This idiot was so lost in thought after successfully obtaining the drug that he walked straight outside, completely forgetting about the BOW. T-103 waiting for us there. What an idiot. If it weren't for this stupid craving that appeared after my infection, I would have knocked him out a long time ago. That careless sometimes. What are you doing, you miserable suicidal maniac? I snapped, getting up and closing my portable lab, my precious treasure. But Kane wasn't listening to me anymore. TSK. A very familiar state for him. Well, I'm about to smash someone's face in. And at the same time, I'll evaluate the effect of the serum. He added the second part while glancing at me. Was that supposed to reassure me or something? It's hard to read emotions from the face and movements of a corpse. Death changes almost everything, even motor skills become inhuman. I didn't even have time to reply before Kane, having snatched one of his knives, had already vanished through the door. That speed impressive. I wonder if mine will increase now too. And another thing, where does he even hide them? I mean the knives. He's carrying no fewer than I've got firearms, yet only about a dozen are visible. How does he manage that? After about half a minute of fussing he took his time. My partner finally returned. He looked worn out, but satisfied. Did you kill him? I asked with interest. I still hadn't had a proper chance to study a tyrant specimen. Instead of an answer, there was a loud bang against the door closed just moments earlier. I blinked. What? Did I say I was going to kill him? Kane spread his arms wide. I said I'd smash his face and I smashed it. I never mentioned murder. Ugh, clown. But seriously, the two of us are at a stalemate. If I can kill him now, it'll only be at the cost of severe injuries or by playing the part of a suicide fighter. Apparently, the virus doesn't boost parameters right away. The dumb mutant repeated his gesture. Of course not right away. You should have thought of that before charging into battle. Yes, I get it, dead brains don't work very well, but while you're still relatively fresh, at least try to use what you have left. I vented my irritation on him. Yes, he replied lazily. Shall we continue on our way, beautiful lady? And don't suck up to me. I shot back. After some time, we finally left Tyrant behind with a very picturesque scar running across the entire left half of his face. A true feast for the eyes. We descended further and found ourselves in a spacious hangar, the ceiling of which we'd seen earlier from the corridor behind the bulletproof glass. A couple of overturned tables, 2 de-energized cameras in opposite corners, a pile of corpses that had no intention of getting up, a couple of zombies that didn't react to us at all, and a heap of unidentifiable debris, whatever used to be here before. Maybe those were the same tables or lounge sofas according to Vector's memories. There were some around, but now it's impossible to tell. They were smashed beyond repair. The scene of devastation was completed by a dead hunter lying in the center. Was Birkin here, or what? Beautiful, Four Eyes said skeptically. You're right, I replied. And then, without wasting time, we headed straight for the left wall, where a passage to the next room was located. The gate was certainly large, though not as solid as the previous ones, and the entrance had already been kindly smashed open, a pleasant surprise. Without wasting extra time on hacking the control panel, we moved on. Straight or right? Four Eyes asked again. Smart policy. If we end up somewhere we shouldn't, it'll be my fault. You led us here, and all that. If I remember correctly, the security room is to the right, I said. We can access the surveillance feeds there and collect some useful materials, things that won't earn Umbrella a pat on the head. What if the recordings from the lab aren't enough? Besides, some of the cameras might still be operational. We could see what's going on down here right now. So, to the right, Yamada replied in the same tone. Yes. And then we silently continued through yet another tunnel. God, it's so monotonous here. I'm going to end up claustrophobic at this rate. I can only imagine how the survivors who end up here will feel. Every single dead thing reacts to them, and the atmosphere will press down even harder. As for me, I've got solid confidence in my own strength. I mean, come on, taking down 2 hunters barehanded, and even fighting a tyrant to a draw. Lost in these thoughts, I somehow reached the control room without noticing. If not for my partner who suddenly raised her rifle to aim, I don't even know what my absent-mindedness might have cost me. Or maybe I do know. I just prefer not think about it. The control room door had been torn off, slashed all over with claws, clear proof of who had at least been here. No, correction, judging by the noise inside, he was still here. Either a licker, which wouldn't be much of a problem unless there were as many as during our last encounter, or a hunter, in a cramped space. That was bad. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 58. Chapter 58. Signaling to Four Eyes that I was going in, I headed for the cabin entrance while she covered my back, dagger in my left hand, claws extended on my right. Unfortunately, daggers aren't something you can really rely on when fighting hunters. They tend to break far too easily. I speed up and rush into the room. I noticed the strange color of the hunter. Yes, it was him finishing off some guard. Slipping the knife back into its sheath, I begin the attack with my empty hand. My first surprise struck at that very moment, when sparks literally flew from beneath the hunter. What the hell? Its silvery scales were clearly far tougher than those of its kin. As I understand it, this must be the masterpiece created in this laboratory. I jump away from the monster, crouching to dodge the blows still coming at me, then close the distance again and try to break the scales on its belly. No luck. The entire damn thing is covered in uniform scales. Fucking vivisectors removed this species' weakness. Impressive work, sure, just not something I'm in a position to admire right now. The monster's paw finally swings over me, and at the same time a solid stream of bullets slams into it. Four Eyes is clearly firing with both hands. And why not? Any recoil she feels now is negligible, and bruising herself or getting a mark was impossible for the undead. More precisely, it's possible, but it wouldn't affect her actions in any meaningful way. We don't feel pain, and regeneration takes care of the rest. A moment later, I have to dodge a ricochet as well. The bullets don't penetrate that hide. Fine. What if I multiply force by speed? I dash to the opposite corner of the room, barely brushing the wall, push off it, and rush back, driving both hands into the monster's chest and exposing myself to a blow. I press in even closer, trying to force its body backward, dodge the strike, and punch through the scales that are finally starting to give way. One of the creature's claws still manages to graze me, getting lodged somewhere in my right forearm. But its grip on the floor fails. We're both carried along in the direction of my charge and slam into the wall. At the moment of impact, a strange click sounds and the wall moves inward while we keep going. Damn the Resident Evil world with its hiding places and secret rooms. How I hated that nonsense in the early games of the series. Now I'm cursing it out loud. Another click, and something throws us upward. And it throws us hard. Even while flying, I don't forget to punch this reptile if only to vent my pent-up irritation. We shoot out outside, through some kind of hatch. I practically had to hug the hunter to squeeze through, right next to the building. We don't even have time to fully clear the opening before a car slams into us, pinning us against the wall. What the hell? I hear a man's voice. For a moment, I'd already decided the car was part of some elaborate trap. Leon, behind you. Now a woman's voice. With effort I turn my head that way and, through the gap in the crumpled hood, I see a girl and a guy jumping out of the car from opposite sides. What's wrong with them? They've pinned us down by every rule of monster neutralization, so bolting now would be pretty stupid. My thoughts are cut off by the blare of a truck horn, one that's rushing straight toward the car. God, why? I press myself even tighter against the hunter, literally using him as an improvised monster shield, bracing my bent arms against his torso. Better broken arms than being smashed into pieces. The impact is tremendous enough to disorient even me. The screech of tearing metal. An explosion, with us almost at its epicenter. I hide behind the hunter's flesh as it's roasted alive. My arms crunch, breaking right before my eyes, losing their shape, becoming something closer and closer to minced meat, the very thing I could have turned into myself. I kick desperately, trying to fall backward. No use, the grip is so tight it feels like I'd have to tear my lower half off entirely. If I can't go down, then let's try up. Twisting, I push off with what's left above my elbow, essentially just bare bone, since the rest is already no better than ground coffee. Not sure about the drink, but ground fats for sure. On top of that, I wrap my legs around the hunter, trying to shove my body upward, pushing off him again and again, using the monster as leverage. And on the next jerk, I succeed. And how? I'm flung into the air, beyond the blast zone, and the shock wave even adds to it, tossing me back even farther. After a couple of tumbles in the air, I land on the edge of the roof of the building beneath which the hatch had been. Phew, I'm alive. I lean over the edge, looking down at the wrecked car with the hunter somewhere beneath it, the burning truck on either side of it. Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield. Awesome. Except does that mean 4 eyes and I crawled through half of Resident Evil 3? Funny, but I really need to get back to my partner. Easier said than done, unfortunately. First priority is finding food to restore myself, then clearing the debris and jumper crawl back. Which brings us to the first item on the agenda, whether or not to eat the main characters of the entire Resident Evil series. That's quite a dilemma. Still, aside from the swarm of zombies around, they're the most preferable food option available. End of chapter. 59. Chapter 59. Interlude. Somewhere beneath Raccoon City. Kane, you idiot. A thunderous voice echoed through the laboratory complex, where Yamada was bent over her case, analyzing blood samples including the 2 most recent ones, taken from the Silver Hunter and from her own progenitor. It took the girl no effort at all to realize that someone had deceived her. The samples left behind after the clash of the 2 monsters told her everything she needed to know. Now the mercenary scientist was very furious, her mind rapidly calculating ways to obtain another sample of the G-virusomething that, for both creatures, was akin to a serum against a dreadful disease. After all, what could be more terrifying than death, final and irreversible? Even if it was only the death of the mind and consciousness, no, especially if it was such a fate. The death of the self. Easy to say, snack on the survivors, much harder to do. Especially when your hands feel like sacks of I meant potatoes. Why? Because they'd been thoroughly smashed, not a single intact bone left, just useless weight dangling from my shoulders. Keeping up in that state with quick, lively targets was impossible. Especially Leon, who vanished between the buildings in the blink of an eye. Claire, on the other hand, decided to do a little shooting. What can I say, she's no Umbrella elite, but still very good. 6 shots, 5 dead zombies. Only once did a corpse fail to go down with the first hit. Either her hand slipped, or the girl was testing whether they could be killed by something other than a headshot. As soon as she disappeared into a shop, the soundscape she'd created drew crowds of ordinary zombies from alleys and nearby streets. Good enough. I'm more oozing than moving, there's no better word for it, since I can descend only with the help of my legs, one of which, judging by the poor feedback, had been badly damaged during my previous acrobatics. So from windowsill to windowsill crawled, quietly swearing something, eventually flopping down onto the accordion-like wreck that had once been Leon's police car. Balancing on one leg, I rip open the hood with the other. Something silvery gleams inside. Just as I thought, beneath the steel shell lies that super hunter, even now having gotten away with little more than scratches. No, it didn't survive. The mouth-watering smell of lightly charred meat made that obvious, as did the smoke curling from its mouth and nasal cavity, and its fused eyes. All that's left is to open the canned goods and enjoy the pre-cooked delicious meat. I sincerely hope that whatever changes this half-finished version of the G-virus gave it will pass on to me after I eat this amphibian. I finish prying apart the front of the car with my feet, all of it, even ripping off the front doors, using them to help yank the roasted carcass out of the hatch, which had melted around the monster's wasp waist. Finally pulling out my future dinner, I suddenly realize that opening it with my feet won't work. Sigh. Looks like I'll have to accelerate limb regeneration. I spot the nearest zombie a dash to the left, and in a single instant I cover more than 5 meters, throwing my jaws wide and biting clean through the neck of an innocent zombie. I latch onto the tier and begin drinking stale, perhaps, but still life-giving fluid. Immediately, there's a crunch in my arms and in my left leg as well. Yep, that one really had been damaged. It's astonishing how much faster regeneration kicks in after consuming even this kind of blood. My mind cleared as well. I hadn't even noticed how the thirst had started pressing down on me. Imagine actually thinking of eating one of those too. Yeah, and then how am I supposed to keep track of events afterward? For now, I'll have to tail them. I don't see any other way of snagging myself a life-saving dose of the G-virus. Birkin's daughter has it, though I'm no longer sure about his wife. Another option is to shadow Claire and catch the Barris. I just need to beat Redfield to it, and avoid running into Birkin himself. My chances in a fight against that monster are very low. I'm probably faster than him, but he's nearly invulnerable, while I'm very much killable and, with some bad luck, even by humans, armed humans, but still. With those thoughts, I return to the hunter's corpse and how am I supposed to bite through this thing? Got it. Patient, open wide. And let's begin the dentist's work. No dentistry won't cut it. A comparison to Samson tearing open a lion's jaws fits much better. After forcing the hunter's maw wider, I finally get to feeding on what truly turns out to be roasted meat. In the end, I devour it in record time. I am running under acceleration, after all, to finish quickly and not fall too far behind Claire, whose silhouette I can still see with my strange vision, for which even walls pose no obstacle. What would I do without that highlighting? I rise already full as a boa constrictor, leaving behind only the hunter's silver shell. It couldn't be bitten through, even from the inside. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 60, chapter 60. Phew. Good, no, I can stroll after the lovely lady, I snort. Yeah, lovely lady. As if I could look at her without distinctly gastronomic interest. Once again I slip into acceleration, noting at the edge of my awareness that I'm spending more and more time in this state. It comes more easily now, and the limit seems to have vanished altogether. But that can't be right. This kind of speed has to demand something from its user, doesn't it? Then again, how would I even notice? Feel bad? That's not even funny. I'm not capable of feeling even pain anymore, and here we're talking about feeling bad. Bursting into the shop, Claire entered. I spot a half-open door on the left and a portly man in the process of being eaten, apparently the shop owner. I walk past the infected who pay me no mind, snatching the shopkeeper's jacket. Given his size, it covers me completely. Vector uniform is practically begging to rest in peace, with only the lower half left intact. The mask disappeared somewhere after Nemesis, never to be seen again. Ah, pity the outfit held back my speed with stubborn persistence. Umbrella really knows how to make things. Yeah, says one of the corporation's projects. I move on, and after a bit of wandering through narrow alleys and courtyards, simply following the trail of infected who'd met their final end, emerge onto a wide street just as the gate slams shut. Zombies immediately begin pounding on them from my side. How fortunate that I'm intellectually far above their displayed level, and I'd better secure the G-virus quickly to keep it that way, so I don't turn into a mindless monster myself. Rapidly closing the distance to the police station, I sketch the scene inside with my peculiar vision: 5 living figures and 1 fading survivor. I vault over the stone fence. All right. Claire came in from this side. Leon from the opposite one. That small aura on the second floor, that's Sherry Birkin. The blurry one is the police chief. His bulk makes him appear indistinct to me. On the first floor, from Claire's entrance side but a bit farther in and to the left, most likely another room, the very place where that fading aura lingers. Some cop dying, most likely. That doesn't interest me much. What does interest me is the additional figure next to the chief of police. Think, Kane. Who was there in canon? Turns out no one, so what am I missing? Nothing. I distinctly remember that when Claire arrived, there was only one interlocutor, the chief himself. Later, it seems he'll become a parasite, having caught the infection straight from the source. From Birkin, of course, who suddenly felt the urge to reproduce. A couple of seconds later, things get even more interesting. I stop paying attention to Claire, who had reached the dying cop. My focus is completely seized by the sight of that unaccounted-for figure collapsing, its glow slowly beginning to fade. More and more interesting. And how violently the police chief's figure starts to pulse. And I seriously doubt it was out of fear. I crouch, tense my leg muscles, and shove off sharply, soaring into the air and landing already on the roof. Jumps are everything. Reaching the scene quickly, I realize I've screwed up. The chief's office has no windows. Damn it. So what now? Go back and make my way in the normal way, I think gloomily. Turning over my right shoulder, I notice a small platform with a door probably leading to the attic. But what really finishes me off is, oh, a burning helicopter. Yes, exactly that, a burning helicopter, half embedded in the wall. I glance sideways at the water tower standing above it and slightly to my right, or whatever those barrels are called. Embarrassing to admit, I've never really cared before. Then I shift my thoughtful gaze to my right hand, reflexively clenched into a fist. Back to the wall of the tank, estimating its thickness. Back again to my freshly healed hand. Decision made. I step up to the tank, make sure I'm positioned directly above the helicopter, and strike with my claw-extended hand a powerful, lightning-fast blow that literally tears the water reservoir open. I leap back instantly, clearing space as a torrent of water crashes down onto the burning wreck. Back then I didn't yet know that 40 minutes later Claire would show up on the roof, stubbornly hauling in her backpack found along the way, or perhaps confiscated from the unlucky shopkeeper, the valve from that very barrel. Nor did I know what kind of colorful unprintable expressions she'd use when she tossed it aside, realizing her hamster instinct had played a cruel joke on her, just like one bio-vampire. 61, Chapter 61. Only after rummaging through the helicopter and making sure there was nothing there of use to me, a box of ammo doesn't count, and the pilot didn't have a knife. As for the pistol, I never ended up using it at all. Did I remember who that fifth highlighted figure was? The mayor's daughter, entrusted to the police chief for protection at the very beginning of the incident. TCH. It would be tempting to turn her purely as a test to see whether anything worthwhile comes out of the rebirth of a less strong-willed personality as the Four Eyes, but rather an ordinary civilian. But if I rush in now, Chief Irons, I finally recalled the head of the police department's name, won't go down to his secret room to turn her into a trophy, won't meet the mutated Birkin there, and won't become a G-parasite himself. Yes, there you have the butterfly effect in all its glory. On the other hand, even with the rather crude graphics of the early games, she was drawn very nicely. And the chief himself called her the city's first beauty when speaking to Claire over the girl's body. From a purely aesthetic standpoint, testing whether anything worthwhile would come of her is far more pleasant and convenient than experimenting on some grimy survivor, and if I find anyone in this city now, it'll be exactly that sort. Or special forces. But they don't interest me at all. Turning them as possible that's already been tested, as is the result. What I need is to be certain whether my first pancake was a failure, or whether changing civilians is simply something to forget about altogether. After all, Claire herself, despite having certain specific skills, is essentially a civilian, lacking the kind of willpower the Four Eyes demonstrated. And that can be said of almost all the survivors. Someone might argue with me right now, or think differently, recalling the future exploits of the Redfield Jr. But I understand clearly from my own experience that it's precisely various trials that forge a person's character. One need only remember the hunted, fleeing version of myself at the very beginning, unwilling to drink blood, and only with great difficulty striking a bargain with my conscience over the killing of sentient beings. And then compare that to who I am now, calmly calculating whom and how to turn for my own greater benefit. The girl, for now, simply doesn't have a fighter's qualities, and waiting for them to be forged may take too long. Besides, in a couple of months after leaving this cozy little city, the dungeons on the island will be waiting for her, the place where Umbrella's mercenaries undergo their re-education. On one hand, if I rescue her from there, she'll be more loyal, and her character will be in just the right condition for fearlessly turning her into one of my kind. On the other hand, the game might have cut that content, and in real life, anything can happen while she's in prison on that island. In Raccoon City, she's not safe from anything either, and real life has no save files. So I want to be prepared for that turn of events. And what lies ahead for Claire herself? Having endured the horrors of this city, and then prison on top of that, she's unlikely to be able to settle back into the ordinary life of a normal person. The human psyche is such that it changes easily in conditions like the current ones, but takes a very long time to return to itself. I wouldn't be surprised if, after everything she's been through, she grabs a bat at every rustle and sleeps with one eye open. I've seen scenes like that in hospital, people labeled former military. You can recognize them just by their gaze, and by the strange expression of guilt lingering there. Not everyone ends up like that, but many carry the mark. And sifting through the memories I inherited from Vector, I saw confirmation of that as well. With women, it should be even harder. Yamatash's the crazy one I've got. In short, it's better to know for sure what I'll get from civilians just in case. That means I'll have to tail Claire, and at the right moment, while she's persuading Sherry not to run away and to stay under her and Leon's protection, I'll pay a visit to an old friend's, meeting Chief Irons and Dr. Birkin. Quietly, without fuss, not forgetting to steal a third personality from their encounter along the way. At the same time, I'll find out whether I can turn someone who's already dead because the girl is dying right now. All of this I was thinking through while crawling through the smoking wreck of the helicopter, thanking the gods that I can't feel pain from the burned patches of skin that had to press against the still hot, judging by how quickly burns formed, structure that once flew. Emerging into the corridor by such an extravagant route, I ran into two fire-scorched zombies, one of whom had even survived the blaze. Though, given that they're already dead, survived isn't really the right word. End of chapter. Hey, it's a new week. Don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate Power Stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 Power Stones. 62, Chapter 62. Spitting on the unnecessary theatric. She wouldn't react to me anyway. I moved on and slipped into the room to the right of the helicopter's nose, jutting elegantly out of the wall. A quick glance around revealed a trove of truly rare artifacts, paintings from the Renaissance era, statues dating back to ancient Greece, and more. So the police chief's obsession with various works of art wasn't exaggerated after all. I could appraise all of this with a trained eye inherited from Vector, who actually understood such things. It sometimes felt as if his teachers had prepared him for absolutely everything. It was hard to imagine how he'd ended up in Delta Team. Wolfpack fell under that letter, when he had a straight road to Alpha, to be Hunk's right hand. Shaking my head more out of habit than anything, I cut off the stream of thoughts that had clearly wandered in the wrong direction and walked toward the opposite wall. It seems that one of the peculiar keys to this puzzle box of a building should be stored here. I'd learned firsthand that this world was full of secret passages, evacuation routes, and the like, learned it the hard way, nearly losing my own hide in the process. I wonder, can I activate the mechanism without collecting anything? If I remember correctly, the protagonists had several possible scenarios here. Let's hope this is the first one. I approached the statues standing beside a column adjoining the wall, the column carved with a Greek warrior. The statues had recesses meant for activators. Well, let's see whether brute force can triumph over reason, and while we're at it, I'll try on the skin of a vandal. Fists at the ready, I slammed a punch into one recess with all my strength, then, stepping to the right under acceleration, repeated the procedure on the other. There was a click from a mechanism clearly not designed for such treatment, or, on the contrary, one built specifically for this kind of emergency opening. In any case, it let me know I could claim the golden key that popped out of a niche beneath the Greek warrior. I took a step toward the pedestal when another click sounded. What? With a loud crack, something inside the column activated, and a split second later, just enough time for me to leap back, it was destroyed from within. A tyrant. Seriously, how many of you are there? Oh right, congratulations, Kane. This is the second scenario. I looked more closely at its face and spotted a vivid scar running across the entire left side. I couldn't help but whistle. Fate itself keeps bringing us together. Well, this time I won't stop at just carving up someone's mug, I said with a grin, and then, very politely, exited the room, closing the doors behind me without even grabbing the key. Not my headache anymore. Claire, Leon, you have my sympathy. Grarg. The roar erupted behind my back, and a chunk of the column smashed through the door, proving it to be a rather flimsy barrier against an enraged tyrant. I slipped into acceleration, and the massive slab of white marble, or maybe not marble, immediately slowed. A burst to the right, then a diving leap past the obstructing helicopter nose. I landed at the far end of the corridor, having cleared about 3 meters in the jump, and turned left. There were no other branches here. Going right would lead to the area Claire had entered the building from, just one floor up, though that level looked more like a balcony. With this maneuver I could shake off the tyrant who burst out behind me, widening the passage, but that would put Claire under attack, and it's not certain she's already armed with something powerful, which might not even be here. So, we go left. This should be a bypass leading toward the rear of the helicopter and, by extension, the roof. I wonder if I can, if not throw the tyrant down, at least leave it up there. I sprinted down the corridor to the sound of AT-103 slamming into the wall behind. Might had used its own burst of speed as well. I practically smashed the door at the end of the hall open with my left shoulder. I simply didn't have time to open it properly. Another crash echoed behind me. The tyrant could definitely accelerate, but only in a straight line and without controlling the burst. Straight ahead through yet another cluttered corridor, then left again. This time there was no junction. Well, technically I could have gone straight, but I really didn't feel like running loops through the area. Besides, the tyrant crashing into the closed door behind me turned it into an open, heavily shattered one. Running straight past broken windows on the other side of which I could see piles of crows, with one already flapping around inside the room. And I had no desire to find out how appetizing I looked to them. I vaulted over a police officer pecked into a state where even becoming a zombie was no longer an option, turned right, and hurled some debris piled against the wall at the tyrant. It didn't slow it down in the slightest, but one crow was killed by a fragment of a mop. Miraculously making the turn, I kept moving, snatching one of the crows mid-flight as it decided to swoop into the room. Apparently, just like with dogs, these birds considered me food. If my memory served me right, these creatures even ate zombies, so maybe I was being unfair to my own nature. Perhaps, in their eyes, even a tyrant counted as a meal. End of chapter 63. Chapter 63. The corridor ended with a turn to the left, deeper into the building. After covering barely 2 meters, I ran into a dead end. A steel door stood to the left. No time to fiddle with I-tone kick tore it loose, and I burst out onto the roof, snacking on the crow I'd caught along the way. Who knows, maybe I'd extract something interesting from its mutation. Grow a wings, perhaps. Bah, knock on wood, of course. But really, what do I have to fear at this point? I'm already a black, fanged, clawed creature as it is. A moment later, having dramatically widened the passage by blowing the wall to hell, the tyrant spilled out onto the roof after me. Enjoy your stay. I waved mockingly, just like at the beginning of this whole epic, tensing my legs and leaping toward the building's exit. Now I could enter like a civilized person and follow in Claire's footsteps. Except I'd completely forgotten that the tyrant was also capable of long if not very high jumps. And that was more than enough for it to leave the roof as well. Maybe not as gracefully or spectacularly as I did, but still. So when I landed, I had to roll forward immediately, clearing the impact zone of at least a 2-ton slab of murderous meat. And I overdid that roll. Under acceleration, slammed straight through the barred gate Claire had locked earlier, the one separating the street from the police station grounds. The collapsing grate crushed a few ordinary zombies underneath it. They'd been standing there dumbly, arms stretched forward, even though Claire had already been thoroughly exploring the building for a good 10 minutes. Out on the street, registering the tyrant's heavy footsteps behind me, I realized my luck had officially run out. Why now, and how did I come to that conclusion, when the T-103 had been riding my tail for quite some time already, at least by the standards of accelerated perception? The answer was painfully simple. STRS. Heavy footsteps echoed from the alley ahead and slightly to my left. Somehow, I'd completely forgotten that one particular monster was programmed to eliminate every member of that unit, and the STARS office was on the second floor of this very station. I hate my life. Tell me, you programmed little nightmare, I muttered plaintively, am I already on your priority target list? Maybe I should veer right. I thought I'd seen a descent into the sewers there, off to the side behind the fence, while I was jumping earlier. Sherry. A hissing voice and wet, squelching footsteps came from exactly that direction. Ha ha ha, I'm dead. A hollow laugh burst out of me. Well, would you look at that everyone's here. I'm actually curious how this even happened. All right, the tyrant and Birkin fine. They were both actually in the building and somehow managed not to meet, just like in canon. But Nemesis, where the hell did you come from? Sure, logically speaking, checking or outright destroying the STARS office is exactly what he should do under a total extermination protocol, but I don't remember him showing up here. Then again, thanks to me, part of canon will already going off the rails. Take the tyrant and Birkin meeting, for example though. That might have happened off-screen in the original as well. And judging by Birkin surviving, either the tyrant didn't touch him, or the former professor is one dangerous bastard. But Nemesis, forgive me for setting you all up like this, everyone's still inside that building. Yeah, this was a full-blown panic attack. I was definitely not ready for encounters like this, especially not 3 at once. Could anyone even be prepared for a turn of events like that? Wait, what's that swarm of red highlighted meaning human figures approaching from the left, out of the alley opposite the one Nemesis should be coming from? What the hell is going on here? Meanwhile, Umbrella Corporation, Epsilon Team. Yes, confirming approach to the target. The radars tuned to high F-05 are performing excellently, the team leader reported over the dedicated encrypted channel built into his suit. His assault rifle was up, ready for snap shooting. According to surveillance data from multiple cameras, the creature's parameters were monstrous. He signaled his trusted men ready. 1 minute to contact. And we'd be the ones to claim the prize first. Gamma team who'd gone chasing something down in the sewers for God knows what reason would get nothing. No triple pay for them. So much for our sensor detected a weak but similar emission. And whose equipment is better now? Those German bastards were clearly wearing the wrong letter. Our squad was far more qualified. Enough. Those thoughts could wait until after the operation along with the self-congratulation. The priority now was target acquisition. Especially now, when the radar suddenly went haywire, spiked some unknown readings, and shut down completely. Someone at that base had definitely messed around with the thing. Their only excuse was that the toy had supposedly been assembled in less than a day. Come on, boys, the commander said over the internal comms, using a simple soldier's joke to boost morale. Let's earn our pay and wipe the smiles off Gamma's faces and Delta's too, wherever the hell they vanished to. 20 seconds to contact. The mercenaries still had no idea what they were about to run into. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 64, chapter 64. Tyrant was the first to wade into the budding brawl. His right hook forced me into a backward roll, slipping out from under the blow. And of all the places to land, I had to roll right under Nemesis's feet. The monster didn't hesitate for long and immediately tried to stomp on me. For some reason, the fate of a cockroach didn't appeal to a certain vampire, so I rolled again and sprang back to my feet in one elastic motion. To my left there was only T-103, just turning toward me. Not a bad roll, all things considered. I decided not to waste the opportunity landing a double strike into the brute's side, and when he finally turned, following it up with a straight kick to the chest. Tyrant stayed upright thanks to his sheer mass, but the asphalt beneath us cracked. I feel downright pathetic, hopping around these two hulks. Birkin finally lumbered over to our little party, swollen to the size of a T-103, his right arm even larger than the rest of his body. There was a huge eye on that arm, right on the shoulder. As far as I remembered, that was his only weak spot. Once infected with the standard G virus, the monster no longer cared about bullets. In his massive hand he was gripping a broken piece of steel pipe, clearly intending to give me a loving tap with it. I duck and move to the right. The tip of powerful swing clips the tyrant as he steps forward. He drops into a crouch from the force of the blow, then immediately straightens, delivering an uppercut to Birkin's jaw. Excellent. At least 2 of them are from different camps. Otherwise, things would be truly bleak for me. A nemesis tentacle comes flying at me next, and still, I want that function for myself even if I don't yet know why. I extend my claws to their maximum length and shred the living cable into tiny pieces while it's still in midair, making Nemesis howl. And that was the exact moment the humans chose to appear. Oh, familiar suits. Another specialized unit. But what are they doing here? I'll need to leave at least one alive and have a bite. Get the information I need. Umbrella's mercenaries clearly hadn't expected to see such a crowd, or one of their colleagues nearby. My suit, even if nearly past its prime, was the right one, so whatever they'd planned to do, the poor bastards hesitated. And I took full advantage of that. Guys, I'm so glad to see you. Why don't you take care of them, and I'll go get some reinforcements in the meantime. Rattling all that off, I shot between them like a bullet, slipping past the squad. Nemesis, deciding to get even with me, failed to repeat my trick and instead slammed straight into the unfortunate people, instantly putting 3 of them out of commission permanently. Tyrant and Birkin, already having damaged each other, repeated Nemesis's maneuver. Well, humans were clearly the preferable targets thanks to the virus. Internal disagreements could wait. Unfortunately, my assumption was wrong. Only the 2 umbrella monsters decided to tear into the squad. Birkin, retaining some twisted, virus-warped semblance of reason, chose the most dangerous opponent, the nimble and strong one. Me. I had to duck, letting the monster's improvised club sweep over my head. Then a step to the right was surprisingly fast for his bulk, and it was as if he'd never heard the word inertia, calmly redirecting his improvised weapon mid-swing. To avoid the next strike, I used a rather extravagant method. I vaulted clean over Birkin. I landed behind the monster and, turning toward him, drove a powerful elbow into his back. Immediately after that, I unleashed a flurry of blows on the still turned away Birkin. Acceleration was clearly on my side. My fairly heavy strikes forced him to hunch over and stagger several steps forward. That was where their effect ended. As for me, I was sent flying by a crushing blow from Nemesis, who had decided to join our little dispute as well. As I sailed away, I managed to notice the relentless monster smashing his fist into the jaw of the turning Birkin. I myself flew backward several meters, crashed through a building wall, and got back up, grabbing the first thing that came to hand as a weapon. It turned out to be a shovel. Not the worst choice, and the opponent was obvious at once: steel pipe versus shovel. A classic. A dash back outside, and my improvised weapon comes down flat against Birkin's head, just as he hurls Nemesis back toward the mercenaries, who were enthusiastically unloading on the tyrant. A shame it had absolutely no effect. The shovel's head, calling it a blade would be generous, bent upward, but it was still usable. I let another pipe swing pass over me and strike back with the reverse side, aiming between the legs. But of course Undead is undead, no matter where you go. A short, irritated growl was all I earned for my trouble. Birkin was already swinging his pipe in wide arcs, trying to catch me, but no luck. For all that I was weaker and less durable, I was just as much faster. I calmly repositioned my feet, retreating slightly, shifting first one way, then the other, smoothly slipping past the monster's blows. Almost dancing. Vector's skills are something else. I am reminded of that yet again. And with my body's capabilities added on top, it becomes something truly beyond limits. End of chapter. 65. Chapter 65. Once again narrowly slipping past the swinging pipe, I strike Birkin's arm with the shovel. The wooden handle creaks ominously, clearly at its limit, as I step forward, sliding my improvised weapon up along the monster's limb, and with the sharpened edge, I stab straight into that third eye. The way Birkin roared was something else entirely. With a mighty blow, he literally sent me flying, once again hurling me through a wall and into some building. I shouldn't have gotten that close to him. Even acceleration didn't save me. I barely managed to take a step and a half back. I get up off the floor of the room, which turns out to be someone's kitchen, and with the crunch of bones settling back into place, I try to figure out what's bothering me. No, the fact that only the shovel's handle remains while the blade has gone to its well-deserved death is entirely expected. So I keep thinking, and then it hits me: here isn't a single external fracture. Even during my fight with the Silver Hunter, who ranks far lower on the danger scale than my current opponents, I'd suffered plenty of such injuries. But now bruises cover my body, that's obvious. My clothes are shredded to rags by that same pipe. Yet there isn't a single scratch on my skin. And I can't chalk that up to regeneration. They weren't there even before it kicked in. Struck by a strange thought, I walk over to a table where a knife and a neatly peeled apple lie in plain view. The fruit goes straight into the trash. My body doesn't tolerate that kind of thing. The knife, however, I'd rather not dull my own blades on myself if I turn out to be right. I grab and, with a sharp motion, drive straight toward my heart. I stare in disbelief at the bent blade and the complete lack of a wound on my chest. So it wasn't for nothing that I devoured that hunter down to the last scrap. The virus he'd been pumped full of clearly interacted with mine, bringing me closer in terms of sheer toughness to Birkin. Or, to put it another way, to a pure G-virus carrier. And that is wonderful. Round 2, pipe versus shovel, handle. I burst back outside, slamming into the first large body I see. Why waste time deliberating? Everyone here who's a big guy is an enemy anyway. The tyrant, who at that very moment was crushing another mercenary's head, howled as he took the blow to the spine from behind. Without stopping, I reinforced the effect, hammering T-103s back again and again with the shovel, which is splintering into flying shards with each strike. At some point, there was nothing left of the shovel at all. Tossing aside a palm-sized fragment, I was just about to continue turning the tyrant into a cutlet when Nemesis's tentacle finally reached me. Only then did I realize just how much I had accelerated, leaping away from the tentacle and slipping out of acceleration at the same time. In that very instant, it was as if someone had flipped a switch. The tyrant, who had been barely moving before, snapped around and lunged toward me. And a jet of flame was racing toward his back. Damn it, those mercenaries have a flamethrower. T-103's outfit endured the flames with honor, as did he himself. I, accelerating again, hopped backward once more, this time pushing off much harder. Then, springing again, already from the second floor of the building behind me, I crashed into Birkin at full speed. I'd picked up so much speed that when I slammed into the monster's back, I actually managed to knock him down and even rode along his back across the asphalt, which was reduced to something resembling mush afterward. Now that was an opening. I open my jaws and sink my teeth just below the monster's neck, only to spit out broken teeth with a hiss a moment later. What kind of hide does he have? I start savagely raking him with my claws, striking sparks from the creature's body. I accelerate harder and harder, knowing time is against me. I can't keep him on the ground at all. We're incomparable in size and strength. All I have is speed, and that's exactly what I'm using now. Meanwhile, the tyrant was approaching with heavy steps, while Nemesis was finishing off his business with the mercenaries, who were shouting something probably over comms with the corporation. I didn't care. The main thing was to get even a single drop of blood from the monster beneath me, who was already pushing himself up on his arms. Yeah, reinforcements are here. Someone among the mercenaries shouted loudly and clearly. Reinforcements? What reinforcements? Only then did I notice the helicopter hovering above us. But something was off. There didn't seem to be anyone inside. Red outlines marked only the pilot's seat and one other person. There was no container with a monster aboard, either. What did that mean? I was so absorbed in processing this new development that I missed the moment Birkin got to his feet and the tyrant closed in on us. I did manage to see T-103's mighty blow coming and shifted to the left, still positioned on the other monster's back. It wasn't hard to guess who took that hit instead of me. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 66, chapter 66. At the same time, in an umbrella laboratory outside the city. It's a shame we'll have to be so wasteful with the new samples and our people, John Rye said calmly, almost theatrically, as if playing to an audience. But a situation where all these harmful elements end up in one place is unlikely to repeat itself. For that, we can afford to sacrifice Nemesis, especially since there's a strong chance that this BOW will simply move on to the next stage of evolution during combat, the head of the facility's security added, the very complex from which High F-05 had escaped. I confirm the missile launch, John said. Back in Raccoon City. When the missile was deployed, a brilliant flash engulfed the entire street in front of the police station, followed by a shockwave that made life significantly harder for Claire and Leon. It unlocked most of the doors inside the building, which on the one hand made things easier for the survivors, but on the other allowed zombies previously sealed in specific sectors to spread throughout the station. And it certainly played on the police chief's nerves. Those caught directly in the blast had it far worse. Nemesis, having sustained catastrophic damage, transitioned into his second, aggressive stage of evolution. The humans were simply killed outright, while the three other monsters were hurled into one another. The explosion tore High F away from Birkin, but not completely. Kane was left holding one of Birkin's limbs, the one without the eye. The vampire himself was slammed against the chest of the tyrant flying forward, whose suit once again endured fire and blast with honor, saving not only its wearer but also the unfortunate soul pinned to him on the side opposite the explosion. Finally, after dragging the three monsters across half a block, the monstrous rampage subsided. After some time, long enough for sluggish zombies to begin converging on the blast site, signs of life appeared among the dead. Birkin was the first to stir. As he rose to his feet, anyone seeing him now could no longer call him human, as they might have during the first stage of infection. During the explosions and the time spent lying still afterward, he had undergone intense metabolic changes, advancing to the next step of evolution. Now absolutely his entire body had mutated, the claws on his right arm had grown significantly larger, the eye had become even bigger, and a grotesque growth had replaced his head. And yet, human traits were still visible: tattered remnants of clothing and scraps of a human face clinging to the left side of his chest. Two small, underdeveloped limbs could also be seen near the hip area. Roaring, the monster smeared with soot and his own blood headed toward the police station. The tyrant lay face down on the ground and showed no intention of getting up. Of the three, he had taken the brunt of the blast and was badly scorched. On top of that, he seemed to have shrunk, likely having lost a great deal of blood or been thoroughly overcooked. As for the third and Smallstoff, the monsters, his whereabouts were completely unclear. Perhaps he had been thrown even farther due to his lighter weight. Perhaps he had simply been torn apart or vaporized. Whatever the case, the fact remained, he was nowhere to be seen. Another 20 minutes of silence passed before a quiet trickling sound could be heard. The blood left behind by Birkin, which had spilled from him as he departed, began to gather into rivulets and flow toward the prone tyrant. Yet, contrary to expectations, the tyrant seemed to shrink even further. Gradually, the effect intensified, eventually drawing in even the seemingly congealed blood of Umbrella's mercenaries toward the T-103's body. And yet, in the end, nothing happened. Everything fell silent again, and virus-altered crows began cautiously approaching the corpse of the tyrant. But something made them suddenly take flight and retreat. A moment later, with a horrific crunch, a perfectly human arm, albeit pale beyond normal and tipped with claws, punched straight through the tyrant's body. Raising its middle finger to the sky, as if informing God that someone was still alive and very much saying, "Not today," the arm began to literally tear the giant's body apart. Soon, a second, identical limb joined in. After a couple of minutes of struggle, there was an especially loud crack, and punching through the tyrant's torso, the upper half of a middle-aged man with distinctly German features emerged. Much better. I almost died under this hunk of meat, Kane snorted, and it was indeed him. End of chapter. 67, chapter 67. Stretching, I studied the tyrant's carcass with doubt. On the one hand, snacking on it would be useful. On the other, there was no way all of that would fit inside me, especially since I was already full after drinking its blood and eating Birkin's arm. I even had the distinct sensation that I'd consumed more than the big brute actually contained, but at the time I was so hungry that control over my body had slipped straight into the hands of instinct. That hadn't happened to me in a long while, almost a full day. Cutting my way out to freedom, I also practiced what you might call waste-free production, since there was simply nowhere to put the chunks I carved out of the body. I had to eat them. So, yes, one could say I was full. Fine, I'll leave the rest to the birds. The crows had already settled in all around the place anyway, and only once I had finally climbed out of the tyrant's body did I notice a couple of inconsistencies. I had clearly grown taller, though I still remained within human proportions, which was reassuring. I was completely dry, which made sense. Even though I'd crawled out through its body, there was no blood left in it, and I can absorb blood even through my skin. Being bare-chested to the waist wasn't a problem either. The main thing was that the Umbrella Trooper's uniform pants were intact, the rest could be dealt with. What bothered me more was that I was no longer dark purple. To all appearances, my skin looked entirely normal again, not even deathly pale, but rather just a shade lighter than that of a healthy person. Feeling myself over, I came to the conclusion that if I didn't open my mouth too wide or smile, I wouldn't really stand out from humans at all. When I tried to cut myself, I broke the knife. That was reassuring. The properties of my skin were still there. As I understood it, this was my third stage, but it was oddly human. In the reflection of shattered glass, the only things that distinguished me from an ordinary person were my fangs, the color of my irises, blood red, who would have doubted it, and, perhaps, my hair. It had grown far too long, reaching my shoulder blades, and looked as if it had never once known what a comb was. Though that last point was less a difference from humans and more a resemblance to the lower strata of human society. In other words, I'd gone full hobo. I should have called myself Alucard, I said, tilting my head to the side. But what's done is done. I'd already grown used to my current name, and besides, it was less overused. No, the resemblance wasn't complete, but if you put it into percentages, I looked about 80% like that epic bloodsucker. Maybe relatives? Just kidding, of course. It's unlikely anything like that existed in this world before. I am practically a pioneer here. And as for overeating, something really is off. I can feel not just Birkin's blood from his arm and the tyrants inside me. I also have the mercenary's knowledge. Son of a mouse. I need to get Yamada out of there. The second squad went after her. Knowing the nature of an easily distracted scientist, they might just catch her completely off guard. At the same time, laboratory complex beneath Raccoon City. Carefully peeking around the corner, the Four Eyes snapped her head back just as quickly. The encounter with a new umbrella group had taken place at the very spot where she'd first met the tyrant, but this time she was on the other side, and blocking the doors was no longer an option. Holding the image she'd just seen in her trained memory, Yamada thrust her arm out from behind the partition she was hiding behind, assault rifle clenched in hand, and opened fire. Short, clipped commands and curses immediately rang out from the other side, the latter clearly in the lead. Unfortunately, that kind of suppressive fire was nowhere near enough to kill them. Damn those suits. It took almost a full magazine to put down a single opponent, and there were about 15 of them in that squad. With a sigh, the Four Eyes noted that even with her reserves, she wouldn't have enough ammo, especially considering the sniper holed up somewhere who somehow managed to shoot only at weapons. I need to take this into close combat, Yamada realized with sudden clarity. But I'm far from an expert at that, Kane. Where the hell are you when you're actually needed? First, she had to neutralize the sniper, otherwise there wouldn't be any close combat. Then she could burn through the couple of rifles she'd brought along, and once they ran dry, actually engage the enemy. Even if she was worse than some of them in knife work and hand-to-hand combat, the capabilities of the infected would make up for it. The acceleration, though not nearly as powerful as that of the one who had made her this way, proved absurdly useful. Darting swiftly from one partition to another, Yamada mapped out the enemy positions far better than she ever could by simply peeking. Reaching the corner, she had to press herself flat against it, avoiding gunfire from the room. For those positioned to the left of the doorway, she was standing in an easily covered kill zone. But I've got you too, my darlings, Yamada snorted predatorily. And unlike you, I'm protected by more than just a suit. The main thing is not to take a bullet to the head, and even that's not a guarantee. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 68. Chapter 68. Just like last time, the Four Eyes slipped into acceleration, but now she had no intention of sprinting to a new position. Having achieved her primary objective and exposed the sniper's location on the second tier, the woman decided on a rather dangerous trick. Half emerging from her cover, still under acceleration, she emptied an entire magazine into the opponent who had been hindering her. Only 5 bullets made it through the suit's protection, 3 into the shoulder and 2 into the abdomen, but she noticed that only after returning to her original position, with 1 dead sniper added to her tally. Being half dead really is convenient, the scientist snorted to herself yet again. Without relaxing after that fleeting victory, the vampire switched weapons once more, cursing herself for not having taken a larger ammo from the laboratory she'd made her base. She leaned out again, this time only an arm up to the shoulder and part of her head, just enough to see whom she was shooting at. After repeating this maneuver 2 more times, Yamada was left with only her knife, more like a heavily shortened katana, a nod to her ancestors on her father's side, and a handgun. Gripping the cold steel in her left hand, she handled such weapons worse with her right. Apparently Japanese left-handedness had made itself known. The woman lunged forward, knowing she couldn't delay any longer. No armor would save them from a blow delivered with her strength, at least not when it came from razor-sharp steel. The clash with the front line, her blade met no resistance and quite literally split the opponent in 2 at the waist. A reverse slash with a turn, and the second mercenary's head slid to the floor cleanly along the line of his jaw, his body collapsing a heartbeat later. I ripped the wakaizashi with both hands and, with an overhead strike, cleaved the enemy before me into 2 equal halves. Once more I clenched the blade in my left hand, flicking the blood away with a light motion in the same direction. The mercenaries remaining on the first floor began to try to close in on me. The 2 closest moved to flank me from either side, weapons trained, while the mercenaries standing a couple of meters ahead shifted slightly to my left. Did they really think a standard encirclement would work? I'm no longer human, and bullets have very little chance of killing unless they hit the head, and you simply don't have the speed or reaction time for a shot that precise. While they were carrying out their maneuvers, I'd already mapped every one of them. I rolled to my left, coming up on my feet as I severed that opponent's limbs while his body was falling. I split his head. A dash and I was already slipping among the containers and wide vertical pipes, beginning to clear out the mercenaries entrenched there. In barely a minute and a half, only 2 of the entire squad remained on the first floor, and the same number on the second tier. Fortunately, thanks to the faint highlighting I'd begun to see on people after the G-virus injection, I could see them clearly. I quickly peeled away from one of the pipes I'd been using as cover and swept the legs out from under the first, slamming him to the ground. Without breaking my stride, I switched to a reverse grip and cut off the second's arms, using his body as a shield against incoming fire. With my free hand drawn aside, I pierced the first man's head. The remaining 2 on the second level kept firing as they retreated, backing into the corridor. Like they'd get away. I lunged after them, but right at the doors to the corridor leading to the lift I had to slam on the brakes. Damn it, they'd thought of everything. Motion-sensitive explosives. If I disarmed it, they'd escape. I could already see 2 red highlighted silhouettes beginning to rise in the elevator, and I still had to neutralize the charge, then wait for the lift. They'd get away and return with reinforcements. I know the corporation's playbook. It's entirely possible that, thanks to lesser strength but the same genes, I'm now even more desirable than Kane. And they certainly don't need 2 samples, that's bad. And not from Meph or Kane. I'm sure that when they encountered me, they reported everything to their superiors, and it's not hard to predict the reaction of Spencer or those cursed Ashfords. Or of one of the Triumvirate's trusted lieutenants who run the corporation, John Rise. Dealing with the bomb quickly, I darted toward the elevator shaft. Damn it. I couldn't see the fighters' highlights, though the range of that vision is considerable. I'd tested it. Had they already escaped? I didn't get the chance to finish the thought. The elevator doors slid open in front of me. Your carriage awaits, Kane said in a familiar voice, greatly changed, but still unmistakable. But how? Jumped down the shaft, into the cab from above, and they were there. He nodded toward the 2 bloodless corpses behind him. Looks like I was late, and you handled almost everyone yourself, Kane continued, sounding as calm as possible, looking even more human than I did. Right now I've only got one question left: what the hell is happening to me? To the lab? I asked, already savoring the prospect of fascinating research and unusual analyses. To the lab, he confirmed somberly, looking at me. Apparently something had shown on my face. End of chapter. 69, Chapter 69. Yamada and I hadn't gone very far when, upon entering the 2-story room where my partner had previously been having fun, we became witnesses to an astonishing scene, and its direct participant. The spilled blood of Umbrella's mercenaries stirred, came alive, and surged toward me. I have a strong suspicion this was at least the second time something like this had happened, otherwise I can't explain how the knowledge of another squad of fighters ended up inside my head. Amazing. I've never seen an ability this strange before. No, I told you even after the first analysis that you had the rudiments of PSI powers, but for those seeds to grow into something fully formed in such a short time, that's astounding. On the other hand, the price is no small thing, just a life, the 4 eyes blurted out. I stepped toward the descent from the second tier to the first and felt something brush against my leg. Thrown off by both what it could be and by the very fact that I'd felt a touch at all, I tried to step back, tripped over myself, and tumbled down the stairs. As expected, there was neither pain from the fall nor any sensation of the cold steel floor. I couldn't even say whether it was smooth. Yes, I look alive now, but I still am not. A pitiful imitation. It stings. Looking down at the spot where the sensation had come from, I saw the blood reaching for the blood of the mercenaries Yamada had killed on the second floor. I could have guessed that right away. Hey, are you alive down there? Very funny, Yamada. Of course not. I snapped. I'll allow that it's just a habitual phrase, but I want to be alive again so badly. I'm sick of this absence of sensation, except for hunger and fleeting satiety. The taste of flesh and blood, that's all that's available to me. Even pain, unlike the tyrant, Birkin, or nemesis, whose pain is dull but present, I don't feel it at all. I struck the floor in irritation as I pushed myself up. A dent remained. All I felt was the fact of contact. Yes, hell isn't in the afterlife. It's here. Even if for some, this might be paradise. I like my new powers, but I'd give up most of them without hesitation just to be alive again. Right now, I envy Wesker more than ever. He managed to remain alive while still being a monster, like me. Hey, Kane, are you planning to stay on all fours much longer? You'd better try to weaken the flow of blood heading toward you or stop absorbing it altogether. What if you burst? She smirked. I'm kidding, of course, but won't there be oversaturation? And I want to. At the same time, we'll see how well you can control this power. After some time spent in tense attempts to do anything, attempts that at least distracted me from my bleak thoughts, I had to admit it, nothing. I had absolutely no control over this ability of mine. All right, given the lack of material, we'll consider the experiment a failure. Still, where does all that even fit inside you? Don't glare at me like that. I'm not planning to dissect anyone. Even if a walking problem like you would be better off shot on the spot so you wouldn't suffer later, and others wouldn't be at risk. She frowned at the end. I didn't quite catch that last part. Is it really so bad that I'll now be absorbing an enemy's blood even from a wound or cut without being distracted from the fight? I asked as I followed my partner farther down the tunnel toward the laboratory. No, from that angle, it's perfect. What's bad is that you don't control this PSI power at all. Yamada snapped. And what's so bad about that? It'll do everything on its own. I shot back, without raising my voice. Are you an idiot? What if, say, I get wounded near you? Get it now? And that's the most basic example. Here's another. You said you're planning to get out. I don't intend to rot in this city either. Imagine we're outside, in the real world. A CAF. An airport. Doesn't matter. Someone suddenly pricks themselves with a pen or cuts themselves with a knife at a CAF. Doesn't matter either. Do you know what will happen when everyone sees that poor bastard's blood rushing straight toward you? Panic. Real, full-blown panic. And there will be two targets under the gun, the one whose blood is behaving strangely, and the one it's rushing toward. And identifying the inhuman will be absurdly easy. Just make another person bleed and watch the same thing happen. The picture Yamada painted made me shiver involuntarily. Yes, this would be very unpleasant. The ability is undeniably powerful, but when you look at it from the other side, the downsides are indeed numerous. End of chapter. Hey, it's a new week. Don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 70, chapter 70. So, what else can be said? Your capacity. When you absorbed 2 hunters, and don't glare at me like that. Yes, while you were gone I ate them. They tasted just like the iguanas my former squad and I had to live on during one mission. Back to the point, when you swallowed them, you bloated pretty badly. You even walked sluggishly, and your belly was almost round. Right now, there's enough blood sloshing around inside you to account for at least 3 dozen people. And nothing at all. You walked in here exactly the same as you were after that peculiar feast. Everything has a limit, which means you too couldn't have taken all of that into your body without changing. And yet I see the opposite. Conclusions? Either this amount is negligible for you, in which case I can't even imagine how many victims you need for sustenance, first-rate ones, mind you human, and the rest, say, evaporates through your pores or otherwise leaves the body. Or you have a horrifying metabolism, and you'll need to feed often, or your body will start consuming itself, to put it bluntly. Let's just assume that both options are wrong. After all, new biological species are still poorly studied by the corporation, so I have even less information on the matter, even less than less, since I wasn't exactly on the scientist's payroll, and as for the G-virus and what comes out of it, I won't even start. I'll be a pioneer there. PSI abilities, meanwhile, are scientifically proven and substantiated, and are even detected by our instruments. That same Hypnose on Sheena Island has the makings of certain abilities in that direction. Don't lick your lips, we need to get out of here first. Oh, come on. So I can't even dream anymore. Go on, I'm listening very carefully. I waved it off under the Four Eyes' displeased look. So then, even if we assume that you're fine and your body won't kill itself, we'll find out from the tests. Get comfortable for now. I'll find a syringe. Remember where we are. All it takes is for you to walk along one of the main streets where the zombie fighting was heaviest, and the sheer influx of blood evenly coating the area could simply tear you apart. Besides, the infected themselves, the most primary ones, have plenty of wounds and the like in their bodies, and after killing and eating a victim they don't bother wiping themselves off, so you could drain them dry from a distance. Sounds useful, doesn't it? Yamada said with a sly edge. I'm already guessing where the catch is. If that's the case, and I start siphoning blood from ordinary zombies at range, then considering their numbers an entire city, it's better for me not to appear anywhere near them. What's more, since misery, our virus contains elements of the G-virus, and now the virus itself as well, we're constantly evolving. And how crowds of desiccated zombies would affect me I am afraid to even imagine. Borrowing the Four Eyes' knowledge, I analyzed the situation myself. Bravo. You've started using your head, commendable. But the G-virus is only in me, you vile liar. Some hero you turned out to be. The Four Eyes suddenly flared. Were you worried? Don't flatter yourself. She snorted. Then let me put you at ease. I ignored her retort. It's in me now, too. As for how you knew it wasn't in my blood when I left the lab, you can guess. The hunter and I lost a fair amount of blood while we were beating the hell out of each other. And you, like a true scientist, collected samples. Am I right? Of course. The Four Eyes didn't even deny it. More than that, there were unmistakable notes of pride in her voice. Damn it. Yamada stared in astonishment at the syringe needle, bent into the shape of an L. After examining it for a couple of seconds, she silently straightened it with her fingers and, much more slowly this time tracking every movement, hers and mine tried to draw my blood again. Oh, I completely forgot. Somehow I even got scared to admit that I've now become resistant to wounds from blade weapons, if they're inflicted without acceleration or reinforcement. As for bullets, I'm not sure yet, but most likely they'll still get me, same as before. Meanwhile, the scientist raised her gloomy gaze to me, with a clearly readable threat in its second attempt had the same result. Maybe from the tongue instead. I suggested. Better yet, you'll tell me what happened to you while you were gone, Yamada said, seemingly calm, yet unmistakably menacing. Oh, all right, I'll tell you. I was going to tell you everything anyway before this randomly moving blood knocked me off balance, I said, closing my eyes wearily. End of chapter. 71. Chapter 71. So, after getting hurled outside and first under a car, then under a truck, and then into an explosion, I noticed a couple of interesting survivors. A girl with some very specific skills, and a police officer who had somehow managed to stay alive up to that point. And both of them were young, not particularly experienced, and hadn't gotten themselves tangled up in anything truly serious before. I'm not even talking about something like this. Your team's experience with that kind of situation was practically a one-off as well. I began my story. Hold on. Stop right there. What truck? What explosion? The Four Eyes cut me off. All right, I'll go into more detail. And I did, laying everything out, including my thoughts and observations, while deliberately omitting any knowledge, even distant, of the canon. I don't want to be a prophet, especially now, when everything is going to hell. It's entirely possible that Birkin and Nemesis, who weren't at the blast site, underwent their form of evolution, meaning the canon was already broken and would only continue to diverge. At least the Raccoon City canon. As for the rest of the world, I hope things will more or less align with what I know. Pity that my knowledge is far from complete. If only I'd known I'd end up here, right? I see. That explains why you claim the G-virus is in you now, but we'd better confirm it. Stick out your tongue. And without waiting for me to comply, the moment I parted my lips, Yamada drove the needle into my not yet extended tongue, took the sample, and vanished to analyze it. And you hold this for now. Without looking, she shoved a vial into my hands, water inside, with a small piece of foam floating on the surface. What's this? I asked, taking the container. TCH. A simple way to check whether you've developed any other PSI abilities. Put it on the table and wait until the styrofoam settles. Then try to affect it mentally. If it works, you've got either psychokinesis or telekinesis. If it doesn't, there are two possibilities: either you didn't try hard enough and can't control the ability yet, or you don't have those powers at all. Yamada explained this without even turning toward me, fully absorbed in processing and collecting data. Got it. Thanks, I said to the girl's back. At first, I simply stared at the piece of styrofoam, trying to hypnotize it into moving, probably with my eyes. For the next 10 minutes, I stretched out my arms, imagining energy flowing through them, even though I neither saw nor felt any such energy. Then, without changing my position, I spread my arms apart, picturing one pushing and the other pulling that damn piece of styrofoam. After half an hour of futile attempts, I was ready to admit that I didn't have those talents, and that the only thing I really seemed capable of was controlling blood. But then, crack from behind me. I turned around and, I believe I can fly. I drawled with a questioning intonation. I didn't have the emotional capacity for anything more. What are you? The Four Eyes turned around, having just finished. Well, we need new samples. That's all you care about? I asked skeptically, twitching my wings. No, we also need to compare your genetic code with mine. I wouldn't want to end up acquiring two rudimentary appendages as well, the Four Eyes replied. What? Why rudimentary? I protested immediately. At least the blood issue could be crossed off the list. Apparently, I'd needed a lot of it back then to recover from my injuries, and the restructuring of my body hadn't been complete. But here I've already used the mercenary's blood to finish the transformation. Why? Even if the bones in your wings are hollow and suitable for flight, the rest of your body definitely isn't. It developed to withstand impact, so more likely than not your bones have increased density and strength. You're heavy, too, and since you're dead, you don't feel air currents, meaning you can't maneuver or adjust in flight. At best, with acceleration, you might manage a brief glide a couple of meters above the ground, or glide down from a height. Consider them rudimentary. More trouble than they're worth. And they give you away, too, the Four Eyes explained her reasoning. At least now we know where all that blood went. Look at the size of these two attachments on my back. I tried to find at least one upside to the situation. The wings really were about as useful to me as a fifth leg on a dog, and they completely ruined my human appearance. By the way, about the blood, the Four Eyes said oddly. Then, with a swift movement, she was suddenly right beside me, pressing her lips to mine. Well, do you feel anything? Maybe. You didn't chew the hunter very well, I replied thoughtfully. Idiot. On the other hand, that confirms the hormones didn't activate. And, the pervert slid a hand between my legs. Congratulations, Sayuri impotent. Two don't understand. My voice fully reflected my emotions now. It was frightened. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 72, chapter 72. You're even more undead now than you were when we first met. That much I can say for certain, Yamada said, and seeing that I still didn't quite grasp it, decided to speed up my understanding of my new condition. At the first stage conditional, of course it might already have been the second, with the first having passed before we even met. You were neither alive nor dead. At certain moments, you could even be called alive, insofar as that term applies to someone like Birkin, who is technically alive yet no longer himself. Your form was in a constant state of uncontrolled change. At the second stage, I became more alive than dead, on the contrary. But the changes acquired order and direction and slowed down. You could say I had a kind of pseudo-life, like that already mentioned scientist monster or nemesis, or, if we scale it down, a hunter. All of them can be conditionally called alive, but definitely not human. Absolutely correct. And at the third stage, you somehow went in the opposite direction, outwardly becoming more human, while at the same time becoming more dead than you were in the first stage. This state has plenty of drawbacks, of course. Even sensations which were already limited and only briefly accessible after consuming the blood of the living are now gone. But on the other hand, you've essentially frozen in place. There's no longer any need to fear rapid mutations, they'll proceed much more slowly. Also, from what I can tell from your DNA, you don't need to worry about necrosis or a lot of other things. One might say you've been put into a cryo chamber. Your time has stopped. You won't age for the dead, that's impossible. You won't rot or deteriorate, you've avoided natural tissue degradation, not mutations, and a lot of other things along those lines. Though yes, that's an awful lot of downsides. And the wings, Yamada shook her head. What about the wings? They're perfectly ordinary, basically like a bat's. Thank God they're not connected to my arms and function independently, I replied, far from inspired by these new prospects. I'd rather be unstable but conditionally pseudo-alive, than stabilized but dead. Sure. Like a bat's, Yamada drawled mockingly, then shifted sideways in a single motion and tore something out from the base of my wings. A feather? What? What now? Yes, you understood correctly. They're only partially membranous. At the base, there's plumage similar to a crow's. The Four Eyes stunned me. Ah. They warned me as a kid not to eat all kinds of garbage. Didn't finish digesting a crow before the changes, and here we are. Otherwise, I'd be showing off some beautiful bat wings right about now, I said mournfully. And why aren't you complaining about why they're like this at all? Why not fully crow-like, for instance? Yamada asked, putting on a show of concern. Forgive me, but I'm not completely clueless about my origins. Judging from what I'd seen in the earlier results, it wasn't hard to figure out that I was created with bat DNA mixed in. So separately, I should probably say thank you to the scientists who made me this way. I sighed sadly, and at that moment, a half-groan, half-howl echoed from the direction of the elevator. Looks like it worked. Though they took their sweet time. Birkin's back. The former corporate mercenary said anxiously, immediately moving toward the table with her equipment and grabbing the rifle lying just to the side. No, not at all. It's just that my little experiment turned out to be a success, I said with satisfaction, standing up and heading lightly toward the source of the howling. Have you completely lost your mind from grief? At least take a weapon. I shot Yamada a sideways look, as if she were a clueless blonde. No offense, but according to the corporation's documentation, I qualify as a weapon myself. And I always have knives and pistols on Methoff. I did lose some of them during all these adventures, I replied without turning around, sensing almost with a sixth sense how my partner fell in behind me, weapon at the ready. When we reached the corridor by the lift, we saw two humanoid creatures. Dark gray skin, completely bald, gaunt bodies. Their cheeks looked as if they'd been eaten away, allowing their mouths to open unnaturally wide. Both the upper and lower jaws gleamed with two fangs each, the lower ones slightly shorter, the upper correspondingly longer. They were also somewhat hunched, and their arms were clearly longer than a human, 7 not reaching the floor, but easily reaching their knees. What stood out as well were the sizable, straight claws on their hands and the curved ones on their feet. The only way to identify the two of them was by the remnants of their suits and body armor. End of chapter. 73, chapter 73. Is this what I think it is? Then why am I not like that? Yamada asked in a trembling voice, clearly startled. But to her credit, despite her emotional state, the rifle she had trained on the two of them didn't waver. Ah, right, weary undead. She wouldn't tremble in principle, unless the subconscious or conditioned reflexes decided to have their say. Yes, it is what you think. But not exactly. I drained them completely, but in return gave them already altered blood mine. You can see the result for yourself. I snorted. I'll call this species a ghoul. And now, the most important thing, checking obedience. Attention. No reaction. Bad, but they weren't showing aggression either, which meant the experiment wasn't a total failure. Maybe I should try a different approach. Sit. And would you look at that, they sat. Stand. They sprang up from the sitting position instantly, in a way the living never could. Give me your paw. They did, all four of them. Both ghouls, and promptly collapsed onto the floor. Yes, their intelligence is now at the level of a dog, if not lower. A pity, but they'll do as cannon fodder. Bravo, Yamada's mocking voice rang out, accompanied by her half-hearted applause. Now explain to me why we need these two burdens, especially ones that are valuable to Umbrella, my partner said with clear displeasure. Oh, believe me, we need them. Just not right now. So while we're gone, they'll guard our section of the lab. And I'll turn the rest those whose blood served as the catalyst for my final transition into the third stage. It's a shame we'll have to wait until they're turned and only then move out. We've already delayed far too long. What are you even talking about? Yamada didn't understand me. An army, or rather, a squad of ghouls with high physical parameters. What's more, made from former military personnel, who knows what their bodies might pull off on reflex alone in combat, will be useful to me for obtaining the progenitor virus DNA from its direct carrier. We won't be able to defeat her, even with our current strength, but drawing a little blood? That, yes. And the game is worth the candle. And I've already told you about my reasoning. I want to see how the civilians' turning will play out, and I've chosen a very fitting target, but it may already be too late. By now, we might have missed our chance. Ideally, we should already be there. And yet, there's still the turning to carry out, and the order for the ghouls to hole up in that room. Pity there's no guarantee they'll stay put if living humans show up. They seem obedient, but if bloodlust applies to them, they're unlikely to follow the command, and then I'll lose Claire and Leon, completely derailing the canon. Still, giving the order is better than not trying. As I said this, I was already on the first level, once again forcing myself again and Aga in to make shallow cuts and pour small amounts of blood into the corpses through the wounds, having first made sure there was no trace of their own crimson fluid left inside them. I don't need vampires or anything like that here. And how reluctantly the skin yields even to my claws, which are unquestionably stronger than knives. That, too, increased the time cost of my plan. Fate once again adjusted my plans. The ghouls I'd left unattended lost interest in the corpses that had already received a dose of my blood and began enthusiastically devouring the bodies that hadn't yet undergone transformation. As a result, by the end of the operation I had 2.5 dozen puppies instead of more than 3 dozen. On the plus side, the changes in the corpses that had already cooled down progressed faster. Either I'd gotten the hang of it and refined my interaction with the bodies, or the time elapsed since death somehow affects the incubation period in the victims. I processed the first two almost immediately, while they were still warm, whereas those in this room had been dead for nearly an hour. There's also a third possibility. When I worked on the first ones, I myself was still in an unfinished stage of the new evolutionary tier, whereas now I've, supposedly, completed it, and that's why the process goes faster after all. I'm changing them using my own blood. Some time later, the Four Eyes and I were already emerging from the sewers. Fortunately, the route had been cleared earlier by the mercenaries who'd passed through. Once on the surface, we moved across the rooftops. I was wary of taking any other route, given my blood absorption. At last, the ravaged street came into view. Wasting no time on detoring through the buildings, I dashed straight across the rooftop and reached the spot where the helicopter had nearly crashed down onto the floor below. Yes, it had been one hell of an explosion, and this section of wall and floor/ceiling had already taken a beating. Carefully crawling along the wall, I ended up in the corridor and dashed straight for the police chief's office. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 74, chapter 74. I burst into the office and see, some distance to the left where the door to the private quarters is located rather than the working office, if I'm still remembering the canon correctly, 2 illuminated figures. One is short, while the other comparable in size to the Four Eyes. Yup, Claire is currently persuading the daughter of one mad scientist to join her and not get herself into trouble. What can you do? Maternal instincts have kicked in. And straight ahead, slightly to the right, behind the wall, that very same bloated figure is descending, and judging by the vertical, relatively rapid drop, by elevator. Damn it. He's about to turn my test subject into a stuffed trophy, and on top of that, he'll run into Birkin. Tough choice. I need to intercept him before that happens, and I even know how. Follow me, we're almost late. I barked, then dashed to the wall and began quickly searching it. I don't have the opening sigils, but neither did the chief. No, I'll concede they might have existed, and what Claire found could have been a spare set in case the originals were lost. But that doesn't interest me. I'm not looking for a lever or anything like that. I am looking for the seam of a hidden door. Found it. I crowed when I spotted a narrow gap in the wall of suitable dimensions. What? The Four Eyes didn't understand. The door. I snapped, extending my claws and setting to work on a forced entry, overpowering the mechanism in a couple of moments. Whatever you say, my strength has increased. Go in and set it back in place. I'll deal with the shaft, Yamada tossed over her shoulder as she lunged ahead, grasping my intent on the fly. Smart girl. I wasn't wrong choosing you. I doubt I'd have meshed so well with someone like Bertha, or that we'd have achieved the same level of mutual understanding. While I returned the door to its original position and checked that I hadn't actually broken anything, my burglar had already picked open the elevator shaft. Seeing that I was finished, she made an inviting gesture. I didn't bother chiding her for excessive theatrics at a moment like this. Obviously, these were echoes of the personality fragments she'd absorbed during her first feeding. No point tormenting the girl further over it. I jumped. Yamada, unlike me, having developed along a somewhat different path, couldn't boast the same bodily and skeletal durability, so under acceleration she crawled down the sheer shaft, rapidly working her limbs. Landing atop the elevator car, I slithered inside like a snake and emerged into the corridor. Straight ahead was a wall to the left, a dead end, so right it was. A couple of meters, then another right turn, a Z-shaped bend, then straight, and there he was, a frightened fat man, or rather a heavy-set older gentleman with magnificent sideburns and a mustache, yanking out his gun. A girl lay slung over his shoulder. Judging by the absence of illumination, she was already well and truly dead. Time to begin the intimidation act. Hissing, wings flaring, I charged him, accelerating at the last second and feigning a grab. But just like the tyrant, I can't properly control acceleration, so instead of the police chief himself, I snatched the girl's body. With a terrified expression, the police chief bolted for the door to my left and locked it from the inside. No, a steel-clad door is serious business, but if I'd needed to, I could have smashed it in. Right now, though, the main thing was not to cross paths with Claire, Sherry, and Leon. Hoisting the girl's body more comfortably, I headed back to the elevator. Womanizer, the Four Eyes declared, snorting skeptically at the sight of the loot. Make up your mind, am I impotent or a womanizer? One doesn't preclude the other. Come on, let's head up. And she vanished into the elevator shaft first. By some miracle, we managed not to run into Claire, and soon found ourselves back on the roof, where I latched onto the neck of my lab rat. I've lived to see the day calling a truly gorgeous blonde with a C-cup chest a lab mouse. Though we'll see what comes of her. I already had one civilian once, also a blonde. Leaving a bit of blood behind so there'd be something to infect, I settled into wait, as did Yamada, who was reading something intently. Had she really managed to liberate something already while we were in the police chief's office? What are you reading? I asked. Nothing was going to happen for the next 5 to 10 minutes anyway. Oh, just some dirt on a certain irons. And along with it, material that could hit Umbrella unpleasantly. Not fatal, and they could cover it up quickly, but if we find more information like this, that would be simply wonderful. Yamada narrowed her eyes predatorily, looking at that moment uncannily like a well-fed panther. End of chapter. 75. Chapter 75. I see. Yes, I had planned to sink the corporation through others' hands and by the letter of the law, as I've already mentioned, but only partly. The finishing blow, I want to deliver with my own hands. I couldn't help myself. Let me take a look too. Here. And a small stack of documents passed into my hands. Let's see what we have here. To Brian Irons, Chief of Police of Raccoon City. Our laboratory in the mansion was destroyed by the traitor Albert Wesker. Fortunately, his actions did not have a significant impact on the progress of our research. The only remaining threat is the surviving members of the STARS unit: Redfield, Valentine, Burton, Chambers, and Vickers. If it becomes clear that they possess any evidence against us, eliminate them immediately, but only in a way that makes it look like an accident. Continue monitoring the progress of their investigation and make every effort to avoid any publicity. Annette will continue to serve as your contact throughout this operation. William Birkin. Next. Although the mention of Wesker is pleasing, so at the very least, he's present here. To Brian Irons, Chief of Police of Raccoon City. As payment for your services over the past period, I have transferred $10,000 to your account, as agreed. Development of the G-Virus is almost complete. Once all work is finished, I am confident I will be accepted onto the corporation's board of directors. We must act with extreme caution. Redfield and the remaining members of STARS are still attempting to obtain information about the project. Continue to monitor them and block all their attempts to enter the underground research complex. William Birkin. TCH. Selling yourself out for pocket change. I thought you were playing in the big leagues. This is almost funny. I overestimated you. You're much smaller than I originally thought. To Brian Irons, Chief of Police of Raccoon City. We have a problem. I have learned that the corporation's directorate has dispatched spies to Raccoon City to steal the results of my G-Virus research. I do not know how many spies there are. However, I cannot allow my work to be taken so easily. Conduct a thorough sweep of the entire city and detain all suspicious individuals under any suitable pretext. Report each detention to Annette. I hope this precautionary measure will help. I will not allow anyone to steal my G-Virus research. No one, not even the corporation itself. William Birkin. Now this is magnificent. I suspect this happened shortly before my arrival in the city. And what information Birkin, if he were still human, would be buried by this 100%. Even if that last message fell into the corporation's hands, they'd strangle him themselves. Next page. A letter. Dear Chief. Below is my report on the events that occurred prior to the explosion of the mansion. On July 23, the STRS Bravo team, led by Captain Enrico Marini, was dispatched to investigate a series of bizarre murders that took place in the Arkley Mountains. After contact with the team's helicopter was lost, the STRS Alpha team, under the command of Captain Wesker, was sent to search for them. We located the wreckage of the Bravo team's helicopter. After landing, we were attacked by ferocious dogs. Later, we discovered that these dogs were, in fact, zombie dogs, as they did not respond to our gunfire at all. After Joseph Frost was killed, we were forced to retreat to a nearby mansion. While investigating the mansion, we learned that it was, in fact, a secret laboratory belonging to Umbrella Inc. All researchers had been transformed into zombies by exposure to an unknown virus. We also discovered that Umbrella was using the laboratory as a testing site for a new bioorganic weapon. We found the bodies of several team members, including Enrico Marini, Kenneth Sullivan, Forrest Spire, and Richard Aiken. We believe that this bioorganic weapon was responsible for all these deaths. We later learned that Captain Wesker was, in fact, working for Umbrella, and that both the Alpha and Bravo teams were used as live test subjects for the bioorganic weapon. Wesker betrayed us. Only a few of us survived that nightmare. However, since the mansion was destroyed in an explosion, there is no physical evidence to prove the existence of Umbrella's secret laboratory or the bioorganic weapon. The appearance of zombies in the city is extremely similar to the zombies we encountered in the mansion. We suspect that Umbrella is connected to all of this in some way. To uncover the truth and eliminate the zombies roaming the city, I propose that we begin a formal investigation into Umbrella. Thank you for your attention to this extremely important matter. Chris Redfield. Alpha Team, STRS. Too much in fact. A soldier's vocabulary rather sparse. Still, the information is useful. This particular letter, if handed over to the government, could cause the corporation a great deal of trouble and Wesker as well. For that alone, this whole raid can already be considered a success. Wait, what's this? A page from Irons' own diary, and crumpled at that? Yamada, I'm impressed you even managed to check the trash bin in his office. And there I was, fussing with the doors, nothing at all. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 76, chapter 76. September 23rd. It's all over. Those idiots from Umbrella have finally done it. Despite all their promises, they destroyed my city. Soon the streets will be crawling with zombies. Maybe I'll become one of them myself. And if that happens, I'll kill everyone in this city. September 24th. According to plan, I managed to sow serious confusion within the police ranks. I made sure that no one could enter the city or leave it at least alive. I personally oversaw the sealing of every possible escape route. A few survivors are still trying to flee through the lower levels, but I'll make damn sure none of them get out. September 26th. I've reconsidered my stance on the survivors in the lower levels. I've decided I'll finish them myself. Less than an hour ago, I shot Ed in the back. I watched him writhe in agony on the floor, lying in a pool of his own blood. The expression on his face was simply wonderful. He died staring at me, his eyes wide open. It was an intoxicating sight. I wonder if the mayor's daughter is still alive. I let her escape to prolong the pleasure of the hunt. Yes, I will savor my new trophy. Frozen forever in a pose of my own choosing. A deranged lunatic. And after reading this, I dare to call myself a monster. Unlike some people, I don't take pleasure in death. Unfortunately, for me it's merely a harsh necessity. Maybe I should kill him myself, make the world a cleaner place. No, that line of thought leads nowhere. I shouldn't take on the prerogatives of a god. There's already one of those around, and I more or less remember what he'll become, though what will become of him, I don't know. Still, Irons needs to be dealt with, that much is certain. But not as a man. He doesn't interest me as a human being, I want him as a G-parasite. The question is how to catch the right moment without killing Claire, or better yet, cutting her off from our reckoning altogether. My thoughts were interrupted by a soft moan. A moment later, the girl lying on the rooftop dressed in a white ball gown, her light hair had lost its straw blonde hue, taking on a grayish, ash-pale tone, instead faded, corpse-like. She sat up and cast a clouded gaze around, fixing the yellow-red irises of her eyes upon me. Defective after all? Who are you? State your name, I said calmly, making an effort not to show my disappointment. Maybe all wasn't lost yet. Me? Who am I? She echoed. Catherine Warren, daughter of Michael Warren. She spoke after a long pause, as if recalling something long forgotten. She can talk and she seems coherent. Still, too early to celebrate. Let's continue testing. Who is your father? What position does he hold? I asked, phrasing the question in different ways perhaps that would be more effective. She frowned, as though struggling with her memory. The mayor. He's the mayor of Raccoon City. That's right. Good girl. Do you remember what happened to you? I continued, already mapping out the course of the conversation. Yes. I was running. I was being hunted. The city was infected. They were hunting me, not zombies. Brian. He killed me, yes, Brian Irons killed me. Her voice grew more confident with each sentence. The Four Eyes listened closely, making an effort to remain unobtrusive. Correct. You were killed, and to everyone else, you are dead. Then again, almost the entire city is dead now. I gave you a new life, one superior to a human's. I decided you were worthy of it. Behind the girl's back, the Four Eyes was gesticulating furiously, signaling that I was being far too lofty and pompous. That's if I censor some of my partner's more expressive gestures. Meanwhile, the blonde, now more platinum than anything, listened intently, trying to make sense of the new information. I'm glad to be alive again. Excellent. Now tell me, what do you want? I asked. I want. She hesitated. To drink, and to take revenge. I didn't want to die, and also, can I go with you? Kane, I said, introducing myself, recognizing the difficulty the half-vampire who was gradually growing more confident in her speech was having. Can I go with you, Kane? She finally asked. Well then. That's only your decision, though I'd expected to guide you toward it a bit later, assuming it would be more difficult. Still, there's something about your sluggishness and openness that I find appealing. We'll test you in combat later, and everything will be just fine. If even my very first victim turned out to be a true monster, then this time the result should be something far less defective. Of course, May. And you can be less formal with me, I replied after a brief pause. Now it was time to deal properly with the police chief. We'd fulfill the girl's wishes along the way, give her something to drink, and give her revenge. End of chapter. 77. Chapter 77. After quickly returning to the police chief's office, we ran into a small problem. Claire was already heading downstairs, so we had to act fast. By the elevator, judging from the glow, Sherry was still standing there, and she was someone we shouldn't involve yet. More than that, it would be better if she didn't notice us at all. Fortunately, the ceilings here were high enough, and it was possible to access the elevator shaft from above. With acceleration, we could slip past unnoticed by a 12-year-old girl, give or take, maybe even younger. There was no reason to scare her, especially since I had my own plans for that particular individual. I'd rather not spoil the first impression. So what was the problem? Simple, Catherine. There was no time to teach her how to move along the upper routes, and self-training would take far too long. We could have left her here, but there was a chance we wouldn't be coming back this way. All in all, I'd have to carry her on my back. Sorry in advance for the inconvenience, I murmured quietly, making sure the girl in the next room wouldn't hear us. Miss Warren didn't get a chance to finish. I scooped her up with my left arm and pressed her against me while using my other limbs to shift our position in space. The Four Eyes merely rolled her eyes and silently joined me on the ceiling. Acceleration, and I tore through the reinforced mesh at the top of the elevator shaft with my durable body, flashing past the room with Sherry in a heartbeat. A jump down, catching my precious cargo in my arms so she wouldn't bounce on landing. She was the most fragile of the three of us, and then a landing on top of the elevator car, now without a passenger. A faint sense of déjà vu crept in. I slid inside through the dented roof of the elevator and set my burden back on her feet. Wimp, Yamada hissed softly as she landed beside us, now waiting for her regeneration to finish. It wasn't that she'd been completely wrecked, but her legs had buckled. Acceleration had done its job, and durability, well, that was something I'd boosted only for myself. She'd been spared my fate during the first few hours, hell, throughout the entire time. Brute, Catherine shot back, gracefully fixing her hair. Ahone Blonde was clearly growing more spirited, and the unprepared Yamada nearly collided with the doorframe. Both of you, quiet, I hissed, quickly moving down the corridor just in time to see Claire enter a steel door, crossbow at the ready. A crazy idea immediately took hold. Climbing back up to the ceiling, I began to pry it open above the doorway. No one would ever think to look there. And getting out through it would be impossible unless you could move along walls or happen to have a stepladder handy. I passed the chunks of masonry to the Four Eyes, who quietly stacked them by the wall. We did all of this in near total silence, so as not to miss a single sound from behind the door. Not bad. Not bad at all, miss. But no one is leaving my city. Everyone will die anyway, we're all already doomed. Judging by the voice, it was Irons. And one look at Catherine clenching her fists confirmed it. Calm down, Chief. You're not yourself. You're bleeding. What happened here? That, naturally, was Claire. Shut up. I'm fine. You don't understand anything. And the click of a weapon. Interesting, who had whom in their sights. Too bad I couldn't peek yet. I'd made an opening, sure, but it was either stop and watch, losing the chance to widen it, and with it the moment with the exposed chief of police, or keep expanding the passage and rely solely on sound. I chose the latter. Those umbrella monsters destroyed my beautiful city. Footsteps followed. Judging by the outlines, the police chief was advancing on Claire, but she quickly moved away from the door and deeper into the room. Thankfully, I could see the lighting even through the walls. How could they do this to me after everything I did for them? The chief sounded hysterical, or maybe not. Even from the diary excerpts, he'd struck me as unhinged. So those entries were true. You worked for the corporation if you're not planning to let me go anyway. Satisfy my curiosity. I want to know what I'm supposedly dying for. What is this G-virus you mentioned in your diary? The girl was playing her part well after all, she clearly had no intention of dying, judging by the weapon tucked behind her back. And it seemed she'd swiped the rest of the diary before the Four Eyes ever got to it, otherwise, it would be in my hands now. I'd love to take even a quick look at it. So it's with you, you filthy little brat. Fine, doesn't matter now. It doesn't matter anymore. I'll grant your last request, because I am a noble person. This virus turns people into powerful bioorganic weapons, hundreds, no, thousands of times more powerful than the T-virus. The police chief advanced on Claire again as he spoke. Yeah, right, as if it were that much. If it were, I'd have torn Nemesis apart with my bare hands, the same Nemesis pumped full of the T-virus, all while casually juggling a tyrant on the side. Realistically, we're not talking about hundreds or thousands of times stronger, more like tenfold improvements. Sure, I'll allow that spontaneous mutations can push things further, but even if you look at Cannon and Birkin's final form, you're talking maybe 100-fold, and that's mostly due to sheer size, roughly the scale of a building, give or take. And thank God for that. Otherwise, I'd already be dead. I've crossed paths with the esteemed William before, and if he'd really been that much stronger than a tyrant, I wouldn't have moved on to the next stage of evolution. I'd still be lying there, smeared evenly across the street by his pipe. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 78. Chapter 78. That damn genius William Birkin was responsible for the project. I'm sure you've already had the pleasure of meeting his little daughter. What was her name again? Right, Sherry. Somewhere behind me, two surprised gasps came from the girls, who had just realized exactly who it was we'd slipped past upstairs. They were echoed by a similar gasp from an even more shocked Miss Redfield. And that monster, you must have noticed, is yet another creation of that unrestrained genius. Umbrella will definitely try to cover this up. No, judging by what happened to City Hall, they've already started. But I don't want to die as a key witness. In any case, those are just my worries. Farewell. But instead of a shot, or even Twow heard Irons let out a pained cry. His figure, visible to us thanks to the illumination, Yamada had already admitted that this ability had finally manifested for her as well, and judging by Catherine's face as she watched the two people move through the wall, it was obvious she had it too, suddenly doubled over, as if he'd been punched hard in the chest. Everything would have made sense except Redfield couldn't have done it. She was a good 3 steps away from the chief, and at the moment of his scream she hadn't even moved. My chest. I can't anymore, it hurts, it hurts. Brian screamed at the end, but quickly choked off, and the smell of blood reached me. That was the moment I finished dismantling the opening wide enough for me to squeeze through, the largest of the 3 inhuman beings. A quick glance at the girls below, and I noticed Catherine's nostrils flare as she caught the scent of blood. Right, weary, basically overwhelmed by hunger until our first victim. Or thirst, in her case. I dipped halfway into the opening so I could see everything and be ready to drop down from the other side, while still remaining unnoticed, at least until I chose to reveal myself. What I witnessed was a pale Claire, who only by some miracle did not retch, for she had never faced anything like this before. Even though zombies should have dulled that reaction somewhat, otherwise, I'm afraid she would have folded in half. And then there was something that resembled a snake, a toad, and a leech all at once about the length of an arm. It swiftly gnawed its way out through Irons's chest cavity from the inside and, spilling free, crawled downward, breaking through a thin grate. If I remembered correctly, that passage led through the sewers straight back to the same laboratory complex. To Claire's credit, she pulled herself together fairly quickly. After surveying the room, she hesitantly approached the opening, carefully stepping around Irons's corpse. She looked around once more, took a deep breath to steel herself, and began descending the spiral staircase after the monster. A brave girl. That was the moment I decided it was time to slip into the room myself, which I did with ease. I landed on the floor on the other side of the door and unlocked it. That panicker Irons had locked it the moment he scared Claire away from it. Looks like I really had rattled him. I scanned the room. On the left was me. In the center stood a massive butcher's table covered with various instruments. There was even an old-fashioned saw. To the right of the table was a row of 3 open cabinets, where different animals and beasts floated in formalin, sometimes only in pieces. The police chief had quite the charming hobby. An identical cabinet stood in the corner directly in front of me. In the opposite corner, diagonally across from where I stood, lay the police chief's body and the descent downward. I opened the door and let the girls into the room, and the moment Miss Warren saw the corpse, her restraint snapped completely. She lunged at it, almost snarling. It was understandable. Until the G-virus serum either way, did she even still need it? Ahem. Anyway, without the serum, she would have a very hard time controlling her hunger. And here, its first manifestation coincided with her hatred for the man whose body lay before her. That combination blew her brakes clean off. I can't believe I ate zombies with the same enthusiasm, the Four Eyes muttered as she came to stand beside me, training her weapon on Catherine to steady her nerves. What's this? I was practically cultivating spiritual kinship with Korea, eating dogs. And they even had stuffing inside. Explosive stuffing, at that. I shuddered. Meanwhile, Catherine somehow managed to consume the corpse bones and all and, I think, even the clothes. Yeah, we'd never let ourselves get to that point. Then again, the police chief was extremely nutritious at the moment. The G-parasite had already left him, but residual effects should have remained. So if Catherine had needed a G-virus sample before, now she definitely didn't. Fa2 ate him. Catherine said incredulously. The last thing I needed right now was a hysterical breakdown. The first hunger is unfortunately like that, I explained in a soothing tone. And don't look at me like that. You're stronger and faster than a human, but everything has its drawbacks. Ours is thirst for blood, and the first time, flesh as well. But admit it, compared to us, being a bloodsucker isn't so bad next to being a zombie. If it helps, that bastard contained traces of the G-virus, so now your development will be smoother and more controlled and the downsides have just dropped significantly. As I spoke, I tried to remove her blinders right away, so she wouldn't be disappointed later, when things became far more serious. It would be easier for me to get rid of her now, before any attachments formed, than in that distant future. End of chapter. 79, Chapter 79. I don't want to interrupt you, Kane, but I had nothing to do in the corridor, so I quickly checked her analyses. Fortunately, they're not nearly as complex as mine, let alone yours. She didn't need this virus anyway, since you already carry it, and it was you who turned her, Yamada said. Did you really have to say that right now, in front of everyone? You couldn't have whispered it to me later. All this does is sharpen the conflict with Catherine. Or was that exactly your goal? My angry look was completely ignored by the Four Eyes, who was studying Catherine with the detached air of a vivisectionist. I see, but I didn't have a choice, right? That wasn't really might was the virus, wasn't it? The girl asked hopefully, lifting her yellow-red eyes to me. Yes, but only this once. From here on out, everything you do will be your own choice. And don't wrinkle your nose, you won't be able to live without blood, and our bodies don't accept human food. Except for purely meat-based stuff, and no, soy doesn't count, I said, deciding not to nurture whatever illusions she still had for the same reasons as before. Well, I think later I'll be able to. Later, Warren nearly whispered at the end. That's better. I remember telling myself something very similar at the beginning. Might as well calm her down now, show a bit of concern. That'll only help our relationship, and for proper teamwork it's better to have decent relationships to begin with. All right, this really can wait, so calm down. Everything's fine, I said, giving her a light half-hug. Unlike me, she should be able to feel it, as one who has now tasted human blood, and not only blood. A couple of minutes later, Catherine pulled herself together, either demonstrating a fairly strong character or already showing mental changes brought on by the virus. But I didn't let the girls who had gathered react to the noise and head downstairs. But why? Warren asked, genuinely surprised. Yamada, after a few seconds of thought, took a couple of steps back on her own. One look at her eyes made it clear she understood. No point getting involved when the job can be done for you. We even risk getting caught in the crossfire, and not so much by the monster as by the survivor herself. And judging by the sounds, she's packing some serious hardware. Do we need that? I explained briefly. So what do we do now? The blonde asked, clearly unhappy with the situation, though she accepted the logic. You can practice climbing on any surface for now. I'll wait, I said, nodding toward Yamada so she could help explain how to extend claws deliberately rather than purely on instinct, and how to use them to move along walls and ceilings. Better to have one girl teach the other, maybe that'll improve their relationship at least a little. Right now, the two of them were snapping at each other like they had something unresolved. Meanwhile, I'd listen to the sounds of the fight. Or better yet, go down myself using the same proven method. Honestly, I was starting to feel like some kind of cockroach, constantly occupying ceilings. No given these wings, more like a fly. And who cares that the wings don't quite fit the image? I hadn't even started descending when Claire appeared at the base of the stairs, having come up and breathing heavily. I quickly sprang away from the opening and slipped into the corridor. After hissing at the girls, I settled back onto the ceiling in a dark corner. Luckily, the lighting here was much worse than in the room, and you could stay hidden on the ceiling just fine as long as you didn't react to a survivor first. Fearing exactly that, and also the possibility that someone might fall, Yamada and I positioned ourselves on either side of Catherine. For control. When the girl quietly asked what we were doing, she was given only the second explanation. Yamada and I already understood everything anyway, and I don't know about me, but in the former mercenary it was plainly written all over her eyes. Why did I even start collecting people around me? No, back when I was several evolutions weaker, there was logic in it. Alone, I would have died hundreds of times over by now. But at this point, the only justification for this blonde was scientific curiosity, apparently partially inherited by me when I turned Yamada. The Four Eyes herself had already proven her usefulness, her candidacy was beyond question. And honestly, two people are more convenient than one. Claire, who had lingered in the room for a bit, suddenly broke into a run toward the elevator, clearly agitated about something. Right, Irons' body was gone now, and someone had decided Sherry was in danger. Funny how that worked out. At least Claire was too preoccupied to notice us. And now we go down, before she comes back, Yamada and I said almost in unison, dropping from the ceiling in sync once again. I immediately had to catch Catherine as she fell after us. So you didn't practice landing, did you? I snorted. She hasn't even really learned to climb yet though I don't see what's so hard about it, Yamada grumbled, already heading toward the descent while I set Catherine back on her feet. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 80, chapter 80. Descending, we found ourselves on a spiral bridge shaped like an lonely mirrored, curving the other way and leading to an identical ascent on the opposite side. Not far from where we came down lay a grown monster. Well damn so it really had grown that much. I'd thought that memorable moment in the game had been exaggerated. Slightly smaller than a tyrant, sprawled before us was something that looked like a human and a leech fused together an inflated human, at that. Only the right arm, torn from irons, and the leg on that same side were almost human, the rest was a bona fide monster. An elongated neck, bleary eyes, and an overall appearance as if someone had forgotten to pull skin over ID's rib cage even sat atop muscle and sinew, as though serving as armor. Yamada, take samples. They'll definitely be useful and grab a couple of vials. Having a reserve is always good. I bent down, gauged the angle, and tore out the heart but the moment I swallowed a single bite, my body doubled over and promptly rejected it. Either it was inedible, or I had a problem. What's wrong? Four Eyes asked, alarmed and surprised, though she didn't look up from the samples. Catherine simply placed a hand on my back in silence. I don't know how it feels for the living, but to me her palm was neither hot nor cold. Even the retching brought no sensation, only a faint discomfort in the process. I've got a nasty suspicion and it just turned into certainty. I added the second half of the sentence when I noticed that the monster's greenish blood was calmly being absorbed into me, and I felt no urge to vomit. If it was poisonous, it wasn't to me. Conclusion? I'd switched to a liquid diet. On the one hand, that was good, no more feeding on corpses. On the other, my already meager menu had shrunk to choosing blood types. Oh, so now you're officially just a bloodsucker. Four Eyes remarked, having noticed everything, trying, in this way, either to cheer me up and distract me or to jab at me. More likely the former, but she played it convincingly enough that, judging by Catherine's frown, at least one of us took it as the latter. Looks like it. I'll be feeding on the blood of virgins now. I tried to smile, forgetting about my fangsa. It probably came out more like a snarl. You'll die out weary in America. Four Eyes laughed back, matching my tone, and even Catherine let out a small snort. You're cruel. I'll leave you say, for Africa. I might have a chance to survive there, at least on animals. I snorted, drawing in what Four Eyes hadn't managed to collect. A shame, but now I'd have to settle for 2 vials instead of the 3 or more I'd hoped for. I'm thinking about the wrong things. I'd just absorbed someone else's blood again, which meant there could be consequences. This was G-parasite blood, after all. Better not to think about it. I nodded gratefully to Catherine for the show of concern. She simply didn't know how else to help and headed for the stairs on the other side. A short climb later, we emerged into a surprisingly tidy section of sewer. To the right and beneath us was a raised platform. To the left, a fenced descent into the water and steel gate leaves marked with the index XDR. Can you handle it? I cast a glance at Yamada. Of course. I'll need a couple of minutes, so don't interfere, she said, pulling out her electrolock pick and hopping over the waist-high railing. Really, why bother walking all the way around the room? In the meantime, we'll keep training. Go on, Kate claws out, climb up to that tier, and tell us what's up there and where the path leads. I decided to put the downtime to use. While Yamada worked on the lock, Miss Warren had already managed to get the hang of the new way of moving, accelerating both within it and while remaining in the normal plane. That was more than enough for her. Against ordinary enemies, this plus superhuman strength would suffice. Against anything more serious, even I wouldn't save her, at least not in a straight fight. Even now, I had doubts about the outcome against Birkin or Nemesis. As for Lisa Trevor, I planned to bury her under bodies and just take a blood sample, could even inject it directly, using the already tested method. A few minutes later, my thoughts were interrupted by Yamada's joyful exclamation, followed by the illuminated silhouettes of 2 figures beginning their ascent toward us along the spiral stairs. Let them go first. I'm wary of changing canon and even more so of running into Birkin, who should be colliding with his daughter within the next half hour. Let these 2, more precisely, Claire, clear the way for us. That's exactly what I told the girls, and the 3 of us climbed up to the upper tier. Our place was taken by Sherry and Redfield, who quickly dropped into the water and were already heading for the entrance when a roar suddenly echoed from our side. As one, we turned our heads to the right and saw Birkin advancing toward Yuzand. In what a state. Assuming he'd gone through at least one stage of evolution, I was completely right. Annoying. The situation itself, too. If we jump down, the humans will spot us and we'll have to make adjustments to the timeline. If we stay here, it's either a confrontation with this monster or fleeing along the upper routes in an unknown direction, with only a ghost of a chance of finding the right turn and tailing the 2 below again. End of chapter. 81. Chapter 81. Run. Claire screamed, practically diving through the gates as they slid open, dragging Sherry with her. Judging by the splash, the drop was about a meter. After them. I reacted instantly, before that monster could limp its way over to us. The girls jumped first. Since I was the sturdiest, I drew the short straw and brought up the rear, which meant I took a crushing parting blow. That's fine. We'll settle accounts when I get my fill of blood, Trevor, I thought as the force of the impact hurled me into the wall. My right wing had been shredded into tatters after meeting the monster's horrific claws. Still, he had barely torn the skin. The wounds were shallow and already closing before my eyes. The left wing, which took the collision with the wall and then the weight of the rest of my unexpectedly heavy body, was simply broken in about 6 places. How wonderful it is not to feel pain. Hurry, at least cover yourself. With those words, Four Eyes, rummaging through her bag, tossed a lab coat over my shoulders, clearly taken back in the laboratory beneath the city. And you couldn't give it to me earlier? With my wings folded, they're barely visible under idea, couldn't have missed that. Ah, whatever. Thanks anyway. I slid my arms into the sleeves and left it hanging open as I spoke. Moving along the ceiling into the next room, one that differed slightly from what I remembered from canon, or maybe my memory was just faulty, which was more likely, given the sizable gaps I hadn't sat with this masterpiece in a long time. It's a miracle I remember anything at all. We caught sight of Sherry being swept toward a side channel by rushing water. She was just the right size and weight for it. Claire, by contrast, hadn't even been shaken by the torrent. The girl let out a small squeak, and I slipped down after her, accelerating sharply and signaling the girls to follow Claire. This was the perfect moment to make the child's acquaintance. I caught the frail little body in my arms and gave Sherry a friendly nod. Her heart must have dropped into her heels. The important thing was not to smile, otherwise it would be obvious I was a monster. Actually, I needed to get ahead of this somehow from behind. If you looked closely enough, the wings were still noticeable. Sherry, where are you? Are you okay? Claire's voice rang out from above almost instantly. Yes, I'm here, I'm me, but she didn't get to finish the ever initiative. Claire cut her off. Sherry, wait there. I'll be right there. Hide and don't go anywhere. Then quick footsteps faded deeper into the tunnel. Another person, the girl finished belatedly, her voice dropping half a tone. That's not true, I am not a person. Help. I'm an angel. The scream cut off. I was stared at like I was sick in the head. What? Improvisation was never my strong suit, and Vector had been nothing but a mindless executor. I simply couldn't come up with anything better in those few seconds. You're lying. Let me go. She declared right in my face with childlike bluntness, still in my arms. She could have at least agreed until I let her down. She wasn't breaking free anyway. I didn't even notice her struggling. Done. And I'm not lying, look. I set her down, quickly reached behind my back, and plucked out a feather, showing it to the astonished Sherry. She was a child, so she might believe it. Black, she murmured. Someone, it seems, is either into the Bible or into some rather peculiar cartoons, though I don't recall there being cartoons of that sort in America. Well, I'm not in heaven, am I? But don't be afraid, I'll help you and take you to meet that girl. Okay. I said simply. You have fangs. She planted her hands on her hips. Adorable. If I were a monster, I wouldn't be talking, I'd have attacked you already. Back when I was holding you, I lied. Okay, I believe you, the little girl said in a tone like a priest absolving a terrible sinner. Wading forward knee-deep for me, waist-deep for her, we reached a ledge. The height of this lip to our left was up to my thigh. How had she climbed it without me? Or had she really been waiting for Claire? Scooping up the girl, who squeaked first in fear, then in delight, I leapt up onto the ledge in a single bound and crossed a corridor 3 or 4 meters long, landing us by a steel door on the right. I set her down carefully and opened the door in one smooth motion. A storage room. Or something like it. There were plenty of shelves stacked with paints, duct tape, and assorted junk. Stepping inside and placing myself in front of the girl, I listened to the shuffling footsteps. I already feel like a babysitter. On the other hand, it's better to establish rapport with her now. When she grows up, she'll become a fairly powerful Shanice if I remember correctly. That also means I'll have to allow her mutated father to infect her. But the investment in the future will be worthwhile, and I can improve my relationship not just with Sherry, but with Claire and Leon as well. The latter won't gain anything special, but he'll be extremely promising as a friend, and I had particularly big plans for the former. I just need to make sure Claire ends up imprisoned on Rockford Island, and only then step in to rescue and offer help. And to ensure my help is accepted, it's better to win their trust already now. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate Power Stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 Power Stones. 82, Chapter 82. A bit underhanded, sure, but survival, and the desire to carve out a better place in this world, are worth it. So, silencing the squeak of my conscience, I continued my guardianship of Sherry. Skirting the shelves on the right, we didn't turn left there. It was plainly visible that we'd only end up making a circle. Besides, an ordinary zombie was already shuffling in our direction, more precisely, toward Sherry. We went straight again, edging around another rack piled with junk, and only then turned right. The left side was completely blocked, and there didn't seem to be anything useful over there anyway, while straight ahead we'd already reached a wall. A short room. On the far side we found steel lockers on one side and a ventilation shaft on the other. TCH, couldn't we have come across something better? Up you go first. I'll keep watch, I said with a hint in my voice, though I wasn't sure the girl would catch it. By the time she was halfway into the vent, the zombie finally shambled up to us. You're all so damn slow. A light flick of the back of my hand and the poor bastard was literally sent flying backward. The infected slammed into the heap of junk on the blocked side, toppling it and collapsing beneath it. No, that didn't kill him, but it didn't look like he'd be getting up anytime soon. I, on the other hand, was in mild shock. Yes, I could have thrown a zombie before, but with both hands and a lot more effort, at least in my first form. So just how much stronger had I become? Found something to be proud of. If I'd tossed a tyrant like that, then maybe. But a zombie? And the weakest one at that, the basic, starter model of the infected. Nothing to brag about. Especially since it's completely useless to me. Basic infected don't even react to me anymore. What happened? Sherry's voice came from the other side. Nothing much. Just brushed off an infected, I said without lying in the slightest. Hurry up and get over here before it catches you. And don't leave me alone. It's scary here. Looks like I'd been misunderstood a little, but whatever. Diving into the shaft and feeling it widen enough to follow the contours of my body, I cursed the designers of this ventilation system for making it so damn small. Finally, with an awful screech, I crawled out on the other side and looked around. TCH. We were inside some kind of round pipe, and judging by Sherry's grimace as she pressed herself against me, it didn't smell too good in here, and it was probably dark as well. Meanwhile, along the ceiling scurried the creatures I'd compared myself to more than once lately: cockroaches. Everything would have been fine, except for their size. As big as rats, at least. That's what the T-virus does. Don't be afraid. It's okay, I'm here. Let's go, I encouraged Sherry. It was worth remembering that she was already showing remarkable courage, not just for a child, but in some situations even for an adult. Still, every survivor who makes it out of this city is going to need mandatory sessions with a psychotherapist. On the far side of the pipe we found a passage identical to the one we'd come through before I crawled through it. Naturally, Sherry went first. I lingered behind, crushing a few cockroaches and watching as liquid from them stretched toward me. Now even I felt disgusted, but I wasn't about to run from blood, was I? Even though I wasn't entirely sure it was blood, I didn't remember insects having any. Then again, these roaches were clearly far from normal, so why couldn't they have developed a circulatory system? I hadn't even started climbing when Sherry screamed from the other side. Acceleration and a forward lunge. That was my mistake. Because of it, I crumpled the shaft like an accordion and got stuck halfway out, hanging upside down, waist caught, over a gaping hole in the floor. Judging by everything, this was a trash chute. And down below, along with most of the garbage, went Sherry. I hope she's at least alive. Otherwise, all this effort was for nothing. Bracing my hand against the edges of the shaft, I yanked my legs free, still gripping the rim, then tucked my knees and twisted until I was upright. Letting go, I fell after the trash and the daughter of one mad scientist. I landed near Sherry's head. She lay sprawled atop black garbage bags, clearly unconscious. And behind me, I heard shuffling footsteps. How sick I am of these zombies. I turned and saw Birkin pivoting toward me. Wait, he already infected her? And is this really happening here? Well, judging by the green veins glowing under the red light, yes, he has infected her. Damn it, there's no way back up now. What if, because of my presence, he lunges at Sherry? Grar. Looks like this monstrosity remembers me. Fine then, it's settled, we'll play. Come here, baby. I snarled, unable to hold back my grin. The monster advanced toward me at an unhurried pace, half submerged in water. And there was a strange sensation as if someone else was also heading this way from the passage behind me, but there was no time to look. Who knows what the monster in front of me might pull? I need to face it one on only, and I have that chance. End of chapter. 83. Chapter 83. I lunged for Birkin and, quite literally wrapping myself around him, burned every ounce of acceleration I had, first yanking us backward, then jumping upward, praying with absolute sincerity that we'd make it. A brutal impact at the end of the arc slammed me into the wall. The force tore me free of the monster, but Birkin was clearly unfamiliar with any kind of combat technique, so he didn't pull the limb back. Calling it an arm would have been generous. I grabbed it, and carried by the momentum, flew backward into the wall spine first, dragging Birkin along before sliding down. The wall couldn't withstand a double impact like that. The brute crashed through to the other side, into a small room about 6 meters across in both directions where water also flowed, though here it barely reached ankle height. I crawled in after him. Now we can really have some fun. I dashed forward and a blow crashed down from above, his right rake of a hand, tipped with monstrous claws. And, while the claws didn't skewer me clean through, as I'd feared at first, but the sheer force drove me into the floor and made something inside my body crunch unpleasantly. What kind of setup is this? He's supposed to be way slower than me. In one fluid motion, bracing on my hands, I fired both feet into the growth that had replaced his head. The monster staggered slightly and then, grabbing my recoiling legs with his enormous paw, smashed me into the wall like a sack of potatoes. Just how much stronger did he get since last time? I got back up, slipped under a wide swing from the monster, and landed a rapid triple strike to his torso, then another punch straight into the human face that had migrated to the left side of his chest. Once again, it only rocked the creature and drew out a thunderous roar. I slipped past the counterattack between his legs and immediately spun into a kick. Zero effect. Another kick from the opposite side, before the beast could fully turn. Locking my hands together, I brought them down onto his spine. Still nothing, if you didn't count yet another roar. For someone who'd just demonstrated impressive reaction speed, Birkin turned far too slowly. I followed him, methodically raining blows onto his back. A sudden pivot over his left shoulder and I was sent flying by a strike from his left arm. That one was much smaller than the right and far more human in shape. Got it. He's clumsy on the side with the glaring eye arm, but he can turn quickly from the opposite side. Smashing my head against the wall of the room, I spring back up and leap to the left, dodging the crushing blow of his monstrous limb. Otherwise he'd pin me in the corner, and there'd be nowhere left for me to fly. The instant my feet touched the floor, I pushed off again, closing in on the monster's right side. That arm may be more dangerous, but it also his weakness. From that side, he couldn't turn well. Circling constantly around the monster as it struggled to face me, I kept up a relentless barrage of strikes. On the third loop, Birkin paused briefly and used what little gray matter he had left, attempting to skewer me on the claws of his hand. The bastard figured out he should swat me after all. The moment I hopped back, my opponent immediately turned toward me and advanced himself. Fine, let's repeat the trick. I dashed in, shifted left, let his rake slash past, and slipped behind him again. But this time, straightening up, I extended my claws to full length and started tearing into his back. A dozen accelerated strikes did nothing. Roaring, the monster simply leapt backward from a standstill, flattening me beneath him, slamming me into the wall and then adding his full bulk from the other side. I hadn't managed to twist away in time as he turned, when a blow from his left arm crashed down on me. Now it wasn't a blow. He had grabbed my head with that left hand, holding me fast, and with a violent thrust drove the claws of his right into my body, tearing through stomach, ribs, and what seemed like the heart. For my second stage that would have meant death. Back then I was still partly alive, and a strike to the heart could have been fatal. Now, though, I felt nothing, only realized that control over my body had worsened because of the damage. Then the monster, still gripping my head, hurled my body across the entire room into the opposite wall. He charged after me and, before I could slide down, smashed me deeper into the wall with a single blow from his enormous arm, completely depriving me of any chance to move. Like being poured straight into concrete. After that, his massive arm began to rain down blow after blow, each accompanied by his roaring. But after pounding me for a while and getting no reaction, what's the point of roaring if I can't do anything anyway, he turned and headed for the exit. I'd have loved to stop him, but the only things left intact were my rib cage and my head. So I stayed there, embedded in the center of that monstrous dent, until Birkin disappeared from sight. Meanwhile, beneath me where Sherry was now an enormous mass of red light appeared, so vast it was impossible to tell what or who it even was. I don't remember anything like that, but for the moment I made no move, obediently waiting to see what would happen next. I needed time for my body to regenerate. End of chapter. 84. Chapter 84. Sherry. An exclamation rang out from below. A woman's voice, if I'm interpreting it correctly. At that moment, I was busy performing gymnastics, or rather, learning how to move on 4 broken limbs. That massive red blotch wouldn't leave me alone. Behind it, neither Sherry nor the one who had shouted Claire, and it was definitely her voice, were visible. Right after the cry came a splash of water, Claire's startled yelp, and at the same time that enormous blotch in my vision began to move, taking on the outline of a gigantic reptile. No, judging by the length and shape of the snout, an alligator. A lizard's snout is shorter, and a crocodile's looks like a Roman numeral 5, so this was definitely an alligator. Meanwhile, Claire's figure shifted to the right from my perspective and, judging by the outlines of the red glow, to the left from hers. The massive reptile followed her into a fairly narrow tunnel. Hopefully Yamada and Kate wouldn't run into trouble because of that. When the enormous bulk vanished completely into the side passage, I finally limped my way to the edge of my improvised ring and dropped down, more fell than jumped. I landed on my already somewhat recovered legs and on my right hand, then pulled myself upright. All right. Primary objective, take care of Sherry. She seemed to be feverish, judging by her slightly raspy breathing. Or maybe I was mistaken. I could see that she was infected, yes, but the incubation period was supposed to be fairly long. 5 hours, maybe more. I lifted the still unconscious Sherry into my arms. No point letting her lie around on trash, and sliding into the water was a bad idea too given the water level, she'd simply drown while lying down. From the direction of the reptile's snout came an explosion, and judging by the outlines, its face had been completely blown apart. What on earth did Claire do to it? Guess I'll ask her now. Might as well introduce myself while I'm at it. Meanwhile, the footsteps of the fearsome conqueror of sewer alligators were drawing closer. Hopping down from bags full of garbage onto solid ground knee-deep in water, but solid nonetheless, I headed toward the tunnel entrance straight ahead, about 3 meters away. With firm footing beneath me, it would be easier to push off if needed. Who knew where this conversation might lead? The water didn't bother me, so I didn't need to climb up anywhere, but Claire would have to come down. I wasn't going to carry Sherry forever. She could take custody of the precious cargo. And honestly, I figured we'd be parting ways for a while anyway. Now I was far more interested in the alligator's carcass, and in the missing Yamada and Catherine. I could replenish myself after that costly fight and wait for my companions. Sherry. Claire burst in without even surveying the room and immediately spotted me, grabbing for her gun. Am I really that scary? I don't think so. Mostly human looking. The leathery wings fold neatly, so you can't see them from the front, and from behind they're only vaguely outlined thanks to the coat. The coat itself, well, yes. Whatever remained of its pristine white was purely symbolic now. It's dark gray, but that mostly makes up for the fact that it's completely soaked, since against this background the dirt and everything else is hardly visible. The extra holes, unfortunately, were impossible to hide. The lab coat was living out its final hours. Black pants, the same old corporate mercenary uniform issue. Worn, but sturdy and comfortable. I had no intention of smiling and baring my fangs, and with my eyelids lowered, the color of my eyes was hard to make out. Who are you? What did you do to Sherry? Let her go. Now. She aimed the pistol at me as she spoke. Ah, sorry, but you're aiming at the wrong place. A bullet to the heart doesn't scare me. My name is Kane Nightroad. I only helped her. I didn't do anything to her. And are you sure about that last order? I nodded slightly toward the water. It's up to our knees. If she's lying down, she'll be completely submerged. I didn't shield her all this time just to drown her with my own hands. I said it very convincingly. You might be right. Claire hesitated. Then put her on that pile over there. And don't make any sudden moves. I'll wait until she wakes up, and then we'll see exactly how you helped her. There was a clear edge of threat in her voice. Easy enough, I replied casually, setting the girl down on the indicated heap of junk. Good. Claire shifted her stance, gestured no, ordered me to step back, then went to Sherry. She checked her pulse and let out a relieved breath when she realized the girl was alive. Now stay right there, or I'll shoot, she warned, still keeping me at gunpoint as she began shaking up the daughter of a scientist, a spirited lady indeed. No, this wouldn't do. If Sherry woke up, she might blurt out something unnecessary before I could properly position myself in Claire's eyes. And after that, separating from them would be even harder. Looks like I'd have to improvise. Sorry, but I'm bowing out here. At those words, Claire stopped shaking the girl, who was already showing signs of waking, and turned fully toward me. Her gaze hardened as she fixed me in her sights, keeping me at gunpoint. What do you mean by that? She demanded, trying to slip away from the scene of the crime. She was clearly trying to provoke me, hoping I'd start denying things and talk too much. Wrong approach. Your brother didn't teach you interrogation very well, little Redfield. End of chapter. 85. Chapter 85. I just want to have time to take my revenge and not put you in danger while doing it. You see, I'm infected with a prototype virus. As I said that, I stopped shielding my eyes and, deliberately, slightly opened my mouth as well. The pistol in the girl's hands wavered for a moment, then steadied again. Handsome, right? For now, I still have control, but I don't know how much time I have left, or what comes next. My goal is to get to someone in the corporation, and I don't have much time for that. So, with a clear conscience, I'm leaving the girl with you. I couldn't abandon her on her own, but with a protector like this, I nodded toward the alligator's tail protruding from the tunnel. I can leave Sherry here. By the way, I think she's infected too, just with something else. When she fell into the trash compactor, I lagged behind a bit, and when I got down here, I saw the monster retreating. I see, thank you. I'll verify your information, but is there really nothing that can be done? If Claire's first words referred to the information about the Birkin family, the last was clearly about my situation. It almost made me feel ashamed to deceive her. Though I wasn't deceiving her. I really was infected with a prototype. And if we didn't get out of the city, not only me, we were all doomed, with maybe a couple of days at best. And my goal was the truth as well. Those vivisectionists would answer for everything. No, it's not a pure T-virus, otherwise I'd already be a mindless zombie, and there's no vaccine for it. And you can't really call it the G-virus either. I don't resemble the monsters it create anymore. But the changes are continuing. I can feel them. I'd rather not harm a child or a charming lady. I shrugged. Oh really? It's not that easy to harm me, Claire replied lightly. And you'd be safer with us. Besides, judging by your own words, we need to go to the local laboratory anyway. Maybe we could find a vaccine for you too. She tried to reassure me again. Now I really was starting to feel ashamed. Not that easy. I went into maximum acceleration, crossing the 3-meter distance between us in a single, fluid motion. Are you sure? Even now, I'm already dangerous. And I don't know how long I'll be able to remain human inside or out. Claire stared at me with widened eyes and swallowed nervously, finally grasping the real danger I posed. Even if it were only my speed that was so monstrous, she herself, judging by her expression, could hardly believe it. I don't want to lose control and end up killing you both. Maybe after I get my revenge, if there's time left, I'll look for a vaccine. But that will be later. I speak with my eyes closed, as though weary. I understand. Good luck, Kane. Claire calls out, already speaking to my back. Well, that was that. We'd met, made a relatively positive impression and most importantly, if I really did lose my human appearance later on, I'd have proof that I was still me, citing this strange virus that hadn't touched my mind. Why not? Wesker had something like that. Almost. Thank you. And good luck to you and the girl as well, I replied without turning around, leaping up onto the higher tunnel floor where the alligator's corpse lay. Now it was clear why its blood hadn't flowed toward me. That carcass was easily 20 meters long from its mangled head to the tip of its tail. Apparently, my attraction didn't work at that distance, and only its head had been damaged. I accelerated again and lunged toward it, practically plunging into the pulpy mess. Control over my body finally returned. Before that, I'd felt like some kind of cripple, one leg limping, torso almost immobile, my head unable to turn to the left. Birkin had done a good job knocking me down from the clouds. Continuing to draw in the blood, most of which was clearly going toward regeneration, I stepped back a little and sliced into the softer section of its scales with my claws, where the heart should be. Oh, almost my size. Perfect. Working my claws even harder, I carved out an opening and, more to steady my nerves than for any other reason, took a breath, plunging inside and settling in. Through the existing circulatory system, I began pulling every last drop of crimson fluid from the monster's body. I don't know how long that little pastime lasted, but by the time I dragged myself out, now this was real overload, though I drained the entire monster. Sherry and Claire were gone from the fairly wide range of my illuminated vision. Instead, 2 other women had appeared. I told you it was him sitting there, Yamada said, crossing her arms over her chest. Apparently that counted as a greeting. Well, I'm here. But where were you two? Claire made it here without you. And yes, she's the one you were supposed to be escorting. I mirrored the 4 eyes pose as I leapt down, landing squarely opposite them from the slit carved out before the feast. Well, you see, Catherine started. Spiders, Yamada said simply, giving a brief shrug. And there it was, the difference between a professional, who sums up the situation in a single word, and a former civilian. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 86, chapter 86. Big ones? And yeah, don't lie. Even if they were huge, you couldn't have been delayed that much because of them. With your training and your new capabilities, you could handle even a nest of giant insects. I asked without changing my posture. Bigger than a large dog, closer to a pony. They wouldn't have delayed me much on their own, but here's the problem. They moved along the walls and the ceiling. Claire didn't notice the first 3, and then those bastards reacted to the nearest targets. We had to eliminate them quietly, trying not to draw attention. That slowed us down. Firearms are way too loud for something like that. Afterward, we had to move carefully, and with a bit of lag our charge was checking the walls and ceiling, and we had a real chance of being spotted. Toward the end, one nasty thing decided not to waste ammo and just ran. So we had to have fun with the insects all over again. I almost earned myself a phobia. When we finally dealt with that problem, it turned out there were already 2 light sources ahead, both clearly female or maybe men with very slender builds, and they were heading in different directions. We decided not to split up, and let me guess, you picked the wrong one. I cut Yamada off with a smirk. After my words, her jaw muscles visibly tightened. Yes, came the short reply. Ha ha ha. And here I was thinking I was the unlucky one. You can skip the part about doubling back to the other figure. I can picture it well enough, especially considering that the actual target had already run far ahead by then. And while you were searching for the route, the light source was probably already outside the range of the ability. That's how you ended up here and managed to spot me. Am I right? I decided to speed things along. Listening to their wanderings through the sewers didn't particularly appeal to me. In short, yes, Yamada confirmed. From Kate's side came only a brief but energetic nod. So who was the other figure? I asked, already suspecting the answer. You won't believe it, Annette Birkin. Don't look at me like that. Killing her would have been pointless, and dragging her along at the very least, it would have been inconvenient for me to move with her, especially while tailing Claire. And Catherine hasn't fully mastered her abilities yet. As for raw hauling power, our squad doesn't exactly have any. Yamada spread her hands helplessly. I am not hauling power. I shot back. All right, let's move already. I hope no one's suffering from hunger before we've even left this monstrosity behind. The answer was a pair of negative nods from both women. Someone, apparently, had already snacked on spiders. No sooner had I started moving than mocking snorts came from behind from the former mercenary, followed by a quiet ah from the mayor's daughter. I glanced sideways at the girls. They were staring at me. Apparently so. I lowered my gaze, assessing for myself what exactly had changed, and caught their attention. I'd finally stopped looking like a dystrophic mess, and my ribcage had grown denser, subtly reshaped closer to that of the hunters. I'd eaten too many reptiles. Still, that seemed to be the end of the changes. Done admiring? I asked, a hint of mockery in my voice. Yeah, it suits you better like this. And if I'm understanding correctly, it'll be harder to get to your heart now. But that kind of densification, it's not just a result of excessive hunter consumption and absorbing that monster's blood. It's also a defensive reaction of the body. That's what underlies most changes and evolutions in beings like us. No, it's not full-fledged evolution, but you could call it an add-on to your current form. Something must have triggered it, though. So tell us, Kane, what were you doing while we were gone? Yamada quickly followed the logical trail in the right direction, and two demanding gazes fixed on me. Acquiring extra ventilation holes from Birkin's new evolutionary stage, I replied with a shrug. Could it have gone any other way? Four Eyes asked rhetorically, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling. Is that the Birkin Yamada told me about? Catherine asked with interest. Yes. There aren't any others here, at least not male ones, I replied, continuing forward. A jump down into the already tiresome trash-filled hall, then across to the other side and slightly left, until we reached a stone staircase. I checked that the girls quietly discussing something among themselves were following, then climbed the stairs and entered the purifier's control room. So where to next? Yamada asked, looking around with interest. There's only one option. See that ventilation shaft with the huge propeller and a pipe as tall as a person? That's definitely the way to go. Deduction. The Four Eyes tried to needle me. You could call it that. That, and the wet footprints children's and women's leading that way. While someone was studying the instruments and figuring out what they were, I was looking for more down-to-earth clues. What can I say, we have different training, Miss Scholar, I snorted, telling the honest truth. Vectors were drilled in basic situational awareness like this, while Yamada was our engine of progress. Then let's go, Kate shrugged, letting everything else go in one ear and out the other. Not a bad approach, really listen, and pick out only what truly matters. End of chapter. 87, Chapter 87. I head toward the pipe in silence, simply yanking off the obstructing fan. Crawling between the blades would be awkward, and with one careless move I'd tear it off anyway, so why bother suffering? The passage is fairly short, about 3 meters long. At a copy of the previous propeller, I bend 2 blades outward, creating a gap wide enough to crawl through. Which I do, ending up in a tunnel with water up to my knees. Oh, familiar territory. This is where we smashed the spiders, and look, their carcasses are still there, Yamada said, landing beside me. Then lead the way. I let Four Eyes go ahead. She turns left and passes a side passage with a high floor, and therefore dry, explaining that it leads back to the station. A brief stretch through a corridor with no branches but plenty of sharp turns takes us past spider corpses, indeed only slightly smaller than miniature horses. Then we descend a sloped ramp without steps, going a bit lower. Accordingly, the water level rises to our waists. Straight ahead to a grate on the left and onward, since the grate had clearly been forced open long ago, apparently during Claire's first pass through here. Moving forward, we reach a small dry landing and a door directly opposite us. We climb up and find ourselves in a corridor buried deep in the earth, reinforced with iron braces. Now we switch, Yamada suddenly says. Why? I don't catch on right away. Because earlier this area was blocked by a high-pressure water flow. Any attempt to get here would have turned whoever stood on that threshold into an amorphous heap with shattered bones. That's why we haven't been here yet, though we did see 2 figures, one of them definitely male, somewhere on the other side. Four Eyes explains briefly. 2 figures? Leon and Ada Wong? Quite possible, but how, if they didn't shut off the fountain? Or is there a bypass? Whatever. Not important right now. Fine. I'll take point. Fully understanding why they're letting me go first, I agree. Why not? I'm sturdier than the girls, so it makes sense for me to take the brunt as the one up front. We move again, now in a new formation, and enter a room with a train platform minus the train itself. Are we supposed to walk the rails now? Well, logically, yes. Supposedly Leon and Ada ran into Birkin on the train. I hope the first 2 made it out alive, while Claire and Sherry rode through without incident. But if the first ones here really were the cop and the secret agent, then it's entirely possible that we're not the first to go on foot and that somewhere ahead, Sherry and Claire are already trudging along. Should we call the train from the control panel? Kate asked. Right, the panel. In my opinion, it's easier to go along the ceiling at speed. We won't draw attention, and there might still be someone on the other side guarding the transport, Yamada offered. You're right, Four Eyes. Looks like we'll have to rely on our own legs, I sighed, realizing that stealth would have to trump comfort. And where does this tunnel lead? Kate asked a couple of minutes later, when we were already racing through it. The tunnel gradually slopes upward and clearly exits the city limits. We'd already crossed most of Raccoon City underground by now, and there was still no end in sight. To one of the entrances to Umbrella's laboratory, for I shouted back as she sped along on my other side. Not directly into the lab, just to the entrance. Kate pressed. Yeah, we'll still have to do some running outside. That's why the former brass deemed this route a failure. Yamada grimaced, having clearly studied a couple of maps before the mission. Well, right, this was the role meant for her and Spectre. They even had radar. Vector only reviewed the specs of potential opponents and checked the guard posts on the general plan, while some hadn't even bothered to familiarize themselves with the escape routes. But now, none of that matters. Reaching the platform quickly, we found no one there. Probably for the best, though. We could have called the train after all. Although what's the point of sighing now? Standing upright on the platform, I noticed several red lights glowing faintly through the thickness of the wall in the distance. Are we catching up, or are we lagging behind again? The Four Eyes asked, nodding toward the figures. Better to get on their tail right away, if you ask me. Any objections? I voiced my opinion. Negative nods answered me. No objections, then. Excellent. We cross the room swiftly and enter a narrow corridor so tight that two people would struggle to pass each other, rectangular in shape and made entirely of steel. Like running inside a shipping container. Ugh, what a comparison. But the feeling only intensified when we had to wind through the tight passages for a couple of minutes, and that was with acceleration, trying not to slip on zombie corpses that had been thoroughly finished off either by Leon and Audash's no ordinary girl either, or by Claire. After some time, we emerged into an empty control room, already stripped of anything useful. There's a downside to bringing up the rear. Climbing the spiral staircase upward, we finally stepped out onto an open platform. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 88. Chapter 88. What a bright moon, Catherine said, tilting her head back. Yes, the platform was partially open. More precisely, there was a canopy roof only over the entrance, leaving about 80% of it exposed to the open sky. Full moon. Just the right time for all kinds of foul creatures, Yamada snorted, unimpressed by the beauty of the night. And Lunai fears the foul creature, I said with a grin, waving my hand toward the platform descending below, with a cabin at its center. Though cabin, by its size, it was a full-fledged room. Where? Both girls asked in unison. Right there. I gestured Audion at Birkin in his third form. What the hell did Leon do to him on the train? Pelt him with benches, standing atop the cabin at the center of the descending platform. Opposite the monster, Claire stood frozen with a handheld grenade launcher. Yet vague doubts gnawed at me. The lunge of the two monsters coincided, and before the girl could pull the trigger, two hulking bodies rushed past her, one of them being mine. Phew, the opponent suddenly felt lighter. Keep an eye on her. And yes, hello, Claire. Explanations later. For now, watch your ward, and leave the monster to a monster. I tossed over my shoulder as I turned away. After waiting for the girls disappeared into the cabin surprisingly, without even arguing I took a careful look at my opponent. He had completely lost all human features. 2 additional limbs had sprouted from the sides of his torso, and his height now far exceeded anything human. And yet, paradoxically, he seemed more proportionate. No longer a shapeless mass of flesh, his silhouette now vaguely echoed human contours. Even the second pair of arms matched the rest of his body, with only the first pair massive, growing higher than the others, breaking the symmetry. Besides the eye on that same arm, I noticed another, slightly smaller eye on the outer side of his left thigh. The claws were intimidating as well. Even on the second pair of hands, they were larger than mine, which made one wonder just how dangerous the primary pair was. The creature's coloration hovered somewhere between muddy brown and pale tan. So this is where you finally lost the last of your humanity. And I have to admit I helped cause this accelerated mutation. You know, looking at you, I almost feel sorry for someone like you. Because, at our core, we're not all that different. It's a shame you can't understand me anymore, having lost your mind, but I couldn't not say it. I guess I just wanted to get it off my chest. Yes. Looking at this monster, I felt a strange sense of kinship. Maybe because I hadn't gone all that far from him myself, not outwardly, perhaps, but inwardly. The only response was a low hiss, just as I'd thought. It was doubtful he'd retained human speech even in his previous form. In this one, it was out of the question. But losing this time wasn't an option. I didn't want to put the girls inside the cabin at risk. I might be a monster, but I'm still a man. And how would I feel if I failed to protect them? Not great, I think. And I'm glad I still have principles like that. A sharp move forward toward the Reddito strike Birkin, and with a slight shift to the side I evade the blow from his upper limbs. I redirect the second pair of arms with soft blocks. Hard ones are better avoided, otherwise I risk breaking arms, and my own at that. A kick under the knee throws him slightly off balance. A double punch to the torso, a pivot with a subtle shift to the left, letting a massive overhead strike from his primary arm sail past me. Using the momentum of the spin, I drive my right elbow straight into his head, helped by the fact that the monster, still off balance, had dipped even lower with his last motion. I draw the pistol from the small of my back and fire 3 point-blank shots into the eye on the forearm of his right arm. A roar follows, and a titanic blow caught on my crossed arm hurls me aside. Still, I got what I wanted. I made the monster bleed. Too bad the wound sealed itself within moments, but the first step has been taken. I'd learned from past mistakes, because after a fight, evolution isn't mandatory. What matters is to understand your weaknesses and develop a strategy. My feet scrape against the steel floor as I land, breaking against the lingering inertia that's still carrying me backward. Leaning forward, I launch myself again, drawing my knife with my left hand and extending the claws on my right. The pistol returns to its place, waiting for the next good opportunity. I let another attack pass overhead, noting that this form is significantly slower than the previous one. Apparently, other parameters had increased at the expense of speed. Fine by me. I evade the second massive limb by dropping onto my back and sliding beneath the monster, cleanly exiting the attack range of the shorter arms as well. As I slip under Birkin, I rise slightly, switch the knife to my other hand, and drive it straight into the eye on his left thigh, triggering another furious roar. End of chapter 89. Chapter 89. The opponent, suddenly jerking with startling agility from the pain, flung me backward. My weapon remained lodged in his leg, preventing the wound from closing completely. That would do. As long as he kept bleeding. With that steady supply, I could fight him for quite a while he had no way to replenish his strength. I barely had time to savor the thought when Birkin launched himself at me like a battering ram, hurling me toward the edge of the platform. Steel rods crumpled against my body. Right. In this form, he could jump no worse than a grasshopper. I rolled aside as Birkin crashed down where I'd just been, leaving a deep dent in the steel floor. While rolling, I yanked a knife from the shaft of my army boot and hurled it at him. It struck his bony head and ricocheted off without causing any harm. But it made the monster hesitate, granting me a precious couple of moments to regain my footing. I dashed toward him only to spring back at once, slipping out from beneath the combined strike of all four of his arms. The moment my feet found purchase, I lunged again. His limbs were still embedded in the floor, claws likely punched through the steel and stuck there. It would have been a sin not to take advantage. Using his upper left arm as a pivot, I vaulted upward and drove my heel into his head, snapping it violently to the right with a sickening crunch. Birkin tore his limbs free. To avoid being crushed by a counterblow, I twisted midair and shot out my hand, grabbing his shoulder. Using it as a new fulcrum, I literally hurled myself over the opponent's back. I landed and immediately spun into a powerful strike against the monster's spine. A low growl. That was all I achieved. No, that wouldn't do. I extended my claws and hammered straight punches into his back, trying to shred it to pieces, but managed only shallow gashes. I ducked beneath a wide retaliatory swing from one arm to take a blow to the head from his second right hand. Damn it. Fighting something with multiple arms was incredibly inconvenient. I retreated to avoid overexposing myself, kicking his lower left arm upward so its claws passed over my head. I had no desire to decorate my skull with them. Something inside my head, damaged by Birkin's earlier strike, slid back into place with a faint crunch, and now I moved in again. I dodged both massive upper limbs, let the lower left sweep pass over me, knocked the lower right aside, and only then can I get directly to the bulk of his body itself. A quick 1-2 to the torso. Then I snapped upward, driving a vertical strike straight into the jaw of the grotesque growth he used as a head. Another crunch from his neck. An irritated wheeze. So I'd been right. That head of his was barely mobile, the neck seemed stiff as well. Every strike against that supposedly protected area broke something inside him and slowed the entire mass of his body somewhat. I ducked under a swing from his upper right arm, drew the last knife I had on me, and plunged it into the enormous eye embedded in his forearm. I ripped downward, splitting it open to the creature's piercing shriek. I yanked the knife free, flicked the blood from the blade in the same motion, and slid it back into its sheath. My other hand plunged into the wound I'd carved, claws working furiously, tearing and widening it as much as possible. With a shrill scream, the monster lashed out with his remaining massive arm, delivering a devastating blow that hurled me as far away as possible. He even didn't care that the strike also smashed into his own injured limb. I held on until the very last second, but in the end I paid the price. My right arm now hung broken and useless from the force of the impact. Still, I'd accomplished what I set out to do. I'd clearly damaged the bone, badly damaged, finished off by Birkin's own strike. His upper right arm tore free almost to the shoulder, blood pouring out by the bucketful. Well, yes, he was huge. He had plenty of blood. And on top of that, he has accelerated regeneration, which quickly restores blood loss. But now he's bound to weaken considerably, even if the wound's sealed fast. Not only does he have one less limb to fight with, but his regeneration is busy with replenishing lost fluids. And the consequences of blood loss had to affect even him. Meanwhile, the monster's blood was already flowing into me, knitting my injuries closed. My own blood, leaking from torn skin and open wounds, was swiftly returning to my body as well. We were both monsters, but we were different. I couldn't finish you, not yet. I'd be the first to burn out of steam. But these injuries would force you to retreat. And your blood, taken from this evolved form, would push my own evolution forward. We'll see who walks away the victor next time, Birkin. For some reason, I have a feeling it'll be the last. Yet, contrary to my thoughts, the monster showed no intention of retreating until a grenade launcher round slammed into his other shoulder, followed by a rifle shot that pierced the gap between the plates of the cranial growth. Claire and Yamada. The first was recognizable by the glow, visible even through the cabin that blocked them from me, the second by her precise fire from that distinctive weapon. One arm, thanks to my handiwork and his own actions, slightly scorched after 2 more shots from the grenade launcher, and with blood seeping from the growth on his head, Birkin still remained alive and very agile. With a single leap, he vanished somewhere into the upper superstructure. The professor's original head had relocated into his chest along with his brain during a previous stage, so damage to the growth wasn't fatal. And I wasn't ready to play tag with him on his own turf. "Miss me?" Yamada asked as she stepped out from behind the cockpit's corner. "You have no idea," I replied with a quiet snort, pushing myself upright and noting that one of Birkin's massive paws had torn into my thigh as well. My right leg responded sluggishly, barely obeying me at all. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 90, chapter 90. We should head inside. I wouldn't want to leave your friend alone with Sherry for too long. She was giving me disturbingly carnivorous look when it came to both me and the girl, Claire said. I agree, I replied, following after her, my gait uneven as I dragged my leg slightly. Drawing level with Yamada, I flicked my gaze toward Birkin's severed arm and mouthed, Bon appetit. She gave me a faint nod, grimacing just a little, and I left her alone with her meal. It was, after all, a delicate process. And where is? Claire began, leaving the question unfinished, but I understood her perfectly well. Cleaning up the traces. She's a professional at that, I answered with a shrug. And did you get your revenge? She asked again, her voice carrying a strange intonation. Catherine, sitting nearby, remained silent. I had already told the girls that I'd lied to Claire, so they wouldn't slip up if it came to it. I had to reconsider my priorities, I said evenly, making it clear there was no hidden meaning. I see. Claire nodded and stepped aside to speak with Sherry, who had regained consciousness and was lying on a cot. Yes, the changes in the girl's DNA had already begun, but let's hope everything follows the canon, and that this deviation hasn't gone too far. While I was lost in thought, staring at a fixed point, the well-fed Four Eyes had already joined us, and now gave me a rather noticeable jab in the side. Well, noticeable in the sense that, though I felt no pain, the fact that her shove actually moved me says a lot. For instance, it speaks of a couple of broken ribs had they not been reinforced after my swim in the alligator. What was that for? I whispered in surprise, careful not to disturb Sherry and Claire's conversation. Womanizer, Yamada hissed back. Only then did I realize that, first, my gaze had been fixed on Claire the entire time. She had tenderly given her sweater to Sherry to keep her warm. Yes, I do understand it's a touching moment, but I've grown a bit hardened and was now left in a black, form-fitting turtleneck that accentuated her figure rather effectively. Second, the Four Eyes hadn't hissed quite as quietly as she thought. Even Claire seemed to be listening now, and Kate had been drilling holes into me with her eyes long before that. Me? Well, maybe I'm just trying to figure out where to bite when I lose control of myself. I tried to turn it into a joke. Somehow I doubt that, she replied, claiming the last word before walking over to where Kate stood leaning against the wall. Mr. Angel, is that you? Came a faint, thin voice from Sherry's direction. Yes. I stepped closer, not missing how Claire's hand casually drifted to the grip of her pistol. I also chose to ignore the fact that Yamada had done the same, though far more subtly, aiming her gun from the hip at the other woman. I'm glad. I wanted to thank you for helping me. The naive child offered a weak smile. You don't have to. A strange feeling crept over me. Was that shame? I'm getting worse. And I saw those zombies. Will I become like them? Tell me, Mr. Angel, is it nice in heaven? Sherry asked, her tone suddenly serious, far too serious for someone so young. No, you won't become a monster. There's a cure for this disease. And yes, it's nice up there, I answered, doing my best not to meet those innocent, childlike eyes. And at that very moment the platform reached the bottom, or rather, the laboratory, and from the entrance we had docked with came the sound of hurried footsteps. Impressive. I could hear them even through the cabin walls. I stepped away from the cot and scanned the area, trying to pick out outlines. And I found them, 3 of them at once. One approaching the cabin, and 2 more running or moving very quickly our way from far behind, at least 200 meters back. But by the time the first entered the cabin, the other 2 had drawn considerably closer as well. Logically, the survivors down here should be Sherry's mother, Leon, and Ada. But if the first one really should have been here long ago, and I'd bet my head that the first outline most likely belongs to her, but the other 2, by all rights, shouldn't have been here yet. Sherry. The scientist William's assistant and, incidentally, his wife immediately spotted what mattered most to her. Then her gaze fell on me. Get away from her, monster. She leveled a pistol at met his time, for a change, aimed at the right place, my head. Let's not rush, Claire began, but she didn't get to finish. New participants entered the unfolding drama. Well, how fortunate, purred Wesker's puppet, better known as Ada Wong, in her enchanting voice. Leon. Claire blurted out in surprise at the sight of the second newcomer. Not exactly canon. Or maybe I was misremembering. Then again, I'd meddled so much already that deviations were hardly surprising. Claire. Ada, what's going on here? The second half of question was directed at the spy, who had just trained her pistol on Annette Birkin, standing only a couple of meters away. End of chapter. 91, chapter 91. You're still working with that umbrella rat, officer. Annette spat. That definitely hadn't been in canon. Then again, canon had gone through heavy censorship and had been tailored for a broad age range, so the language there had been softened at the very least. Real life didn't come with such filters. I had my doubts about you almost from the start. Came to town looking for fiancé, right? After what Miss Birkin told me, those doubts only grew. But I wanted to believe you. Drop that damn gun, and then I won't shoot. Leon's solid revolver was pressed firmly to the back of Miss Wong's head. Good. You're capable of tough but right decisions. what the hell is going on here? And stop aiming at Kane already. He saved your daughter's life and mine, at least once. Claire's pistol was trained squarely on Annette's chest. Yes, the girl's right. You'd all do better to lower your weapons, Yamada chimed in, peeling herself off the wall. There was open irony in her voice as she leveled her assault rifle at the group without singling out a specific target. I desperately need some popcorn. I whispered softly, making a little girl who managed to hear me giggle, and even the pistol in Claire's hands, as she stood fairly close, gave a twitch. You're infected but you can talk. What are you? Annette demanded. Although it hardly matters. The lower half of your form and all of your friends' gear are practically screaming about your affiliation with Umbrella. After those words, Miss Wong made some kind of decision. Her pistol shifted, now aimed at Yamada. Leon, in turn, brought me into his sights. Claire, step away. He ordered. Have you all lost your minds? I'm telling you no. He saved my life when he didn't have to. He could have walked away. That's enough for me. Claire said fiercely. If only I had that kind of noble character. Leon was clearly going through a serious internal struggle. But in the end, he lowered his pistol though he didn't holster it. A wise choice. At least the second part. He didn't really need to lower it, just redirect it. Yes, Yamada and I are Delta Team Wolfpack. Call signs, 4 Eyes and Vector. And my conscience felt perfectly clear. I had every right to the name, considering I'd inherited everything from the previous Vector. We were Umbrella mercenaries. But when the mission failed, they left us here to rot in this dying city. And as for what they did to Mule, that's obvious enough, unlike 4 Eyes with her half-mask. I gestured at myself. So what does it matter who we were? Right now, our goals align. Fine, I'll lay all my cards on the table. 4 Eyes and I want revenge on the corporation's leadership, though I imagine that's a sentiment shared by everyone here. We also want to create a vaccine for the infection inside me, which means we need a laboratory. But don't you think this is hardly the right time for such reasoning? If we keep stalling, Sherry may die. And no matter what kind of monster, criminal, or killer I may be, I have no desire to be even partially responsible for the death of a little girl. As for 2 of the 3 labels I just mentioned, those can be discarded. Even a soldier knows compassion. I'd picked that last line up somewhere before. You had to admire how convincingly I could lie when inspired. Sherry. Annette suddenly came to her senses and rushed to her daughter, apparently no longer viewing me as an immediate threat. Good enough. At that moment, however, I felt uneasy under Ada's interested gaze. I only hoped she wouldn't decide to take my samples along with the G-virus as a bonus. So what now? Catherine voiced the question on everyone's mind. Why was everyone looking at me? Sure, I'm a monster, but viruses are supposed to make you dumber, so maybe you should try thinking for yourselves. I suppose I should go ahead. The rest of you would do well to split up too, but follow with a slight delay. I'll clear the path first. I doubt there's anything here that can offer me worthy resistance. I paused. Except maybe your husband. I gave Annette a slight, faintly mocking bow. Yamada, you'll cover Claire, accompany her and help with the virus. It's better for her mother to stay here, while you, as a scientist, can create a vaccine quite easily, provided a certain person shares the data for its production. But that's beyond me. I'm just a dumb soldier, not used to thinking with my head. I snorted softly. Sherry had already lost consciousness during my popcorn comment, relaxing just enough to slip into sleep without even noticing. Kate, you're with me, I threw over my shoulder as I opened the door, glancing at Ada, who had jumped back from me. Leon had endured my being just a few steps away with remarkable composure, even though to all of them except perhaps Sherry and, maybe, Claire, I was just another monster. No, not just another. The wrong kind of monster. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate Power Stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 Power Stones. 92, Chapter 92. Good luck, Yamada and Claire said in unison. Both seemed sincere. Well, me partner probably could have been sincere. After all, I still had to haul the incriminating evidence against Umbrella on my back. That was the real reason I'd volunteered to go ahead, to secure myself a head start and avoid being saddled with too many responsibilities, not because of some ridiculous heroic impulse. The monsters would attack me anyway, aside from the most basic zombies, perhaps, and those wouldn't be hard to deal with on the way. For the one staying behind, though, it created the image of I'm doing this for you. And Kate would get some practice fighting humanoid creatures for a change. It couldn't be mutant spiders every time. Are we heading to the laboratory now? Kate asked as we left the platform. Not exactly. First we need to check the power supply, make sure it's online. It was. By the time I finished speaking, we'd reached it, arriving at a crossroads. 4 exits led out of the room, including the one behind us. So, if I'm not mistaken, we should turn left. I say, and then turn right. I was mistaken after all. We crossed one of the narrow bridges. The power supply room stood atop a thick central pillar in the heart of the laboratory, with short walkways connecting it from every direction, and entered a corridor paneled in steel sheets. Thank God the lab's version of this hallway, though similar in shape to the ones above, was much wider. Otherwise, by the end of this whole ordeal, I'd have developed claustrophobia for sure. We turned right and followed the corridor to its end, arriving at a staff room. There were no other exits from it, a dead end, in other words. Grab any documents you see. The former occupants were kind enough to leave us a bag. And you can take that pistol over there, might come in handy, I said, rummaging through the lockers along the wall. I ignored the ammunition and small items. The security uniforms, however, went into Kate's sports bag just in case. There wasn't anything else of interest. That's everything, Kate reported in less than a minute. Looks like someone was enjoying her enhanced speed. I gave the room one final sweep with my eyes, making sure we hadn't missed anything, then gestured for Miss Warren to follow me and headed in the opposite direction toward a sealed tunnel door. As we approached it, I asked Kate to step aside because someone was behind them. And that was strange. 3 green outlines. 2 almost pressed together, the third about 5 or 6 meters away. I only spotted them from a distance of 20 meters, which was odd as well, considering the range of visibility of mine usually stretches for nearly half a kilometer, if not farther. Gripping the drawn knife, I pressed the door mechanism and before me stood 2 mutant plants. Just what I needed. Shame I don't have a flamethrower, I muttered sincerely. I studied these creatures carefully. They resembled massive buds atop short, thick stems with equally stubby root systems beneath. 2 additional offshoots sprouted from each stem like undeveloped bud, serving as crude arms for these botanical monstrosities. While I was examining them, one of the plants managed spat directly in my face. As usual, I felt nothing. Only in the faint reflection of the steel-lined corridor did I see the green corrosive substance eating into my skin before being rapidly absorbed by my body. Fantastic. What kind of diet did my body even follow? I'd stopped eating meat. Vegetables had been rejected almost immediately. And now it practically inhaled any liquid that touched it. God forbid I ever stepped in gasoline. And now, what if this poison knocked me flat? But no, my body absorbed that too. What kind of sick joke was this? I lunged forward and literally tore the main stems of the plants in half. Beyond the next door waited the third shrub, but since I'd spotted it earlier, it posed no particular problem. I didn't even bother with the knife, claws were enough. Only then did I allow myself to take in the surroundings. We'd emerged at a transition point between floors and a viewing platform at the same time. Directly ahead stood another massive pillar, similar to the one housing the power supply room, except this one was completely entwined with plant growth. It shifted faintly but made no attempt to attack. And if it didn't attack, I ignored it too. After that, we cleared several more sectors. We ran into just about everything imaginable. Liquors dropped from the ventilation shafts which were wide enough here to accommodate them easily. Several times we encountered enormous moths the size of me. The ordinary zombies hardly bore mentioning, some in lab coats, others clearly victims of experimentation. At one point, Yamada contacted us. Before we'd parted ways, she'd slipped me a communication capsule to replace the one I'd lost after that explosive embrace with Silver. Kane, it's been decided that Sherry will remain unattended but securely locked in the cabin. Even Birkin couldn't breach it last time. Annette came with us. She clearly doesn't trust me, you, and Adon like the others. We passed through the corridor with the flowers you killed. If you ever think of giving me something like that, better not. She chuckled at the end. Some time later, she contacted me again. Kane, I'm sorry. I wasn't careful enough. Annette's dead, killed by her husband. She had a G-virus sample on her. I discreetly secured it. The sheet with the vaccine formula, maybe even the virus formula. I didn't check. She handed over to Claire herself. We're finishing the vaccine synthesis now. End of chapter 93. Chapter 93. Have you already made it to our part of the lab? Yamada asked. Yes, though it took some effort. I've moved all our belongings and the Gulls to a different, more secure location outside. Now we can only hope they don't scatter without our supervision, since they devour ordinary infected without hesitation. I replied, and we cut the connection. Kate, we're heading back. Stay sharp. These defective liquors are getting on my nerves, I called over my shoulder. And they truly were. Not only did it seem as though they had built a nest somewhere in the ventilation system and kept pouring out of it, but now some of them had turned bluish, with a single massive, curved claw instead of hands. They were tougher, too. Even a headshot didn't always put them down on the first try. Got it. You too, I heard the reply from the girl, armed with part of Yamada's arsenal. She had securely fastened the rest of the gear to her pack and now carried it on her back. And what's this supposed to be? I tilted my head to the side, my voice taking on the tone of an overexcited young enthusiast. And I had every reason to. Right in front of us stood a grotesque hybrid, part human, part what? Locust? Grasshopper? Some other insect entirely? It didn't matter. It seemed I had just encountered the first harbinger of the city's deeper infect Iona Drain Deimos, or simply a DD. Possibly a variant known as a brain sucker, though those were supposed to have 2 heads. While I was still considering it, the creature pushed off the floor with its insectal legs, leapt onto the wall, then sprang sideways at me. So slow. 1 step back. My fist slammed into its flank, hurling it onto the laboratory corridor floor, and the knife in my other hand pierced the infected skull a heartbeat later. Kate, don't just stand there. We need to move. I think it's only going to get worse from here, and I'd rather not stick around to confirm it. I turned my head toward Miss Warren. Right. She shuddered, staring at the corpse with a mixture of disgust and unease. As if in defiance of my words, the return trip proved relatively calm until the final third, when the emergency system began blaring warnings about the base's imminent self-destruction. "Kane, can you hear me?" My communicator crackled to life. "More or less," I replied. "I split up from Claire and I'm heading toward you. I want to warn you, when we were in the control room, we contacted Lee and he showed up on one of the camera feeds. Ada slipped away from him somewhere. Be careful. She might decide you're a worthwhile target and a generous bonus on top of her primary objective," Yamada warned. "Understood. You be careful too. No telling what she might have noticed. And you're the one carrying the pure G virus sample," I answered just before the connection cut out. Birkin wouldn't leave my mind, so I picked up the pace. We met Yamada halfway. She had clearly understood everything and confirmed it with a few sharp gestures, and together we continued our sprint toward the train that was bound to be attacked by the mutant. But we arrived with some delay, and there it was, the train, and the creature itself, as large as the tunnel and having finally lost even the faintest trace of a human form. If I'm not mistaken, it had dropped to all fours in the previous stage. Now it had shed any recognizable shape altogether, becoming a mass of something unidentifiable, with tentacles and a massive jaw, slithering rapidly after the train. "I'm no expert," I muttered, watching Birkin vanish deeper into the tunnel, "but we'd better hurry. This place is about to blow." Took the words right out of my mouth, Yamada snorted, already reclaiming most of her weapons from Catty on the run, no less. Quick descent into the tunnel and we moved along it. After some time, explosions sounded behind us, but by then they were already far away. Still, we hadn't caught up with the train, while the chain of blasts was drawing closer. "Over here." Kate pointed toward a small recess in the wall. Once it became painfully obvious that we wouldn't win this race. We dove into the alcove. Whether it had once been a maintenance room or some kind of control station, I couldn't tell. I positioned myself in front of the girls and even spread my wings. I was the most durable one here, after all. Flames roared past and above us. As always, there was no pain, only the sensation that, at some point, I had lost control of the wings on my back. Nothing lasts forever. Eventually, the torrent of fire subsided. "Kane, how are you?" Yamada asked. "As always, dead." I shrugged, hearing a faint crackle from my own body. I stepped out of the alcove, noting the heavy soot coating everything around us, and glanced down at myself. What can I say? The lab coat had definitively ceased to serve its purpose, reduced to little more than smoking sleeves. My wings were burned almost to nothing. When I looked over my shoulder, I could see charred crusts along both shoulders. Regeneration was going to take a while, and I had no desire to find out what my back currently looked like. "You're going to let them go?" The Four Eyes asked pointedly, nodding down the tunnel where three unmistakable red lights receded into the distance. "Yes," I answered simply, resisting the urge to shrug. No need to complicate my own regeneration. "Why?" Kate asked. "Maybe I just wanted to pro-veto myself, at least that there's still something human left in me by helping them get out of here. Who knows?" Closing my eyes, I spoke, while turning the situation over in my mind. All those combinations, the effort to improve relationships, and everything else, really, why bother? Most likely for that very reason, to prove I'm human. After all, an ordinary infected would have taken the simplest route, attack and devour. I didn't want to become like them, so I chose the longer, far more tedious path instead. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate Power Stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 Power Stones. 94, Chapter 94. The approaching roar didn't give me long to wallow in self-reflection. Wait, what? I turned toward where Birkin was supposed to have been destroyed. According to canon, before his death he should have torn almost all the cars off the train, leaving one or two at most, and then gone out in a blaze of glory. But no such luck. Crawling toward us was a charred mass veined with glowing red fissures, resembling a colossal amoeba with 3 eyes each larger than my head and a writhing forest of tentacles. "He's not dead?" The Four Eyes blurted out. "I'm guessing not," I replied, just as stunned. "Fall back and keep firing. Yamada, give Kate a weapon. Accuracy doesn't matter, he's filling the entire tunnel as it is. Another pair of hands won't hurt. And don't be stingy, give her something with proper caliber. She already has a pistol, and it won't do much here." I shook off the shock and started issuing orders. We retreated, occasionally slipping fully into acceleration and widening the gap, showering the monstrosity with gunfire. But despite the fact that he was penetrable now, Birkin ignored all our hits, even Yamada's use of 2 assault rifles. With the sheer size of his bulk, those injuries were no more than mosquito bites to him, and his regeneration meant he had no need to worry about exhaustion, except perhaps in the very distant future. He ignored even the precise shots Yamada's from the sniper rifle and mine from the pistols aimed at his eyes, only forcing him to move faster toward us. By then we had already reached sections of the tunnel that were openly scorched and smoking, and everything ahead promised to be worse, still bad enough that we might end up boiled alive. "Cover me. I'll try a different approach," I called out, then moved in. The smaller tentacles were neatly shot down by Yamada. Kate kept pumping round after round into the monster's bulk itself. The larger tentacles were easily severed with knife and claws, but when it came to the body itself that was the problem. Even though the creature had shifted its focus to me as the irritant, landing any truly damaging blow was still out of reach. Leap. Slide beneath the mass, claws carving as I passed. Emerge on the left, nearly pressed against the wall. There wasn't even a full meter between its body and the tunnel, and I was diving straight into that gap. Spring aside from the oncoming tentacles, too many to hack through head-on, and plunge beneath the body again. Another full pass from one side to the other, knife and free hand working relentlessly, sometimes tearing out entire chunks of flesh. Out the far side. A jump toward the ceiling to evade a massive limb or whatever that colossal appendage qualified as, then landing atop it. Knife and claws again. Monotonous. Repetitive. Assembly line brutality. Strangely, this weighed on me more than any previous clash with the creature. Perhaps because before, it had still been vaguely humanoid, partially vulnerable. But now, all our combined efforts seemed utterly insignificant. Never before had I felt so helpless. Surely this thing must have a weak point. But if there was, it refused to reveal itself. On yet another pass beneath the enormous body, I made a mistake. One of the tentacles caught up to me, coiling around my arm and yanking me back. A crack sounded in my left arm, announced it would be useless for a while. I severed the tentacle and rolled to the right, narrowly avoiding the rest. And then a strange thought crept into my mind: repeat what I had done with the alligator's corpse. Even now, the creature's blood was being drawn toward me. I just hoped I wouldn't burst. Kate, Yamata, whatever happens next, don't panic. If the thing starts convulsing like it's having a seizure, fall back. Nothing's going to happen to me anyway. I shouted toward the sound of gunfire, having long since lost sight of the girls. Got it. Just don't overdo it, whatever you're planning. Yamata shouted back. I slid beneath the monster again, but this time emerged on the side of the tunnel it had already passed through. I ran a short distance back, then accelerated to my limit, practically flying toward it only to drop at the last moment and skid under the mass with my knife extended. Judging by how my legs stopped responding, the fall hadn't gone exactly as planned. The knife, stuck fast in the flesh I was cutting, snapped halfway down the blade, and inertia dragged me a little farther under the monster's body. I flung the useless hunk of metal aside and sank my claws into the monster's flesh, halting my slide. Pulling myself forward with my right arm on my left, gradually responding again, unsurprising given the torrent of blood flowing from the enemy into me, began to climb into the gash. Clearing a path as I went, tearing and carving, I pushed deeper inside, searching for its heart, its core, anything that might serve as the center of this abomination. And I kept moving forward. End of chapter 95. Chapter 95. At some point, a hoarse screech erupted from outside, and the creature began slamming itself against the tunnel walls. Inside, I found myself on the wildest roller coaster imaginable. The harder Birkin smashed into the walls, the more violently I was thrown around, flailing my claws in search of anything to latch onto. But every something I grabbed tore free in my hands, causing the creature even greater pain, which only made it thrash harder, either trying to expel me from its body or crush me against the wall. I couldn't tell which. I have no idea how long it lasted. It felt like an eternity. Eventually, the monster went still. I found myself floating not in chunks of flesh or some grotesque minced slurry, but in a thick, uniform fluid that was actively trying to seep into me. Or rather, my body was actively drawing it in. After that rodeo, it had certainly sustained its share of damage. Is it over? Came Kate's voice from somewhere outside. Ein, are you alive in there? Yamata called. Stop mocking me. You know perfectly well I can't be alive. I shouted back. I immediately regretted opening my mouth. Before I could finish speaking, the vile substance began pouring in there as well. After a fair amount of flailing and swallowing more of the stuff than I cared to think about, I managed to absorb enough that I could stand upright inside the now empty carcass. The remaining fluid barely reached my ankles. The body itself had shriveled significantly, once so bloated and semi-liquid. Where all of it fit inside me, I'd rather not speculate. Let the Four Eyes theorize about that. I carved an exit through what remained and climbed out to the girls waiting for me. Well, that thing really dissolved you in there, Yamata said, studying me with open surprise. I'm not even sure anymore who digested whom now. Kate simply stared at me in shock. What now? Standing beside them, I was roughly the same height, no towering over them, no craning my neck upward either. I didn't feel heavier or bulkier. So what was wrong? I lowered my gaze and saw it. Inside Birkin, I had indeed been partially dissolved. Large patches of skin were simply gone, exposing muscle and tissue beneath. I resembled some distant relative of the lickers, whose flayed bodies bore a similar look. It is worth noting that all this also resembled a burn somewhat. Perhaps Birkin hadn't fully cooled after the explosion, and I had been partially cooked inside him. Or maybe it was simply a property of that fluid. There was no way to find out now. The troubling part was that regeneration was in no hurry to mend it. Go to the wall and wipe off the soot, maybe then you'll be able to see yourself, advised Four Eyes, gazing at me with sympathy. What was going on? I didn't walk to the tunnel wall, he practically flew, even though my wings were long gone. I wiped away the soot, noticing that grime and even some exposed wiring scraped off with it, revealing a surface not quite mirror-like, but reflective enough to make out general features. I wouldn't attempt to compose a police sketch from it, but it was sufficient. pale. As though skin had been stretched across the face, the right side much like the rest of the body either dissolved or burned. The eyes, blood-red sclera and orange-white irises, set against a slightly elongated pupil. Not the kind you see in films, splitting the eye in two, but only subtly different from the usual round shape, yet all the more terrifying for it. The hair had shortened to a small bristle, surviving only at the crown and, judging by touch, at the back of my head. Blood-filled crimson lips, seemingly impossible for the living, and beneath the upper lip, a pair of fangs. This wasn't some elegant aristocratic vampire. This was a true walking corpse. And as I stared at my reflection, not a single detail changed. Nothing even attempted to regenerate. Could it be? Judging by your eyes, you've figured it out. Yamada's voice came from behind me. You've evolved again, losing your human traits and wings, and much else. Your ribcage, for instance, has become entirely human once more. But this time the catalyst was Birkin's final form, literally radiating the virus. In a sense, you've even come back to life, but at the cost of ceasing to resemble a human. And what did you expect, swimming in his blood? Kate. The bag, I said, noticing that my voice now sounded like that of a lifelong smoker. Well, no wonder me neck was nothing but an open mess, so there was little to be surprised at. Receiving what I asked for from the still shocked girl as though she herself had been disfigured, I pulled out a change of clothes to replace the ruined ones. Good thing I'd thought to grab spare clothes from the staff room. I pulled on a pair of jeans and a dark blue athletic jacket with a deep hood, 2 sizes too large. The baggy fabric concealed most of my frame, hiding my figure entirely. As long as no one saw the skin beneath, my legs and overall build still passed for human. Birkin's dealt with. The survivors are safe. The lab's destroyed. Where to now? Yamada asked, as though nothing had happened. For that, I was sincerely grateful. Better to pretend not to notice than to cast those sympathetic glances like Kate. Now, I replied, my tone sharpening. Now we pay a visit to a certain lady carrying the progenitor virus. I urgently need to look more human and evolve. And I see no other way to achieve it. I very much did not want to remain like this forever, even if, as Yamada had said, the virus within me had made me pseudo-alive, much like Birkin himself. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 96, chapter 96. Well then, excellent. From here on, you're on your own. Four Eyes dropped that on me the moment we reached the ghouls waiting for us by a rather roundabout route. None of them seemed to have disobeyed the order or wandered off anywhere. Truly obedient little hounds. What's that supposed to mean? I asked, and that was putting it mildly. I would have trusted my back to Four Eyes far more readily than to obedient but dim-witted ghouls or to Kate, who was untrained and, even in the early stages of infection, already differed from us in certain ways. I understand that you're about to face a serious fight. I don't know how strong the carrier of the progenitor virus is, but I'm almost certain that, with this kind of support, you'll be able to defeat her even without me. Yamada replied, clearly uncomfortable. What are you getting at? I don't like beating around the bush. I hurried the faltering girl along. Don't get the wrong idea. I'll try to get back as quickly as possible. But it's vital for both of us that I visit Umbrella's warehouse. It's not far from here, but while you'll be heading almost due west, I need to go southeast. If we visit those places one after the other, we'll lose precious time. And you must have realized by now where the corporation's active interference in the city's affairs is leading. I suspect no, I'm almost certain, that the countdown has already shifted to mere hours. You don't actually think Umbrella will use a weapon of mass destruction? I tried to sound surprised. I had to admit, that wasn't difficult just for a different reason. I knew the canon. But Four Eyes' speed of thought and accuracy of conclusions amazed me yet again. And they'd shoved her into that lousy squad and sent them to die. I should be grateful to those senile idiots for that decision. If they hadn't acted this way, I might never have met her. And as a partner, she was, without exaggeration, irreplaceable. Notice, I didn't say that. And yes, I do believe that after they already tried to eliminate you and failed to capture me, their decision will be unequivocal and far from favorable to the city. So we need to hurry. Even if that means temporarily splitting our strength. Don't frown. I'll try to catch up with you before you reach the Arklay Mountains. Four Eyes said, already preparing to leave. Wait, everything you said makes sense, but how do you even know about the warehouse? I'd already managed to forget about it myself. Unfortunately, I remembered only the first 2 parts well, and 02. But the various locations from the third part had long since faded from memory. And who could have guessed I'd ever need that kind of knowledge? I found some interesting information in the laboratory, but we can talk about it later. Right now, action comes first. Idle conversation can wait. The mercenary replied, pausing briefly. Fair enough. I had to concede my partner's reasoning. At least take a couple of ghouls with you. They won't touch you, and with my order, they'll protect you. They've got just enough brains for that. Worried about me? Yamada asked slyly. Yes. Is it just me, or did both girls just stumble on level ground? After all, even though I've tasted the blood of the scientist from the Echo 6 squad, yours and Birkin's as well, and his, I admit, had raised certain doubts as a food source. That doesn't replace a living scientist and proper application of knowledge. And you'll be the second strongest in our little group after me. I'm not even mentioning how irreplaceable you are as support and at long range. I explained calmly, since Yamada and Kate were giving me strange looks as though they had seen a ghost, and honestly, I didn't feel like asking what exactly had crossed their minds. Women's logic could pull off some truly terrifying tricks sometimes. That's true, especially now. I drank Annette's blood. Bodies don't cool immediately, so returning alone to the place where she died and doing it wasn't difficult. It was from her knowledge that I managed to piece together a rough map of the city. She knew many of the corporation's branches here. Let's not forget, there are quite a few of them in this city, and the corporation hides behind the facade of a pharmaceutical company. The former mercenary snorted under her breath, but with our hearing, not only I, but Kate heard her clearly as well. End of chapter 97. Chapter 97. I'll pass on the ghouls. I'll move faster without them. Fair enough. Good luck. Try not to die. I turned and headed toward the call. Yes, the call hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown louder and more insistent, but now I could ignore it, almost without paying attention. Either I'd grown used to it, or my mutations had granted me something like immunity. You too. Without turning around, Yamada replied at the edge of audibility. This time meant for my ears alone, then accelerated and quickly vanished from sight. Very funny. I'm not entirely alive yet. My tissues are steadily reddening, reviving, and my heart has started beating again once every minute or minute and a half. After the second stage it had stopped altogether, as far as I could tell. It's not hard to notice such things when you're missing skin on 75% of the places where it's supposed to be. I simply can't bring myself to call this half-burned, half-exposed muscle tissue skin. I hope Lisa's blood will change the tap, at least partially. My gradual return to life in this current state was also one of the reasons I couldn't afford to delay. Right now, I don't feel pain or any of the other joys of pseudo-life. But what about later? I imagine the sensations will be on par with Birkin or Nemesis, only with exposed flesh. In short, that's more than enough motivation to squeeze every ounce of effort out of the ghouls, not allowing them to stray from our path, and these creatures occasionally try to hunt other infected. It's a pity, but though they moved quickly, it was clearly not at the level of true acceleration. Perhaps I simply expected too much of them, or maybe it's just that I'm so impatient to come alive again in proper form. I think both factors play a part. Less than 2 hours passed, though to me it felt like barely one, before we reached the pit where Lisa Trevor still lingered. The ghouls showed no reaction to the call of the bearer of that truly horrifying collection of viruses. Much had been tested on her, and even if the progenitor virus absorbed everything else, as my own case demonstrated, that didn't mean it stopped evolving. I had to grab Kate by the collar more than once when Lisa, clearly sensing prayer what were we to her, intensified the pressure of her call. Sick, M. Reaching the edge of the pit and pointing at the lone monstrous figure below, I gave the command. As expected, the ghouls easily interpreted it, finding an equivalent in their fragmented memories, and deftly began descending the sheer walls. Damn, it feels like I ended up in Aliens rather than Resident Evil. If they'd looked any less human, I would have sworn that was the case. Even Kate shuddered beside Methoff. She shouldn't have had that association. It's doubtful that movie even existed in this world, and in any case, it came out later. The first strike, oddly enough, was delivered by Lisa herself. With her tentacles, she crushed one of the nearly descended ghouls into fragments. But that didn't save her from being buried under the mass of ghouls that rushed her, some of them leaping straight from the wall at their opponent. Watching the fight from above was monotonous and dull, yet my instinct for self-preservation kept me from climbing down. So Miss Warren and I observed the writhing knot of bodies, listened to the howls, and noted how this or that ghoul was hurled out of the melee more often than not, already reduced to a heap of mangled flesh. Those that were hurled out relatively intact crawled back again, even if they were missing their lower halves or had sustained other similar damage. To fulfill my order. Obedient. Extremely so. From time to time, as the mass of bodies shifted, Lisa, clearly thrashing within its spot it had occupied, would reveal the pitiful remains of my creations. Some lay headless, others had gaping holes where their heads had been, openings the size of a tentacle. The penetrating force of any of Trevor's limbs was monstrous. Yet so far, I hadn't noticed her becoming less active herself. Perhaps her hide was even tougher than Birkin's. But even if that were true, the ghouls should wear her down eventually. And I would not allow her to replenish her strength by snacking on them. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 98. Chapter 98. At some point, my creations literally swarmed over her body, and all movement ceased. Had they actually won? Kate and I exchanged a glance, understanding each other without words. We waited another 10 seconds, then cautiously jumped down. To be precise, I jumped down with the burden on my shoulders, while it remained uncertain whether the girl could descend without injury, and for now, it was best not to risk any, better to stay fully combat ready. The moment we landed, the blood of the infected Trevor had killed began to stream toward me. I will never get used to the sight of blood moving of its own accord in my direction. Perhaps that must be why I failed to notice how, from within the tangled heap of ghoul bodies that had buried Trevor beneath them and pinned her in place, a pair of eyes fixed on me through a narrow gap. For the first time in all this ordeal, the loneliness, confusion, and pain in them were joined by a new companion, malice. From that same opening, after skewering a couple of obstructing bodies, 3 of Lisa's tentacles shot toward me. I sensed something was wrong only when they were already nearly upon me, and it's not certain that I would have managed to jump out of the way, since the speed of her tentacles was anything but slow, if not for one factor the monster hadn't accounted for. Kane. I was literally shoved out of the path of the incoming strike. Unlike me, Kate hadn't been distracted by the blood flowing toward me. She had kept her eyes on the writhing mass. She didn't have the speed to yank me clear in time, but she had enough to slam into me and knock me aside. I flew back half a meter, digging my feet into the ground to break, churning up the soil beneath me. My strength allowed for far greater feats than that. But I had no time for self-admiration. With surprise and a measure of fear, or better said, shock, I stared at Kate's body, pierced in 3 places, head, heart, and the center of her abdomen, her spine practically shattered in 2. Beyond revival, I noted distantly. Only when the blood of the now definitively dead girl began to draw toward me did the full weight of what had happened finally sink in. Well now, there's irony for you. Muhil had undergone multiple evolutions, who had killed Birkin, who had absorbed the knowledge of a powerful fighter even before that, saved by my weakest experiment. There was something bitterly ironic about it, but I could reflect on that later. Right now, I wanted revenge on the one who had killed my creation, my fledgling. Something inside me snapped, the clamp dropped. I think that's what the state is called. With a roar, I lunged forward, forgetting about my pistol, my knives, even my hand-to-hand training. I seized one of Trevor's tentacles and yanked it toward me, partially dragging her from the heap. With my other clawed hand, I struck at her face, fingers spread wide, ignoring the fact that as my swing dipped lower, my claws sheared through one of the ghoul's arms at the shoulder. Without finishing that strike, though, it tore through my opponent's face and scraped against bone, I shifted in one fluid motion. Curling my palm into a blade-like shape, I drove it forward, first punching straight through the unfortunate ghoul I had just maimed, then plunging into Trevor's abdomen. And then it hit me. If the previous portion of my opponent's blood hadn't yet fully absorbed into me, now I began drinking directly through the pores of my skin from the arms still embedded inside Trevor's body. And I saw something that cooled my rage. Yes, a monster stood before me, and the age of her body was comparable to my own. But the fragment of consciousness that had survived all those horrific experiments I was now witnessing firsthand through her blood and the tortures inflicted by Umbrella's scientists, including the Birkin couple, may they burn forever on the coals with the frying pan never running out of oil. That fragment was not a monster, nor a grown woman. No, it was still that little girl who would never again see her father or mother again. Especially her mother, the one she had searched for even back in the mansion, when the STARS team arrived, ignoring bullets and every assault against her. A small, terrified child. And at last, after what felt like an eternity of alien torment and suffering, I opened my eyes. No trace of rage remained in my gaze as I looked at Trevor, very much alive, who had just used her newly freed arms and tentacles to fling aside the remaining ghouls, finishing off nearly all of them. I leapt back, unwilling to leave myself open to another strike. End of chapter. 99. Chapter 99. No, I won't kill you out of revenge. I'll end your suffering. You've endured more than enough in this world. If there is such a thing as heaven, then you've surely earned it for everything you went through in this life. Even as a monster, you barely touched anyone. And your call, it's nothing more than a child crying for her mother. I hope you meet her in heaven. And all the horrors you endured, as well as the memory of you as a monster, I'll take that upon myself. After all, in just a couple of days I've done more that fits the definition of monstrous behavior than you have in your entire existence. It was probably the first time I had spoken with complete sincerity. No subtext. No plans for the future. No tricks. 2 tentacles lashed out in opposite directions, finishing off the remaining ghouls. The last one had come at Trevor from behind, slamming into her back. I lunged forward, ducked low, leaning back, and with a sweep of my clawed hand severed the 2 tentacles that had struck at me. Forgive me, just endure a little longer. I rolled, came out of it at close range, and as I rose from the lowest point of motion, I added the inertia of my entire body to the strike. My arm, bent at the elbow with claws extended, carved upward through Trevor's body, literally splitting her all the way to the crown of her head. At the final moment, I took a blow to the face. Digging my feet into the ground, I refused to be thrown back. Ignoring what were undoubtedly severe injuries and the strange burning sensation across my face, wow, I can actually feel something. I pressed my whole body against Lisa, pinning her arms to her sides, and clamped my jaws around her throat as we toppled backward. Somewhere behind, a crushed ghoul howled. I took another hit to the upper part of my face, this time from a surviving tentacle. Once again, I ignored the faint sensations and the unsettling crunch of my own bones, biting even deeper into Trevor's hissing blood. I don't know how long it lasted. I seemed to fall out of time. Subjectively, it couldn't have been more than a couple of minutes. At some point, I simply realized that I had drained the body beneath me to the last drop. Not woe bodies. I had absorbed the ghoul's blood as well. Only after climbing out of the pit did I realize that I had drained everyone there. I hadn't spared even the fallen Kate. My ability to draw blood truly is problematic. The second realization came as I approached the city. Something in me had changed. Skin had grown back over my body. At the same time, I could sadly say farewell to the upper half of my outfit. Only a sleeve and the collar with its hood had survived. The skin that now covered me bore the same shade as Trevor's, dark gray, with a granite-like tint. It was horrifyingly durable. Even my claws could no longer pierce it. Speaking of which, my claws had shortened strangely at maximum extension. They were no longer than 3 centimeters. Like a somnambulist, I walked back into the city. There, in the cracked display window, one I remembered from my first encounter with Lisai caught sight of my reflection. Perhaps it was the accumulated strain of the past days. Or perhaps Lisa's memories had struck me too deeply. After all, she had spent decades in a living hell. I laughed like a madman, pointing at the window, unable to stop, even knowing I was making far too much noise in a city that had grown even more dangerous as the infection spread. I should have been quieter, but I couldn't. Only after a couple of minutes did I manage, with difficulty, to pull myself together. Turning away from the glass, I couldn't resist giving it a parting wave. From now on, I'd have to keep my hood up at all times. My face was something I should not show anyone. I almost forgot to mention what I had become. Back in my previous world, I used to listen to a foreign band Disturbed. And right now, I looked almost exactly like their monster logo. The resemblance was simply phenomenal. The same horrific grin, far too wide for a human face, devoid of any hint of lips, nothing but gums, leaving massive fangs fully exposed. Eyes glowing crimson, with no visible sclera, iris, or pupil, just solid red. And a face dark brown, as though permanently scorched by soot. Had Trevor done something in her final strike, during the formation of my new skin, making the result even worse than before? It was entirely possible. Below that was the body, its color and musculature matching the image as well. Yes, I now possessed an imposing build, no longer something out of the Undead, Dystrophic Edition category I'd previously embodied. Worn black mercenary pants and the remnants of my upper clothing, especially the hood, completed the look. If this was a vampire, it was some monstrous Hollywood version from an American Dracula film. Alright, it could be worse. As it is, I'm conditionally alive, practically bulletproof, and I can just keep my face hidden under the hood. Find some dark glasses, and maybe wrap a scarf around my jaw, and I'll pass for human. I tried to reassure myself. It didn't work very well. But whatever. But never mind, now I still have to dash across the rooftops toward Four Eyes, since she's taking her time. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 100, chapter 100. I shouldn't have made so much noise. I shook my head, looking at the 2 lickers and 1 drain demos I'd killed. I have to admit, it was a little amusing at first when the lickers' tongues lashed out from different directions and struck me at the same time. But neither of them could budge me an inch, and I didn't even need to exert myself to resist. I simply grabbed the tendrils wrapped around me and pulled, ripping the heads off both attackers. They'd driven their claws too deeply into the building walls. The one on my left was even less fortunate. The wall beneath it had already been damaged, probably warped by an explosion. It had been hot here at the beginning of the outbreak. A chunk of masonry gave way along with the headless licker, collapsing and crushing the poor creature beneath it. Then the DD-charged Medhat insectoid monstrosity. Strange. If I remember the canon correctly, they were supposed to be confined to the laboratory complexes and construction site in Raccoon City. Looks like they'd already spread throughout the city. Watching the drain demos leap at me from seemingly nowhere, they love attacking from walls and rooftops, was almost entertaining. It landed on me, tried to pierce my skin, failed, and simply slid off. That didn't stop me from delivering a direct punch, crushing its face. And it was precisely the image of these 3 martyrs that I was now contemplating, while absorbing their blood. Strange, I felt ravenous, despite the feast I'd had in the pit. Hearing my own voice, I tried to grimace. Yes, that's difficult to do when you're missing most of your facial muscles. And the voice, even a chain-smoking asthmatic laid low with a cold, would sound better than this. Damn it. Nothing but frustration. Lifting my head, I noted with surprise that the sun had long since risen. When Four Eyes and I split up, it had only just been dawn. I sighed involuntarily, registering at the edge of my awareness that instead of a proper breath, what came out sounded like the death rattle of someone on their last gasp. And how am I supposed to talk to people with a voice like this? I urgently need samples of T. Veronica and Wesker's prototype virus. The first will grant me a stable human form and the ability to shift into another at will. As for the minor detail of enhanced, controlled psi abilities, I won't even mention it. The latter would make me truly alive again, while also strengthening me a little more. As things stand, I suspect that of everything I've absorbed, only 3 viruses remain: the progenitor strain from Trevor, and 2 variants of the G-virus Birkins and my own, which is anyone's guess at this point. What those 3 titans of genetics have molded me into, I'd rather not know. Without a running start or any strain, I leapt onto a rooftop. Strength without brains, that saying fits disturbingly well. Landing smoothly, I headed toward the point where we'd split into 2 teams. I didn't know the direct route from here, but from there I knew both the direction and the approximate appearance of the building. The umbrella emblem would serve as a landmark. Besides, traveling by rooftops is faster and safer, which means Yamada is most likely using the same path. As for how clearly I'll be able to see a lone figure moving along the same path as I do, best not to mention it at all. Half a block before our rendezvous point, I spotted a dot approaching across the rooftops to my left and far ahead. Given the lack of lighting, the conclusion was obvious. Changing course, I moved to intercept. Within half a minute, I came to a halt on the roof where the Four Eyes was about to land. She met my expectations, landing before me, and even in mid-flight she hurled a knife my way. Well, a slight hitch, she hadn't seen me in this form, and compared to my previous one I looked utterly different. The knife struck my chest blade first, harmlessly, and clattered to the floor at my feet. I raised my arms in a placating gesture, elbows bent. "Stop, it's me." And again rasping, strained wheezing. Unintelligible to anyone but me, who knew what I'd said. Damn it. How am I supposed to explain that I'm not just another abomination spawned by this cursed city? Hell, I'm not entirely convinced of that myself. And as for the Four Eyes, I'd rather not even speak. I still have to prove that I'm me and explain where the ghouls and Kate went. Kate, what were you thinking? Thank you for saving me, but how foolish it was. I should have sent her off with Yamada. But then I would have died there myself. A dilemma indeed. Kane, stop it. Don't shout in my head like that. Yamada screamed, clutching her head. What? Nothing, just think quieter. She collapsed to her knees, answering the question I hadn't voiced. Damn mouse. Trevor had that Callan that's basically telepathy, which I now seem to be using myself. But how can one think more quietly? Alright, enough questions. The last thing I need is to boil my partner's brain. Focus and try to think quieter, think quieter. End of chapter.
Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.